ceremony is about to begin for the most powerful family, where there are 7 enhancement scrolls, and each child can only take one. Each color represents an element: red for fire, blue for water, silver for metal, dark for earth, yellow for lightning, black for shadow, and white for light. The siblings use the gathering to show their achievements to their father. One claims to have wiped out evil spirits. Another says he sealed a legendary undead swordsman all by himself, and the psycho sister reveals she massacred 54 people just to steal a divine artifact. The patriarch admires every single achievement. Meanwhile, the youngest brother stays quiet since he's seen as the weakest in the family. When the ceremony begins, he's the first one to grab a scroll, and when he did, everyone froze in shock, unable to believe what they just saw. The boy grabbed a hidden scroll that combines all 7 elements into a single one. The patriarch couldn't believe it and starts demanding to know who helped him, but the psycho sister says the boy is going to be way stronger than anyone expected. This is Larson Mayton, and now he holds the rarest power no one has ever obtained. To explain how he got that scroll, we need to go back a few years. He was born into this powerful family and always had everything he wanted, but there was only one thing that truly made him happy: giving love. He spent his entire life showing all his love to his maids, his servants, his friend. He even gave his own mother a bath with his spit. What a loving boy. Now the real owner of this story woke up inside this character, and he knew he would be killed by his brothers at the age of 17, leaving him 8 years to change his fate. While training in his room, a system appears showing him he unlocked the ability called Divine Eyes. Now he can see the status of anyone around him, and that's when he discovers his maid is a hidden assassin, capable of killing him at any moment for everything he did to her. Not wanting to die like a complete loser, the next day, he and his servant, who has poison powers, head straight to the training grounds. The tower's administrator receives the young master thinking it was just a visit, but when the boy said he came to train, the guy got scared because he's only 9 years old and already wants to fight monsters at this level. Since this administrator was also one of Larson's punching bags, he didn't care about the boy's safety and took him straight to the test area. In the middle of the forest, several monsters surrounded him. The MC activated his combat magic and destroyed the monsters that were supposed to be too hard for his age. The administrator, Noah, who wanted revenge for the punch he took from Larson, was left completely speechless. He couldn't understand how a kid could have that much magic power. When the boss showed up, he knew Larson was done for, because very few had ever made it past this boss. The monster attacks at a speed that looked like a sniper shot. It's so fast that he barely manages to dodge it. That surprised the protagonist, but it still wasn't anything too crazy. In an attempt to catch Larson off guard, the protagonist manages to defend himself, leaving the tower boss even more shaken. The protagonist jumps, grabs the monster, and with just one punch, sends the boss flying out of the test area, finishing the training with ease. The system warns him that his mana is gone. The boy was so drained that just walking back to his servant was enough to make him collapse from burning through all his mana. Later at home, he was in his room eating chocolate, which is his main source of mana. Shortly after, his older brother Carlton showed up to humiliate him again, telling the MC to crawl like an insect. What he didn't know is that Larson is no longer the weakling he used to be. For the first time, he managed to dodge the attack. The older brother couldn't believe it, then got furious and activated his magic circles. The MC uses his time-slowing ability, gets behind Carlton, and hits him in the stomach so hard that it made his brother's mana explode from the inside. For the first time, Carlton found out his blood is red. The news spread through the mansion fast, and nobody could believe Larson was capable of that. The drive to get stronger only grows. On his 10th birthday, he went to the magic library to learn how to control mana, and met the librarian Evian, who the system revealed to be a witch wanted by the law, capable of freezing an entire castle. She could use magic without chanting spells, something only the highest level mages can do. Wanting to learn how to control magic, he asked for a book that covers everything about it, but even though it was a basic book, he couldn't understand a thing, so he used his Divine Eyes ability, and finally started to get it. But then his mana ran out. Walking through the mansion, he spots his mother, the woman he spent his whole life treating badly. He decides to sit down and tell her everything he feels. When he looked at her eyes were completely empty. Even so, he apologizes for everything he did to her, and says he's not the same person anymore. She just lowered her head and left the table, saying she had to get back to work. Once outside, the mother of our hero couldn't figure out why her eyes were filled with tears despite this being a joyful day. After all, it was the first time that she heard Larson refer to her as mother. The protagonist requested that his mother give him an hour of her time daily, and even promised to sit together in order to drink some Kharitan tea from the Chalpes Mountains. The lady accepted, before going on her way. The tea that the protagonist was talking about wasn't an everyday beverage, as it had the potential to cure Blue Dot after a month of continuous consumption. Despite the fact that she had him out of wedlock, Larson couldn't rule out the fact that this lady was still his mother, a person who never gave up on the little rascal. The only wish of the protagonist for his mother was for her to remain healthy. Once at her residence, Lady Soso had a hard time believing that this was reality, but today was very real. As the 10th year ceremony was drawing near, her son had completely changed for the better. Lady Soso began to think that her prayers had finally been answered. After all, she got to enjoy a daily cup of tea with her own son, and despite the fact that this wasn't the little boy she remembered, the mother couldn't help but be happy. With that being said, a small breeze fanned the flame of the candle, which seemed like an answer from above. As the next day dawned, Larson stated that he had something important to share with Hira. The maid began to panic, thinking that her cover had been blown, and started to wonder if the young master wanted to make use of her talents. But just as she prepared herself to be asked to assassinate someone, she was asked for burden chocolates, and the little boy was demanding chocolate in quantity and quality. As the maid was disappointed to receive the usual request, the little boy decided to add one more thing. But just as she got her hopes up once again, she was asked to bring him sweets from a certain bakery, leaving her quite disappointed. And so 60 minutes later, the protagonist was left baffled. He realized how convenient being rich was, as he was standing in front of 100 chocolate bars that would amount to 20 million won altogether. Seeing how he was brought a fortune's worth of chocolate in less than an hour, the protagonist decided to enjoy the luxury and power to its fullest. And with that being said, he began his unhealthy feast. This brand offered high-quality bars that cost 300,000 gran, and some cheaper ones at a third of the price, with each one containing a different amount of manna. Manna was also present in the sweets of the Ludon bakery. In other words, there must be a common ingredient between the two candies. With that being said, our hero called on his shadow and demanded that the baker of the Ludon bakery be brought to him at once. After half an hour, the baker stood in the room of the young master. The man was secretly panicking, thinking that Larson had found something disgusting inside his sweets. The rumors about him being a delinquent who had beaten up the only daughter of a martial arts family weren't making things any better either. At this point, the baker started to imagine the protagonist as a little demon who would immediately kill a commoner like him. For that reason, the baker started to pray for his own safety. At that moment, Larson broke the silence and asked the man about his sweets. The young master demanded to know every ingredient used to make them, but as the baker went down on his knees and apologized, the little boy clarified that he simply wanted to know the recipe. And so, while fearing for his life, the man who struggled to remember the recipe at first pointed out that there was sugar, starch syrup, as well as 1,000-year herb powder. The young man was shocked by how simple the recipe was, and just like that, our hero realized that the common ingredient between the sweets and the chocolate was the 1,000-year herb. This left him quite pleased, as consuming this herb would grant him a great amount of mana. Meanwhile, in the training building, Noah was annoyed by the fact that more and more people kept asking about the young protagonist. He could only tell them that he was able to defeat a mushroom monster with his magic combat technique alone, and that he was able to recover from the side effect of his technique by the power of a recovery magic spell. When all of a sudden, someone barged into the hall and snapped him back to reality. The healing mage affirmed to the administrator that everyone was going crazy after hearing that the 7th young master was able to take down the 6th. Upon hearing this, Noah was left stunned. One could even say that he was rather annoyed, claiming the actions of the protagonist to be pure madness. He couldn't wrap his head around how the 9-year-old became so powerful with just a magic combat technique. The healing mage then pointed out how Larson must be trying to flex his power before the 10th year ceremony. Upon learning that the fight between the hero and his older brother was completely one-sided, the administrator was left even more shocked. Mages are naturally slow, which is why they use movement spells to compensate for their lack of speed, spells that were way too complex for a child. Noah then explained that if a young man was using his magic combat technique to grow faster, he was bound to reach a limit. According to a forgotten study, the little boy would have a hard time learning elemental spells and wouldn't be able to get on the level of the Grandels. Also, as the administrator claimed that this was a hasty move, the healing mage pointed out that the boy must have been too naive. But as Noah claimed that things weren't that simple, his colleague claimed that he was overthinking things. And with that being said, the two of them began to look forward to the upcoming ceremony. At the same time, our hero was feasting like a goat, seeing how he was consuming the 1,000-year herb on its own. There were no calories involved. Seeing how he had previously consumed a decade's worth of chocolate, all the mana that was inside was now trapped inside the fat in his body. In other words, he just needed to burn the fat using his core in order to gain the energy. Increasing his own mana would allow him to maintain his heavenly eye for a longer time, leading to him quickly learning mana cultivation for even more progress. And so, after 3 days of grinding, the little boy had finally finished reading the first book. To his intrigue, the system decided to reveal to him the secret page and pointed out the arrangements of the great sage Alberto. Suddenly the pages of the book began to move on their own. Upon reading the name of the great sage Alberto, the protagonist was intrigued by him. For that reason, he was forced to overcome his fear of the ice witch and go to the library once again. Even so, the young man dearly wished not to interact with this lady once again. But little did he know, he wasn't alone in the room. The maid, who was upside down for some reason, was watching him quietly. Later on at the Starlight Library, as the protagonist was searching for the librarian, he realized that this place was warmer than usual, when all of a sudden, Evian appeared right behind him. Larson returned the book that he was able to finish in just 3 days. All of a sudden, the librarian dusted the book off, and as it magically regained its place, the boy realized that this lady was no joke, as she was able to use magic without incantations. Larson then politely asked about the 77th book of the great sage Alberto. The librarian claimed that they did have the book in question. Evian revealed that this book had been classified as B class, as it was a bunch of gibberish and incomprehensible information, but the boy still wanted it. When all of a sudden, the nose of the ice witch picked up something. Out of nowhere, this grown woman started to sniff the little boy. Our protagonist, who was inside a 9-year-old boy, began to panic, as he began to think that he was in the presence of that kind of predator. With that being said, the librarian pointed out how there was a sweet smell coming from him. The relieved young man finally realized what the lady was talking about, and pointed out that the smell must be coming from the chocolate bar. When offered some, the librarian declined at first, but to his shock, when he barely insisted, she immediately accepted the gift. Seeing the almighty witch of ice act as such made the boy wonder if there wasn't a glitch in the system. Now, with the book in hand, the little boy decided to take his leave, and started to wonder about Evian's reaction when being praised. Larson then offered the mage to visit his mansion at any time, if she wanted more chocolate, as he would let his maid know about her. In reality, the young man was simply trying to be polite, and begged in his heart for the ice witch to stay as far away from him as possible. Later that day, upon reaching 42% of the book, the heavenly eye of the protagonist finally gave out. This book wasn't as thrilling as he had hoped. One could even describe it as a compilation of Alberto praising himself like an influencer, and urging the reader to learn the basics to become like him. Sometime later, Hampton and Hero were left stunned. As the little rascal was actually working out, Hampton felt proud to see his master spending his time exercising, reading at the library, and training at Noah's building. At that moment, the assassin pointed out that this was no regular sprint. When suddenly, someone from behind them pointed out how the young master was trying to accumulate the mana trapped within the fat inside his body. The servants were left shocked to see Evian behind them, especially Hera, who couldn't feel her approaching. Evian was here to visit the Autumn Mansion. She asked Hampton not to inform the young master about her. The little boy was intrigued by the reason behind the visit of the high-level librarian. At first, he assumed that she was here to test the young master and give him more power, only to remember that librarians were forced to stay neutral. Upon seeing him run like that, Evian pointed out how, large or not, this wasn't the little delinquent from the rumors. Only then did Hera remember. The young master had previously instructed her to give the librarian chocolate if she ever came to visit. The maid pointed out how it was a shock for her to learn that the librarian had such a sweet tooth. Hera felt uncomfortable. She was certain that the high-level mage was annoyed by the fact that she was being given simple chocolates. Yet, to her shock, Evian immediately accepted the gift. And so, as the shadow and the librarian were focused on the young master's training, the maid grew suspicious about all of this, and began to wonder about the relationship between the protagonist and the witch. 3 days had passed since then. As Larson finally finished the 77th book of Alberto, the system informed him that the heavenly eye would absorb the information. The hero felt proud of himself, as he had finally learned mana cultivation, when, all of a sudden, he was struck with unexpected pain. Out of nowhere, the protagonist fell to his knees. Mana was flowing at an extremely high rate inside his body, and failing to understand the flow would mean immediate death. And just like that, upon acquiring a new piece of knowledge, our hero found himself fighting for his life. With that being said, he decided to quickly analyze the mana using his heavenly eye, while still being shocked that reading a book here could cost him his life. And with that being said, our hero began concentrating. Later on that day, the mana cultivation technique that he had learned from the book had now been engraved in his heart. Yet, to his intrigue, the system informed him that since he had learned his technique, he would be able to see the hidden backstory. And just like that, the backstory of the other world had been unveiled to our protagonist. Now he would finally be able to discover what unpredictability truly is, and also the backstory of the 27-year-old librarian. But as her bio pointed out that she was a chocolate lover, the author was left quite confused. Only then did he remember an incident from back when he was babysitting the son of a friend. That fateful day, the child started to scribble in his backstory book. Due to that, our hero finally understood why the ice acted so strangely in the presence of chocolate. Suddenly, something began to happen, as a voice pointed out that it would be pointless for Larson to try and focus. Seeing fire appear out of nowhere, left the protagonist startled. The flames surrounding him weren't hot, but the presence behind them was truly terrifying. That person had a killer smile as well as red hair. This was none other than Persia Maton, a tyrannical and cruel character who could control fire, earth, and water, who called out the hero for pretending to focus. The presence of this powerful magician startled the protagonist. To make things even worse, the heavenly eye revealed to him how she despised the weak and how she liked to slice people in her free time. As she asked him once again for the reason he was pretending to concentrate, our hero tried to apologize, only to quickly shut himself up. Since the heavenly eye revealed Persia to despise weak people, apologizing to her would be no different from suicide. Larson realized that he was dragged into some kind of unintentional test, and thus the hero revealed to his older sister that he was truly concentrating. Even the young man wasn't certain of his own words but decided to roll with it at this point, while pointing out that his sister should be much more observant than that. Persia claimed this to be utter nonsense, as Larson affirmed once again that he wasn't pretending to concentrate. Our hero then pointed out how his sister simply wanted to see if he would give in and apologize, but as she suddenly burst out in laughter, he was unable to tell if he was out of danger or not. Persia then pointed out how he truly lived up to the rumors regarding him changing, which actually surprised him, as he didn't know about their existence in the first place. Larson claimed that he wanted to be a better person, while his sister pointed out that it was already too late. His reply had greatly intrigued her, and thus, like any model older sister, she launched a giant flaming snake at him. Persia revealed that things would truly be over when one decided they were. At that moment, the hero pointed out that he was quite aware of his limits and how he would never become the head of the house. But as he pointed out that he could help one of his siblings become the patriarch, his sister urged him to elaborate. So the protagonist revealed how he could become like a small hidden ace, but Persia doubted that he could be of any use. Thus he pointed out that like any tool, his usefulness would be determined by how capable his wielder was. Yet, as his sister asked him who he wanted to work for, he realized that she was indirectly asking if he wanted to work for her. So he stated that he still didn't know enough about his siblings yet to protect whoever would become the next head of the house. Yet in reality, he knew very well that the best candidate was Avelia, the sorceress of the end. Suddenly the little brother pointed out to Persia how terrified she was of the second sister. Her fear was quickly shown by the hissing of her snake. All of a sudden the fire around him started to grow hotter, making him feel as if he were inside a furnace. Persia revealed that she had only granted him a few minutes because he was adorable, yet his words were utter nonsense, making her point out how she despised lies. Larson pointed out that he was also well aware of her preference for honest and arrogant people over those who were weak and submissive, and so, upon claiming that he would succumb to honor but not to power, his older sister finally freed him from her grasp. Larson then pointed out that his sister should forgive him, seeing how he had been completely honest with her. The one with red hair called him a total moron, before throwing something at him. The object that landed in the gut of the protagonist made him feel great pain. What felt like a bowling ball flying at high speed turned out to be a simple apple. To make things worse, the impact of the fruit was so powerful that it made him gain a defensive technique known as Iron Will. With that being said, Persia ordered him to eat the apple, before leaving and claiming that she had found the fruit while on her way here. But only then did the protagonist realize what he was truly holding in his hand. This apple that he had just randomly gotten was in fact a cardian, which was an extremely pricey and rare mana elixir of high quality. The reason behind him acquiring such a rare item so easily was the fact that he was the Benjamin of the Maiden house. Larson compared himself to Kassan Sade once again, who had to be encouraged to carry a simple cardian around. Later on, while in her residence, Persia began to think about how her 9-year-old scandal of a brother had been able to acquire the first circle on his own. As she theorized that he might have faked the delinquent act all this time, she realized that he was in fact no fool. The mage was certain that such slimy individuals would be necessary for her fight against the second sister. To make things even better, the 9-year-old was rather courageous and knew how to hide his intentions even in the face of fear. Larson also had no chance of becoming the next head of the house. Thus, Persia, who had just broken a desk with her finger alone, realized that this pretty good asset could never threaten her position as a successor. With that being said, she called on Sando. In order to keep her other siblings from scouting Larson, she asked her servant to prevent any contact between them and to spread the rumors about him being a delinquent. Persia then began to wonder if her little brother had already eaten her gift. As she was asked to keep a close eye on the protagonist and make sure he didn't die from consuming the apple, Sando pointed out how Persia seemed to like him. So the lady explained how she would be in big trouble if she were discovered as his killer, and how things would become more amusing if he refused to eat the fruit. According to her, if her 9-year-old brother was foolish enough to refuse the gift that she had given him, then she would be perfectly allowed to tear off some of his limbs. Later that night, upon analyzing the fruit, the system explained to the protagonist that overconsumption would lead to death, and that he would need to seek the help of a magician. To make things worse, he didn't know how much would be considered too much. Larson began to wonder about the reason Persia had granted him this gift, thinking that she wanted him to owe her one. Yet he couldn't forget that his sister was someone strange, meaning that she could have given him this apple out of curiosity and would later use him after he ate it. Despite not knowing what plans she had for him, the little brother was certain that if he refused to eat the apple, his sister would be sure to tear off his arm or his leg. Upon learning that the system recommended water, ice, or wind element mages for help, our hero suddenly got an idea. Upon seeing this, his first thought was to seek Evian. If so, there was a fat chance that she would kill him without a second thought. After all, she could pin this on the fact that he had overconsumed the apple and for today, herself as the one who failed to save him. In other words, the worst thing that could happen was for him to be at the mercy of the librarian. And with that being said, the mage was called in. In the end, the protagonist knew very well that there was no way for him to hide the cardian and its great mana from her. Thus, he asked Evian to enter while wondering about a new plan. Once seated, the young master explained to the librarian that he didn't want to hide the powerful item from her, and he presented the apple as a cardian. Larson then claimed that he wanted to strike a deal with the lady. Since he was far too pathetic to eat the apple on his own, he required her help. Yet Evian pointed out that, as an AI variant, she was forced to remain neutral, which is why she couldn't help him in the succession war, even indirectly. The protagonist explained that the succession had nothing to do with his request. Larson piqued the curiosity of the witch by pointing out how he wished to grow as a mage and live by the will of magic. In the end, these words were worthy of an exemplary magician. Evian started to think that someone was making him seem like a delinquent in order to hurt him. Larson explained that he didn't care about becoming the next head of the house, yet Evian wasn't convinced, as all children of Mayton lived for the succession. The hero was forced to affirm once again that he wanted her help for his own sake and not to become the head of the house. Even so, the lady explained that her job forbade her from intervening, but as she urged him to seek the help of the Mayton mages, he said that they all worked for his siblings. With that being said, Larson asked Evian to help him protect his mother. These words greatly impacted the Ice Witch. One day, as the guards harassed a lady for evading her taxes, her child grabbed the officer by the arm and tried to force him to release his mother. The soldier was annoyed by this and decided to punish the child with his blade. The mother intervened at the last minute and sacrificed herself in order to save her child. To make things worse, as the soldier was annoyed by how filthy his sword had gotten, the boy, covered in blood, desperately cried over the corpse of his mother. Seeing this made everyone in the crowd whisper and talk about how abusive the authorities of this territory were. Yet only one person decided to act. The Ice Witch stood alone in front of a tyrant and his armed men. But as the monarch launched his attack, she quickly resorted to her ice magic and showed them the mercy they deserved. One was the youngest child of Mayton, who had been observed all of his life, and the other was his mother, a maid who was discarded by the family. Evian was now certain that the protagonist had played the delinquent all this time to protect himself, and that he genuinely wanted to protect his mother. Yet this would never be possible, as some of his siblings were crazily strong, while he was nothing but the Benjamin and the product of adultery. For that reason, Evian, despite thinking that his dream was impossible, knew very well that this child had every right to dream, and thus she finally made up her mind. According to her, chasing a dream was just as important as fulfilling it. With that being said, Evian affirmed to the young master that the reason she was helping him wasn't the chocolates. After hearing this, our hero was overjoyed. Now, with everything being ready, Evian explained how she would be freezing the energy coming out of the boy's body as he ingested the fruit, and let his body reabsorb it after melting. She then warned him about the possibility of his body freezing up. The librarian explained that in the best-case scenario, the process would only be a few months long, and in the worst case, he would die where he stood. At that moment, Larson urged her not to tell him all of this with a stone face. As the capable ice mage, she promised to do her best to keep him alive. Larson began to wonder if he should put the fruit aside for now. Even so, he realized that right now, he had the highest chances of surviving the operation. In the end, the Ice Witch who feared for his life was someone who cared about others. In the end, he decided to consider this a gamble with a small chance of failure, and urged the librarian to proceed. At that moment, Evian pointed out that since the young master was seeking her services as an image, she would require some sort of payment. Evian promised to ask for a small fee, and simply demanded 24 chocolate bars. Shortly after, it was confirmed to the protagonist's older sister that he had consumed the apple with the help of a librarian. As Persia immediately realized that her servant was referring to Evian, she explained how the hero was able to win her heart. The masked maiden was unable to get close enough to the two of them, due to Evian's detection magic, to learn exactly what happened. This turn of events was rather unexpected for the redhead. Persia explained that the Cartian was so powerful that only an image as strong as Evian, whom Larson must already know as Larvian, could make the process succeed. As Sando pointed out that the boy had consumed the entire fruit, she explained that something intriguing happened, that even shocked the Ice Mage, despite revealing how the boy's vitals remained stable as he kept absorbing mana at high speed, which didn't surprise Persia, as he was still a Maton. Persia pointed out how the process should normally take about 3 years, and expected Larson to be able to do it in 1. Yet to her utmost shock, Sando explained that based on his current speed, he should be able to complete the process in 3 weeks. Meanwhile, at the Autumn Mansion, the protagonist found himself sweating in bed, as his body was boiling hot. At dawn, the protagonist, who had been running for hours, realized that he wasn't tired at all. Only then was the rooster heard. Our hero was now beaming with energy, to the point where it felt like his heart was about to explode from all the mana, and thus he asked his shadow to bring him to the waterfall garden. Once there, the protagonist started to climb. Climbing a waterfall was much more tiring than a simple jog. With that being said, Larson ordered Hampton to bring him some weights around 10 kilograms. Due to his rigorous training, the boy's iron will advanced into advanced iron will, giving him additional protection. It also allowed his mana utilization to evolve into proficient mana utilization, making him feel incredibly light. At that moment, Larson decided to increase the weight to 20 kilograms. 7 days later, he was now pushing into the 30s, and the week after, he demanded 50 kilograms of weight, which made his servant think that he might be overdoing it. Yet Larson affirmed that everything was fine, as in the end he was beaming with energy, despite being behind on his sleep schedule. It was safe to say that the boy had completely inhaled the manna of the apple. Sando explained to her master that her younger brother had a body that was one of a kind. Persia was intrigued to hear that her little brother was climbing the waterfall daily by using his magic combat techniques. Seeing how magic combat techniques grow fast at first but quickly reach their limit, she began to think that Larson could be useful to her cause after all. Even so, she didn't expect him to be able to climb 30 meters in less than 5 minutes while carrying 50 kilograms of weight. This made her burst out laughing and ask Sando about the protagonist's estimated lifespan. The one with the mask explained that if nothing was done, Larson would die in 3 months. His body was overflowing with mana, and if nothing was done, it might explode from the inside. Sando claimed that it would be better for Persia to help her little brother, but she wanted to let the protagonist figure things out on his own. As soon as the boy looked like he had a foot in the grave, Persia would make her move to discover how he was able to move the heart of the ice mage. Meanwhile, after finally changing his haircut, Larson couldn't help but notice how much he had changed. That afternoon, as the tea was poured, Soso pointed out how her son had gotten quite skinny, and while she was worried about him, he assured her that he was in extremely good health. The mother then complimented the maid on her tea-making skills, leaving her flattered as she shyly returned the compliment. Larson was happy to see how surprisingly nice Hiro was towards his mother. To make things even better, the blue spot on the woman's chest had almost completely disappeared. Later on that night, while farming for mana in bed, the protagonist began to think of how he was 4 days away from December 24, the eve before the birth of the star. In this world, the story begins with Emperor Hyperton, who united all races in order to create the empire, so December 24 was basically his birthday. Yet the protagonist couldn't care less about the old stories, as something important was about to happen. If everything goes right, Ludia from the tribe of Fire, who is known as the natural enemy of magicians, the Crimson Butcher, and the one-armed sorceress, will attack. Ludia, who was in quite the mess, would be exiled from the West Gate. At this point, not having written about it in detail, he knew that she was to meet the third sister. The fact that she stumbles upon Persia made it obvious how the girl loses an arm. For that reason, the Crimson Butcher would seek revenge against the Metten House and ally herself with the protagonist of the novel. The one-armed sorceress possessed the power of her tribe, and Cassin would fight alongside her according to their future contract. Larson began to think of how good it would be for him to have Ludia gift him the item known as the Holy Grail of Fire instead of Cassin Sade. But only then did he notice something intriguing. The heavenly eye revealed the shadow of Persia hiding inside his room. Intrigued by this, the protagonist realized that it would be best to ignore her by turning off the heavenly eye. Yet the system revealed that forcefully shutting down the heavenly eye would dangerously disrupt his flow of mana. And thus the hero had the genius idea of pretending to be asleep. Yet to his shock, this intrigued Sando even more, as it seemed that he was able to cultivate mana while asleep. Farming mana was a dangerous and delicate task that requires full concentration, and yet the 9-year-old seemed to be doing it in his sleep. Sando began to wonder how she should report this unusual situation. After all, the 9-year-old simply read a book about a basic cultivation technique that shouldn't be outstanding at all. The shadow even took a look at the book and realized that it contained nothing about a passive mana cultivation technique. After consuming the apple with the help of the ice mage, the body of the hero had greatly changed, and he was starting mana in his heart, according to the shadow. Yet the main issue was the fact that it didn't seem that the young man was suffering from any cardiac problems at all. His mana was even slowly stabilizing, despite the fact that he still hadn't reached the second circle or undergone a physical enhancement spell. Sando judged the heart of the 9-year-old to be monstrous, and decided to have everything reported by the next day. Now, with the spy finally out of the room, the protagonist finally opened his eyes. The night of December 24 quickly arrived. At the autumn mansion, everyone gathered around the giant and luminous tree. At that moment, the young master asked the maid in the shadow to come with him. Hampton was intrigued about their destination, and to his shock, Larson was taking them to the outer west gate. The Metten family had a total of 4 gates in the west, and the one that our hero was going towards was the outermost one. On that particular night, Ludia, the Crimson Butcher and nemesis of all mages, was about to make her appearance, and Larson was desperate to meet her. Yet little did he know, a fight at the outer west gate had already broken out. Upon seeing a little girl wielding flames and going on a rampage, the protagonist started regretting not arriving earlier. The servants were confused by their destination. Hampton, who had prepared lots and lots of paralyzing poison, asked his master if they would be stopping by the residence of the 6th young master. Yet to his disappointment, the protagonist affirmed that they wouldn't. When asked if he was upset, the little boy panicked and didn't know what to answer. Meanwhile, at the gate, Ludia was going on a rampage. Seeing how the heavenly eye described her as someone simple-minded, the protagonist was reminded once again that he should have never picked up the pen. Even so, he was certain that she would be vulnerable to poison, and urged Hampton to do his thing. The hero wanted his shadow to use his poison in order to paralyze the girl. And with that being said, Hampton threw his poison at her. And so, as the girl kept going on a full-on rampage, the poisonous powder was scattered, and she was paralyzed and lost consciousness. Larson rushed to take control of the situation, when all of a sudden, someone stopped him. The mage that was guarding the gate mistook him for an intruder, and demanded to know his name. So Larson criticized the gatekeeper, pointing out how he came from the inside. The protagonist, despite wanting to be nice to the gatekeepers, pointed out how incompetent they were in front of the little girl. Yet it would be better to say that the little girl was too much for them to handle. With that being said, our hero decided to bring her in, but the gatekeeper Fermi opposed it, and demanded to know his name. The shadow decided to intervene. Hampton then introduced the boy as someone of the Mayton family, and a grand walker of the magic way. Cha Sung-min wanted to stop the boy at once, as he kept on singing his praises, and thus the young man personally introduced himself as Larson Mayton. Upon hearing this, the gatekeeper didn't believe him at all, as the man pointed out that Larson Mayton shouldn't be that handsome. The hero didn't know if he should be offended or flattered, and so he asked the gatekeepers for their names, while pointing out that no one from inside the estate was there to impersonate the youngest son of the patriarch. Our hero then pointed out the rumors regarding him being an extremely ugly delinquent, but also how only a fool would try to impersonate him, which made his shadow gaze at him with amazement. And thus the hero asked the gatekeeper to send someone to the main family in order to check his identity. Yet he also promised to make them regret their arrogance once they made sure that he was the seventh son. With that being said, the gatekeeper, fearing for his life, immediately apologized, but when asked for the reason he wanted to have the girl inside, Larson found himself in quite a difficult position. And so the grown man inside the body of the 9-year-old pointed out how he found her cute. The maid watched all of this with intrigue. Later on, the little fire user, who was still unconscious, was tied up on the ground. Hampton, Hera, and Larson eagerly waited for her to wake up. Only then did the system inform the protagonist that something unexpected had happened. This made it seem as though the world itself had noticed the change he made in the story. At that moment, Ludia finally opened her eyes. Despite not being able to understand the sealed-mouth protagonist, he just knew that she was bombarding him with curses. Seeing how the system had labeled this girl as a simpleton, the hero decided to treat her in the simplest way of all. Larson cut straight to the chase and offered to help the girl with her sick father. He claimed that his mother was sick, which was why he knew her pain, and deduced from her attire that she was a mage of the tribe of fire from Hiran. As the young master pointed out how there was an epidemic where the girl was from, his shadow was impressed by his great knowledge. As for the maid, she watched this in complete silence. It then came as a shock for Ladia, as the one in front of her claimed to have a cure for the epidemic. He then pointed out how she must have tried to storm his house, thinking that the maidens had the cure. Our hero then asked her to knock her head if he had made himself clear, and so, with a simple gesture, the girl confirmed. With that being said, the hero asked the assassin to free the mouth of the little girl. Ladia asked the hero if he truly wished to help her. He was surprised by how casual she was being, making him compare her to Cassan Sod, as he confirmed. Yet the girl had a hard time understanding, as according to her, aristocrats only help others in order to benefit themselves. Ladia said that she had something valuable to trade for the cure. At that moment, the eyes of our protagonist widened, as he recognized the valuable item in question as the Holy Grail of Fire, one of the best items that the main character of the novel acquired in the original story. As the hero promised to cure her father, the girl was left overjoyed, but upon learning that it would cost her a lot, the broke child was left disappointed, and asked how big the required sum was. The hero explained that he would only know after the treatment was done, and just like that, he was able to negotiate the valuable item in the possession of the girl, in exchange for her father's health. With that being said, now came the time for the protagonist to fulfill his part of the deal. Larson instructed his shadow to scatter 1,000-year herbs around the entire territory, after boiling them in silver seawater for a short while, in order to make the cure. Hampton was intrigued by these instructions, and asked the hero how this would work. So the protagonist reminded him that a shadow should never doubt his young master. With that being said, the dark-skinned boy was left amazed. He promised to perfectly execute the command of his master, while being amazed by his incredible aura. It didn't take the protagonist long to figure out that Hero wanted to ask him how he knew such a prescription. The maid affirmed, claiming that it defied all common sense. Larson simply replied by claiming that he was a Mayton. The maid thanked him for his honesty. For some reason, she felt as if she was in the presence of a young patriarch. As the hero declared that he would be freeing Ludia now, the little girl was left quite shocked. The tribe girl then quickly showed hostile intentions. As she had never given the young noble her name, it made him realize that he had messed up. The girl became angry, as she hadn't told anyone her name. The young man found himself in quite the pickle. Even so, he decided to remain calm, and asked the girl if it was truly strange for him to know her name, and as she confirmed, he asked her if it was also strange for him to use a rather expensive herb in order to cure them. She then pointed out how it was even weirder that he was giving her one of his family secrets, and how strange it was that he was doing something that wouldn't benefit him at all. In other words, the girl just showed hostile intentions towards someone who was here to save her. Upon realizing that she was biting the hand that showed her kindness, the girl apologized, yet the hero asked her to repeat herself, as he was too far away to hear her, and thus he got closer and urged the girl to repeat her words, making her apologize for a third time. Larson was now satisfied and explained to the girl that she should stay by his side for now. He couldn't just let her return home freely, seeing how she had already assaulted the gatekeepers. Ludia revealed that, upon telling the man her backstory, they claimed that someone as filthy as her was forbidden from entering the estate. They explained, while laughing in her face, that they couldn't care less if her father died, and that the Mayton family had no reason to intervene. The anger of the little girl was justified. In the end, the mean gatekeepers told the father that she loved so much to die. With that being said, the hero asked the mage to untie the tribe girl. Only then did she think about asking about the one that was showing her kindness. And so, our hero introduced himself as Larson Mayton. The name seemed familiar to the little girl, but only then did it ring a bell. Ludia recognized our hero as the delinquent, leaving the servants shocked. She explained that according to the rumors, he was the lowest of the low. Yet the little girl claimed with a wry smile that the rumors were false, as he was obviously kind. Due to that, another unexpected variable had appeared in the story. Cha Sung-min then began to wonder if it was a good idea to make the one-armed sorceress an important ally of the hero of the novel, his comrade. And so he decided to simply observe her for the time being. Later that night, inside the mansion, Hampton informed his master that he had gathered all the required herbs, and that he would depart for the Hiran territory at once. According to the shadow, he should be able to reach his destination in 3 days. Hampton then decided to step out of line and ask his master for the reason he was helping the girl. Larson claimed that there was no reason at all, as in the end it would be far too cruel to let sick people die if he possessed the cure. He even claimed that at the end of the day he wasn't losing anything by showing the girl kindness. With that, the servant thanked his lord for this explanation. Hampton found it only logical that a powerful family like the Mayton house would naturally tend to the needs of the less fortunate. For that reason he assumed himself to be in the presence of a true light, and that he would lead the house to greater heights. But little did the boy know, the one that he admired so much was only putting on an act in order to acquire the holy grail of fire. 2 days had passed since then. As the sounds of heels clacking on the floor echoed through the mansion, the maids were left horrified. Persia was here to check out the new toy that her younger brother was hiding. Later on, she noticed something intriguing. The fire mage didn't recall having someone this handsome in the family, so our hero reminded her that he was her younger brother, the 7th young master. Persia was once again interested in the Benjamin of the family, who seemed to be a box of endless surprises. Cha Sung-min explained that he wasn't hiding anything at all, aside from the fact that he was the author of this world. Persia then gently grabbed him by the face and complimented him on his handsomeness and cute face. At that moment, the 9-year-old felt as if his heart was about to stop, as his advanced iron will was triggered. It was rather a shock to see that simple eye contact with his elder sister, who was impressed by his growth, forced his body to activate the defensive technique. With that being said, Persia promised to pamper her little brother a lot if he remained this handsome. Yet he refused her kindness upon realizing that this was another one of her tests. Larson pointed out that he wanted her to take him seriously, which made him seem even more adorable in her eyes. Adorable enough to become a great piece of art once decapitated. Upon recalling his future fate, the protagonist urged her to stop making these jokes. Persia then pointed out how she wished to see Larson's new toy, making him worry that she had uncovered Ludia as a genius fire mage. The third sister, who couldn't tolerate any other fire mage around her, would absolutely despise the Crimson Butcher, who rivaled her in terms of potential, and thus he decided to stop their fated meeting at once, and affirm to his sister that the girl belonged to him. After all, he was the one who found the toy, meaning that he had no obligation to show it to his older sister. Such arrogance greatly annoyed the redhead. Her aura alone forced the protagonist's body to trigger advanced iron will. Persia couldn't tolerate the fact that someone who was only good at magic combat techniques wasn't submitting to her well. At that moment, Heavenly Eye was activated. Her mana alone was enough to overwhelm her little brother, and so, being aware of the power gap, she decided to give him a fighting chance. Seeing how her younger brother had learned the basics of magic combat techniques, she would now be fighting him with a single finger. Persia promised to only resort to the magic combat technique that she had learned from the book she had recently read for a few minutes. That was too good an offer to refuse. And so, our hero accepted to take on the challenge, promising to give it his all. Persia expressed how fond she was of the boldness of her little brother, and unleashed her fire snake upon him. Yet the heavenly eye of our hero revealed that this was nothing but an illusion, and so he charged ahead, and punched the image of a snake. Persia was impressed by how much her younger brother had grown in the past 3 weeks, and promised to leave Ludia alone if he won. She even warned him to fight with all of his might. After all, if she found herself bored, the elder sister would have no choice but to play with Larson's newfound toy. Now in front of his all-powerful sister, upon recalling the words that the protagonist had just spouted, Persia began to think of how surprisingly entertaining he truly was, despite being the black sheep of the family. At that moment, the protagonist launched himself at her, yet the powerful mage found him to be too slow. She stopped him with her finger. The danger was so ominous that our hero chose to back down a few feet. Persia was impressed by how he was able to tank her attack. She claimed that he wasn't a complete idiot at magic combat techniques after all, seeing how he was using them wisely. Meanwhile, Larson realized that his chances of winning could get slimmer as the fight went on. The power gap between the two of them was too huge for him to fight casually. Only then was Advanced Iron Will activated. It was a shock for our hero to see that even a single finger of his sister, charged with mana, was able to deal so much damage. At that moment, his mana cultivation technique kicked in, allowing him to accurately control and calm down his mana, and thus he decided to seize the opportunity ahead by activating his weight utilization. The little brother decided to go for the leg of his older sister, and so he quickly grabbed it and took control of her body. The protagonist then quickly followed by tripping her over, and before the powerful mage could even realize it, she suddenly found herself on the ground. At that moment, our hero channeled his mana into his fist and tried to deal a devastating blow, but as blood splattered everywhere, he was left in shock. Persia, in order to protect herself, had used a self-defense magic that shattered every bone in his hand. The sister had correctly guessed that her brother had realized that this would be his only chance to defeat her, as she had let her guard down. She even pointed out how he had used his powers to charge at her with a rather barbaric technique. In the end, Persia revealed that she greatly disliked magic combat techniques, and when asked if she had lost, she paused for a second and confirmed to her little brother that this was his victory. The girl then decided to resort to her magic. All of a sudden, the protagonist found himself levitating, and before he could even realize it, he was brutally slammed into a wall. The impact made him cough up a lot of blood. As promised, his cruel sister would leave Ludia alone, while pointing out how her little brother was becoming more and more interesting. Just as her shadow said, the body of the young man was sturdy, as he was able to withstand the destructive power that she had channeled into her finger. Curious about his limits, she placed a little more power into the last slam into the wall, and deduced that he was still lacking in strength. And with that being said, the girl bid her brother farewell before leaving. The most interesting part was the fact that her mana had been absorbed. She was well aware that some mages had the power to absorb magic, but for some reason her brother felt different. Persia even let her younger brother absorb some healing mana, thinking that he would learn quite a lot if he managed to master it. At that moment, the shadow appeared and pointed out how her master seemed to relish her younger brother, as she had even gifted him a present. So Persia revealed that if he was unable to control it, it would cause his doom. Meanwhile, as he tried to recompose himself, Larson, who had now acquired a self-recovery technique, began to think of how he managed to gain something every time he interacted with Persia. With that being said, the self-recovery technique began to work its magic. The new technique, which burned through a lot of energy, resonated with the cultivation technique, allowing the user to unlock something new. Yet as the system notified him that he had acquired body restructuring, it was activated automatically. The confused young man was left quite alarmed. Only then did it begin to happen. As body reconstruction caused insufferable agony, the protagonist desperately tried to cling to his sanity, as the pain felt too immense to endure. But little did he know, the horror had just begun. All of a sudden, some sort of black liquid started to come out of his ears and mouth. At that moment, as self-recovery was activated, the pain became too intense for him to retain his senses. Every bone inside the body of the 9-year-old was getting destroyed and rebuilt at an incredible speed. Suddenly, the maid and the little girl, alerted by the screams, rushed to check on him. At first they assumed that the black matter was some sort of poison, yet Hira quickly realized that this was too powerful to be poison, and the black smoke was a fog made of waste. Due to the effects of body reconstruction, Larson found his mana getting burned at an inconceivable rate. For that reason, he didn't have enough mana to keep the technique active, and stopping it in the middle of the process could lead to atrocious results. When all of a sudden he noticed something intriguing. The Crimson Butcher was now using her own powers to back him up. This pure mana that our hero was now absorbing was the Crimson Flame, with the power of purification that he had personally written in his novel. Larson was certain that the girl did this out of desperation, as she didn't know how to help him, but ended up giving him exactly what he needed. And just like that, Larson Mayton was born once again from the flames. Everything was now complete. As body reconstruction reached its end, he was able to acquire a new fragment of unpredictability. The ladies were baffled by what they had seen. Larson had awakened the hidden attribute, Heavenly Body, deep inside him, and had acquired the potential to enhance his magic combat techniques. And just like that, a new and improved Larson Mayton saw the light of day. He was now in possession of Heavenly Body, one of the great techniques that the protagonist of his story had gotten at birth. This ability, when combined with the one known as Sword God, would allow the user, just like Cassine Sadi at the start of the story, to obtain the power of Sword Emperor. At that moment, the half-naked Larson began to wonder why he kept on collecting the abilities that he had created for the hero of the novel. The protagonist realized that he must keep his abilities hidden at all costs. Later on, The news of her father getting cured overjoyed the little girl. Hira then delighted her by giving her a letter written by him. In it, the man writes about how the condition of the villagers had gotten better, and how they had beaten the epidemic with the help of Larson. Upon learning the good news, the little girl couldn't help but cry tears of joy. Cha Sungmin, who was pleased to have helped, was intrigued by the little girl who wanted to repay his kindness. After all, he was the one who saved her village and her father, and thus Ludia offered herself as his personal contractor of fire. This was a special type of contract that the girl had made with Kaseng Saodie in the original story. The contract of fire is the most important promise that a member of the tribe of fire could make, as they swear their loyalty and power to the contractor. Larson realized that this contract would greatly influence the main events of the story, as it would mean that its original hero would be deprived of a powerful ally. Even so, our protagonist couldn't care less, as he needed to ensure his safety and get away from Kasane by the time he reached 17 years old. And so, as he humbly accepted the girl's offer, she was left with a smile on her face. And with that being said, Danudia commenced the oath. Larson was left baffled, as he was now witnessing the contract of fire, yet to his shock, the heavenly eye was activated and immediately started to analyze the contract. It revealed to him how, as a contractor, he would be granted the authority of berserk restraint. Back in the original story, Ludia, who was written to be a simpleton, was known to go on bloody rampages when angered, and so upon learning the power that the authority of berserk restraint would give him over her, the protagonist was left horrified, as using it could result in the death of the little girl. Upon reading this, he immediately stopped the girl from completing her oath, leaving her intrigued. Seeing how her father always encouraged her to make the oath, the protagonist asked her about the benefits, and with that being said, Ludia began to struggle to remember the benefits of the most important promise of her life. And so Larson explained that upon completing the contract, she would be forced to sacrifice her life for him, yet Ludia failed to see the problem. According to the Crimson Butcher, sacrificing herself would be awesome. Larson explained that if the girl ever went on a rampage, the only way for him to stop her as a contractor would be to inflict death upon her. As Ludia claimed that dying for him would make her a martyr, Larson realized that he was dealing with an idiot filled with innocence. The more he heard the girl claiming that she would be fine, the fewer brain cells he could feel in his skull. With that being said, the grown man inside a child's body explained that, as a 9-year-old, he was too young to sign the contract of fire. Ludia tried to argue that age was just a number for her people, so Larson reminded her that he didn't belong to the tribe of fire. At first, the girl thought that the boy was refusing her kindness, so Larson clarified that he simply wanted to postpone the contract until they became a little older, and thus the Crimson Butcher had no choice but to wait. And just like that, the contract of fire was called off. All of a sudden, Ludia started to praise the kindness of the young man, based on the words of her father. She pointed out how the contract of fire was something sacred, which was why it was important to choose her contractor wisely. According to her father, any contractor would want her, as she was a pushover, but only a good one would refuse the contract for a good reason. It occurred to her that if she ever found someone worthy of her trust, she should cling to him no matter what. Sometime later, the girl was introduced to chocolates. As she began to thank the young master for saving her father and feeding her, he reminded her of the precious item that she had promised him. The Crimson Butcher had almost forgotten. Larson was certain that the important item was the Holy Grail of Fire that her tribe guarded. The legendary artifact was hidden in Dragon Mountain, inside a grave of stone that only those from the tribe of fire could activate. Ludia then explained that near her neighborhood, there existed something powerful. Larson asked what it was called, just to make sure. But as the girl pointed out that she didn't know the name of the item, the author was left stunned, as he had created a total idiot. Seeing this, he would now use his heavenly eye in order to know more about the item. The Grail of Fire had the power to produce fire flower water every year that could cleanse both mind and spirit of all impurities. In other words, this power was perfect for survival, as it would allow him to gain immunity against mind control and all types of poisoning. The system then explained that this was all according to its database. Even so, our hero decided to ignore this small detail and go to the Hyren territory at once. Hero then asked him if she needed to call an escort. Our hero had almost forgotten. All children of nobility, even discarded ones like him, were forced to have a guardian mage with them when going out. With that, Larson tried to come up with an excuse that would justify his trip without raising any suspicions. Lying was not an option, seeing how he would have a 7th circle mage tracking his every move. To make things worse, all escorts had already sworn loyalty to his siblings, as one would need many talented men in order to secure the succession. Larson began to think whether he should keep his old goal a secret, or openly seek it and risk losing the Grail. And so, with that being said, he finally made up his mind. Shortly after, the guardian mage known as Jaffel was left particularly intrigued. That man who hated the 7th young master with all of his being was asked to become his escort. Back when he was 6 years old, the original Larson affirmed to the mage that he was nothing but a watchdog under his service. The rascal even went as far as demanding him to bow in the most arrogant of ways, Our protagonist, who had gained the memories of his character, began to think this was a bad move, seeing how all escorts were powerful mages. When asked for the reason behind his trip to Hiron, he asked Hira to simply tell the others that he was going on a playdate in order to taste their delicious local chocolates, and while she thought that this wouldn't pass, as a matter of fact, it easily did. Later that day, Jaffel finally arrived at the Autumn Mansion. Someone waiting for the mage on the balcony welcomed him. Upon seeing that this person was none other than the young master, the escort tried his best to contain his anger. Once face to face, the mage pointed out to the young man how he seemed to have changed in those 3 years. Larson quickly realized that Jaffel wanted to know the reason he chose him as his guardian mage. From the looks of it, the man still hadn't forgotten how the little boy had called him a simple watchdog. So the protagonist pointed out how every watchdog should guard its owner as well, leaving the magician utterly infuriated. Larson, who was certain that the mage wouldn't forgive him with a simple apology, pointed out how Jaffel was loyal enough not to betray him. The baffled mage asked the young master if he trusted him, making him reveal that it wasn't exactly the case. The protagonist revealed how he didn't trust Jaffel as a person, but as an ambitious escort. This man was characterized by his greed and ambition, which made him betray the 4th young master for the sake of the 2nd sister, for his own benefit. Larson explained that he could help the mage achieve his ambitions, leaving him quite intrigued. After all, our protagonist was nothing but a child discarded by his father. But upon hearing him reveal how he was thinking of betraying his 4th brother for the sake of his 2nd sister, the magician was left stunned. Jaffel quickly denied the accusations, meaning that he had already taken the bait. The 9-year-old then reminded the man that an escort doesn't need many reasons to protect the master of his house, and so, he used his family name in order to make the escort protect him. Jaffel couldn't be more surprised, as he had a hard time believing that this was the same little delinquent from before. He was quite familiar with the rumor regarding him beating up the 6th young master and awakening the 1st circle on his own. But the real surprise was that his 1st circle had more mana than a regular 2nd circle would, and even the 2nd sister didn't possess such a powerful 1st ring. And so, being suspicious of all of this, the mage decided to keep his eye on the young master. Later on, while on the way, the Crimson Butcher was excited to see her father again. Our heroes had finally arrived in Hiron. The Tribe of Fire once held enough power to conquer the entire ancient continent, but quickly fell after the exhaustion of their deity, the Phoenix. This place resembled a small countryside in the author's country. With that being said, the little fireball took a deep breath and called her father with all her might. Ludia was found to be quite loud by the young noble. With that being said, Hampton came to welcome them as Ludia immediately asked about the whereabouts of her father. As soon as she learned that her old man was inside their house, the little girl rushed to meet him. Hampton quickly followed her. Meanwhile, Jaffel couldn't shake off the odd feeling. Larson was well aware that he wanted to betray one of his siblings for the sake of another, despite the fact that he had never told his plan to anyone. Father and daughter were reunited, at long last. Once together, both of them thanked the young noble for his help. The escort started to analyze the little girl, and was stunned by the fact that she had an abnormally high amount of mana for a 9-year-old. To his shock, both the father and the daughter described the delinquent young master as a kind person, and wanted to pay him back. Upon realizing that all the villagers were looking at him with gratitude, the man started to wonder about the boy's good deed but realized that it wasn't important. Jaffel's mind was getting more and more clouded by questions revolving around the intriguing young master. At that moment, the Crimson Butcher grabbed her savior by the hand and dragged him to the whereabouts of the gift. Sometime later, something felt intriguing to the escort, as upon arriving at the location of the so-called present, they were greeted by a single stone grave. Ludia then started to chant the ancient spell, and just like that, the rock started to move. The rocky grave was finally opened, and from it, the legendary artifact appeared. Upon seeing it, the escort was left quite intrigued, as this unidentified item had powerful fire magic imbued into it. It only took a few seconds of looking at the cup to make the escort realize that Larson had lied about being here to taste some chocolates. At the same time, the young master was baffled by the legendary artifact, but only then did he feel intrigued. His heavenly eyes had revealed to him a fragment of unpredictability. According to the system, only someone who made the contract of fire could taste the water of the legendary item, or risk suffering an agonizing death. Upon seeing this and realizing that the artifact could turn out to be his painful end, the young man realized that he must sign the contract of fire at once. Shortly after, the system revealed to the protagonist that the longer the fire flower water remained in contact with the outside air, the more of its power would be lost. In other words, the more our hero hesitated, the less power remained inside the cup. Making the contract here and now with a simpleton like Ludia meant that he would be forced to keep her on a leash, which was something that even Kassen struggled with. Even so, this was too good of a chance to miss, and so, as the creator of this world, he did the only logical thing to do and decided to make the contract of fire with the Crimson Butcher. The little girl was pleased to learn this, so our protagonist pointed out that they should do it quickly. And so, upon signing the contract of fire, the legendary artifact revealed its true form to the contractor. Seeing the beaten-up cup turn into a golden and precious item baffled the escort, as it had been suddenly restored to its prime. Joffel was now certain that he wasn't taking care of a kid on his playdate, but an adventurer on a well-planned quest. The magician was also captivated by the purity and strength of the fire mana coming out of Ludia, and couldn't help but compare her to Persia in terms of power. At this point, he became fully certain that everything he knew about the Benjamin of the family was nothing but a bunch of lies. The contract of fire had finally been completed. Our hero was now forever bonded to the Crimson Butcher, allowing another variable to appear in the story. Even if it was for a split second, he could feel the sudden burst of fire mana in his body quickly disappear. Seeing how the legendary artifact had witnessed the contract of fire, it had evolved into the pure holy grail of fire. Now, with the cup in hand, the protagonist was in possession of the new pure fire flower water. Drinking the water didn't feel anything special, aside from the fact that it had a little burnt taste. As soon as he finished drinking, the system informed him that he needed to acquire the necessary power to control his newfound energy, and thus, his mana cultivation technique activated on its own, as he could feel the power coursing through his body towards his heart. Larson then sat down on the ground and asked the mage to protect him. This greatly intrigued the guard, as the young master was cultivating mana on the spot. He was shocked by how much trust the young man was showing, as the slightest interruption could have devastating consequences for the boy's body. Joffel was certain that Larson was already aware of the risks, and so remembering how much the young master trusted him as an escort, the 7th Circle mage decided not to betray that trust, and cast a protective shield. The surging fire energy began to inflict all kinds of injuries upon the young man's heart, forcing his body to activate the recovery technique. His mana cultivation technique had now tamed the new fire energy, allowing a stable absorption process. But to our hero's disappointment, his lack of mana forced his heavenly eye to shut down, making him unable to analyze his new powers at the moment. Once done, the protagonist apologized for taking longer than expected, and he shocked his escort by thanking him for his protection. Jaffel then congratulated the young man on his newfound power, only for him to reveal nothing about it. The mage then pointed out to the young master that they were currently at the entrance of Dragon Mountain. He then warned him about powerful mana coming at them from the center of the mountain, making itself known to announce its arrival. From the looks of it, the powerful surge of mana from the Holy Grail of Fire had attracted some attention. Larson was shocked to learn that the leaked mana was this powerful, and asked about the enemy. According to Jaffel, they were being approached by some swordsmen who should arrive at any minute, yet he was unable to sense their intentions. But one thing was certain, one of the approaching swordsmen wielded great power. In this world, swordsmen were basically the rivals of mages, and despite not knowing their intentions, Larson knew very well that they wouldn't be able to escape in time. On top of that, the boy was certain that his father wouldn't let him be if he dared to run away from some swordsmen, yet he was rather reassured to have Jaffel with him. At that moment, the approaching swordsman finally arrived. The heavenly eye was automatically activated. Another unexpected variable sparked in the story, yet this one shocked our hero the most. He had written the hero of his novel as a great genius, with a position in the power scaling similar to Saitama in One Punch Man. Cha Sungman was now laying his eyes upon the protagonist that he himself had created, Kassen Sade. An awkward silence quickly settled between the mages and the swordsman. By the emblem on his chest, Jaffel recognized the boy in front of him as the second son of the House of Sade, who was the same age as the one he was guarding. As for the two with him, he recognized them as the knights that were selected to be his escort. The meeting between the Matin and the Sade was described as a similar incident to when a beast in the wild recognizes another of his kind, by instinct alone. There was no doubt that Kassen sensed the Matin inside the veins of our hero. At that moment, the little swordsman approached the two mages. He politely bowed his head with an unignorable elegance, and explained that he was attracted here by the great mana wave. The novel protagonist explained to our hero that he and his knights rushed here upon sensing it. This greatly intrigued our hero, as he didn't expect the mana wave to be powerful enough to spark the attention of his escort, as well as the swordsman. According to the system, the novel protagonist was, as always, driven by curiosity when young. Cassine could feel the one in front of him being a Matin, and assumed that he was in the presence of the sixth son. Then again, he was well aware that the sixth son was a water magician, and the one in front of him didn't seem to possess any water mana. When mistaken for the fifth son, Larson began to think that it would be wise to limit this interaction to a minimum and not correct the young man in front of him. Then again, lying now might cause trouble later on, and so the protagonist explained that he wasn't the earth magic wielder, the fifth son. Cassine was left greatly shocked, as this meant that the one in front of him was the seventh son, who wasn't anything like the rumors. From the looks of it, even the knights seemed to be surprised. Larson asked the swordsman to speak more casually, seeing how they were the same age. According to the system, Cassine, who had everything to become the strongest, lacked friends of the same age when he was younger, which didn't surprise our hero. As Ludia joined the conversation, he began to think that only powerful oddballs such as her could truly become friends with the prodigy. Ludia complimented the newcomer on his handsomeness and asked him about his name after claiming that they were the same age. The shy one introduced himself as Cassine. As the girl complimented him on his pretty name, he asked our hero about the true nature of the mana wave that he felt. After a short explanation, Larson revealed how he had stumbled upon a great opportunity. Our hero didn't reveal that he had come all the way here for the artifact when the boy asked him about it. Instead, he explained that it granted him immunity to many factors, such as poison. After analyzing the situation, the escort realized that fighting the source band here and now would result in their crushing defeat. And yet, the children were having a carefree conversation. Casson was intrigued by how Ludia was friendly to him, yet wasn't totally against it for some reason. Larson thought that it would be a long time before seeing his protagonist again, and decided to make a good memory out of this. He reached out his hand and pointed out that this was the first time that he had met a Sade who was his age. On top of that, just like that, the two young nobles shook hands. Our hero then asked his protagonist about a tradition in his family regarding fighting someone before becoming friends. Casson immediately realized that our hero was referring to a duel, as he was being proposed one. Larson claimed that according to the rumors, a duel was necessary to become a friend of a Sade, and he pointed out that doing it right now wouldn't hurt. Casson asked him if he was truly provoking one right now. Our protagonist confirmed, thinking that this would be a great opportunity to evaluate the power gap between the two of them. This duel was worrying the escort, as the other noble had now spent 2 nights with him. In other words, the mage couldn't fully ensure the safety of the young master, but couldn't completely intervene as well. Seeing how the protagonist was still a noble, the guard would need a pretty good reason in order to stop him. To make things worse, seeing how they were in the presence of a rival house, stopping the boy now would be an insult to the name of Maton. When asked if he knew how to wield a sword, our hero explained that he was proficient in magic combat techniques. Larson explained that this was his only redeemable quality. The swordsman then asked the young mage why he requested a duel, seeing how they were from rival families. But as our hero pointed out that his novel protagonist had no friends, this one was left quite shocked. Even his escorts felt alarmed. Jaffel was left baffled, as this was no time to say harmful things. Larson then added that he was pretty similar, as he didn't have any friends as well. He explained that this was the price of being born a high noble. Larson had it even harder than Casson, as his house forbids him from making any friends. The only thing allowed was a fake friendship with someone highborn in order to benefit the family. Yet seeing how the young master despised this concept, he was friendless, but he might just acquire one, if the friend in question was Casson Sede. After finishing justifying why he had demanded a duel, the protagonist was granted another fragment of unpredictability. According to the system, the duel was the best way to gain the trust of a swordsman. Larson explained that trust should be the foundation of a friendship, and that without it, it would inevitably crumble. Casson realized that the young mage knew a lot about swordsmen. According to the system, the best way for a weak person to show their trust to someone stronger was to gather their courage and request a duel. Naturally, in this scenario, our protagonist was the weak one, so he explained to his opponent that his magic combat techniques were basically martial arts. Casson declared that he would only use one hand, and the swordsmanship technique of his family. As he drew out his sword beautifully, he even allowed our hero 3 attacks, seeing how he didn't have a weapon. At that moment, Larson explained how he had no chance of winning the duel. This intrigued the swordsman, as his opponent already knew the outcome. Thus it was clear for both of them that winning this fight would be pointless, as Larson explained that he had requested the duel in order to become friends, and as friends, the two of them should be equal. Thus Casson had no right to show him any favorable treatment. The swordsman realized his mistake, and apologized for directly insulting his opponent. The magician explained that they wanted the two of them to fight at their full potential. With that being said, the duel between the two children of nobility was about to start. As soon as it started, Casson went for a thrust that our hero awaited by using his ability, Flow, slowly. Larson felt alarmed, seeing how, as soon as the fight started, he found the blade close to his neck. After activating his weight utilization, the protagonist managed to gain some distance and decided to charge back in. For some reason, he started to think that victory was possible. But as soon as he charged at his opponent, the latter resorted to one of his skills. The swordsman was quick and knew how to keep his distance. Magic combat techniques were only useful at close range, which is why Cassine refused to stay immobile. Then again, approaching now would leave the mage at the mercy of the sword, but staying away would also result in him getting attacked. Cha Seung-min was now facing the real protagonist of this novel, yet his chances of winning weren't as slim as expected, as his attributes were allowing him to read the moves of his opponent. As the swordsman went for a slash, the mage approached carefree, knowing very well that this was nothing but a feint. But in the middle of the swing, upon seeing that his opponent hadn't reacted, the swordsman turned his feint into a real attack. Dodging was now impossible, and the only choice left for our hero was to try and tank the hit. And with that being said, Advanced Ironwood was activated. Larson tried his best to block the incoming blade. Even so, the pain that he felt was too intense to ignore. He judged that it would be for the best to tank the slash with his arm, but didn't expect it to mess up his mana flow. Now on the ground and with a blade near his face, the magician had no choice but to admit defeat. Jaffel felt glad that the duel ended peacefully. When asked about his arm, the protagonist revealed that the hit was brutal, as it made his whole body numb. The two nobles started complimenting each other on their skills. Kassan particularly praised Larsen's defense, and explained how he was surprised by the little sparks, leaving our hero intrigued. This made him think that Ludia had intervened in some way, while he was completely absorbed by the fight. Kassan then revealed his weapon to be an artisan sword. In other words, Larsen was just hit by a weapon that can cut through steel. Even after holding back, Kassan was surprised to see that his opponent's arm was sturdy enough to handle the hit. And as our hero explained that he had expected defeat, Kassan suddenly reached out to him. As Kassan asked why people didn't like approaching him, Larsen explained how this was due to his monster strength. Our hero explained how it was odd for the weak to try and approach the strong. So, following that logic, Kassan found his new friend to be quite the oddball. With that being said, the novel's protagonist bid our hero farewell, claiming that he would look forward to their next meeting. And just like that, the Sade house went on their way. Upon learning that this interaction had sparked yet another unexpected variable, Cha Sung-min was left intrigued. At that moment, the escort decided to step out of line, as he had a question for the young master. Yet when asked about his fire magic, our hero was left intrigued. But upon recalling how Kassan mentioned some kind of sparks around him, he suddenly realized something. He quickly recognized the energy gushing out of him, as the fire mana that was in his heart. There was no denying it, as the fire mana that our hero acquired had spread through his entire body. Now was the perfect time to analyze the fight he had just had, using his eyes. Back then, when he was hit with the sword, his body produced some sparks as a way of self-defense. This greatly surprised the swordsman. According to the heavenly eyes, the mana cultivation technique was able to merge the power of the Holy Grail with the fire attribute of our hero. Larsen understood that he had acquired fire powers by consuming the pure fire flower water, which was intriguing, as elements shouldn't combine with his techniques. Even if this was possible, he would have to be as strong as the third sister to pull off such an incredible feat, and even then it wouldn't be very efficient. When asked about his newfound fire powers, the boy claimed that he was clueless. Jaffel was left stunned and began to think that the young master was indirectly asking him to stop talking about it. Seeing how all of today's events were planned, there was a high chance that Larsen had anticipated his meeting with the young swordsman. The mains began to think that there must be someone like the third sister, or higher, involved here, as even he and his escort were being kept in the dark. Now determined to stay cautious when it came to the little boy, Jaffel decided to return him to the mansion. Suddenly, Ludia asked Larsen to take back his words. The little girl was now angry and threatened to burn the boy if he refused to do so. At that moment, he recalled how he had claimed that he had no friends in front of the novel protagonist. Ludia felt betrayed, having thought that he was already friends with her contractor. Seeing how friendship was important for a 9-year-old girl, Larsen confirmed that they were friends, and so he took back his words and apologized. Ludia's mood immediately improved as she easily granted the noble forgiveness. She claimed that she would turn a blind eye to his first mistake, and urged him to always remember her friendship. The next day, the adventures of our hero going out of the castle in order to eat chocolates became publicly known. According to the mages, the patriarch should do something about his Benjamin, and while they were discussing how one could easily get rid of the boy and make it seem like an accident, Jaffel's mind seemed elsewhere. It was rather strange to see Lord Mayton simply spare his son and discard him to the Autumn Mansion. Then again, upon recalling the passwords of the young master, Jaffel began to think that he wasn't lying when he claimed that he could help him later on. It was now January 1st of the year 21. That night, a colorful feast was presented on the dinner table. Lady Soso thanked the maid for her service. Larsen was then left intrigued as his heavenly eye had just activated itself. Our hero then asked his mother about his father. The original Larsen didn't have many memories of the patriarch, and seemed to be quite scared of him. It was safe to say that the original character was forcefully trying to forget about his own father. Soso described the patriarch as a lonely person to her son. This left our hero quite stunned. According to the system, his father Decatra had only ever loved his mother Soso. Suddenly, a chill ran down our hero's spine, as someone overheard their conversation. Something intriguing started to happen. Some kind of portal was formed inside a portrait, and from it, a man stepped out. It didn't take the protagonist long to recognize this character, as it was none other than Decatra, his father. As both son and mother greeted the father, he called out the lady for calling him lonely. The simple appearance of the patriarch exerted so much pressure that Larsen found it hard to even breathe. The body of the protagonist was panicking just by looking at the man. After taking a seat at the head of the table, the father recalled the fight that happened between his two sons. Larsen immediately realized that the man was talking about his interaction with the sixth young master, and began to wonder if he would be punished for it. Even so, the author decided to show some confidence, as the character that he had created was now testing him. Larsen claimed that he only did the right thing, as his brother was insulting magic, seeing how he tried to punish him using physical means. Our hero explained that he didn't do anything wrong, seeing how he acted in a way that respects the way of the mana. He even stated that he was being pretty merciful towards his brother, even as he tried to end the fight quickly. The Benjamin explained that he tried to teach his younger brother a lesson with his techniques, similar to martial arts, by inflicting a critical hit upon him, as according to him, the main purpose of the succession war wasn't for siblings to hurt each other. Larson declared that the Maton siblings shouldn't be enemies but allies that unite in the face of Grandel and Sadie, to make them submit to their will. These words greatly pleased the patriarch. He even claimed that his brothers should thank him, as he had shown them what it's like to fight a martial artist. Decatra, who had no expectations for his youngest son, found himself quite fond of his Benjamin. Larson then explained that if his brother bears any hate towards him for what he did, then the family name is wasted on him. But in reality, under his confident air and big words, our hero was shaking in his boots. At that moment, the system reminded the protagonist that his father was still in love with his mother. According to it, the only reason Larson was able to live for 17 years in the original novel was because he was the son of Soso. Learning this greatly shocked our protagonist. This made the author think of how, in his original story, someone as despicable as Larson Maton should have died while much younger than 17. Despite not having written anything about it, the author quickly understood that, in the original plotline, Soso would be taken by the blue dot disease. In other words, Larson would have no one to advocate for him. A few years ago, the patriarch had banished the woman he loved to a mansion and never bothered to visit her again. Our hero couldn't forget that he was considered a useless delinquent who was deprived of any power. For these reasons, the patriarch acted coldly and discarded his lover and her son. He must have also realized that this was the only way to protect her from his other wives, who would grow jealous of the one that he truly loved. Now, our hero was more certain than ever that if he became a decent person with the power to protect his mother, he would be able to escape his inevitable fate. The boy knew very well that his father wanted him to become powerful. Decatra considered his magic combat techniques to be limited and inefficient, so Larson clarified that limited doesn't necessarily mean useless, and that he was aware of his limits and the fact that he could never become patriarch. Our hero revealed that he saw himself as an asset for the next head of the house, and while being limited as a fighter, he had much more to offer as a person, as in the end, he was a Maton as well. Upon hearing that her son wanted to protect her, Soso was left stunned. So righteousness even made the all-powerful patriarch smile. Sometime later, the father personally invited his son to the primordial banquet hall in the main estate. Even so, this manuscript inviting him to the 10th-year ceremony was way too short to be called a letter. This event was a tradition of the Matons, where the house gathers together, and it was always held when a member of the family reached 10 years old. But it was also the moment that the Maton child would receive his physical strengthening magic. This wasn't the average scroll that enhances physical stats, but one that can also grant elemental mana like fire, water, metal, earth, lightning, light, or darkness. After successfully getting dressed, our protagonist began to think of how he had changed a lot in body and in spirit after awakening as a 9-year-old boy. And with that being said, Larson was now about to enter the main banquet hall. In this place, the 10th-year ceremony would be held. His heaven eye revealed that the table had a constant effect known as releasing magic, which he found to be a waste of money. According to Hira, Larson was to sit at the end of the patriarch's table. It wasn't a surprise for the boy to learn that his mother hadn't been invited. At that moment, the two youngest children of the family were reunited together, with Carlton barely recognizing his brother. Larson then asked his brother about his injury. The water magician was shocked by how much the Benjamin had changed, and how he had gotten arrogant despite having once been his punching bag. Larson explained that he would welcome a fight with his older brother if he dared to challenge him again, before pointing out how much stronger he had gotten. Carlton tried his best to rein in his anger, claiming that he would get his revenge soon. This rivalry between the two brothers gave our hero much more control over Carlton than if he were afraid of him. At that moment, a third sibling arrived. Persia made her entrance and greeted the protagonist, who was pretty early. The sister then asked her brother if he was fond of his new fire-wielding toy, and expressed how disappointed she was to leave it to him. And upon learning that she had lost the said toy to him after a bet, Carlton was shocked that Persia and Larson had made one in the first place. To make things worse, it was even more unbelievable that the third sister had actually lost to the seventh son. Shortly after, another person entered the hall. This greatly shocked the author. After all, this person was the second sister, Evelia, who was also known as the Sorceress of the End. Despite being known to be gentle, this mage, who had dark and light magic, and was comparable to the third sister, was ready to sacrifice anything in the name of the family. In the original story, she would later lose her head to the protagonist. The author even twisted fate to make Evelia Cassine Sade's first love. As the Sorceress of the End pointed out how much he had changed, the protagonist decided to take this as a compliment. Larson then came to a mind-blowing realization upon seeing his two sisters together. He realized that he couldn't slack off regarding his efforts, as these two were clearly on a level that he could never reach with his skills. The rest of his siblings arrived shortly afterward. The wives also made their entrances. Decatra himself then took a seat at the table, with the patriarch, his wives, and all his children present except the eldest, whose whereabouts no one knew. A total of 10 people had gathered at the table. As the father congratulated his Benjamin for becoming 10 years old, our hero found himself trembling as he was congratulated by everyone. Ivelia then stood up and explained how she had terminated the evil beings in the spring of darkness and chaos, according to her father's will. It was safe to say that this wasn't a simple family gathering, but also a chance for the siblings to show off in front of the patriarch. One of the sons then explained how he had sealed the living undead swordsman of the north, Karen, inside the demon's coffin and slaughtered his followers. When asked about the losses on their side, the young man revealed that he had faced the sorcerer alone to prevent any casualties. As soon as the son was praised, the third sister stood up. Yet as she revealed that she had acquired Sylphia's wings from the abandoned temple, the others were left quite stunned. The third sister, who was filled with malice, had stolen a divine artifact that was shielding the abandoned temple. Due to its wind-enhancing power, the legendary item was ideal for wind mages. In order to obtain it, Persia had slaughtered the 7 monks, 30 priests, and 17 swordsmen guarding the holy item. Decatra stated that his daughter did the right thing and asked about the reaction of the holy temple, only for it to be revealed that they had yet to respond. Seeing how the temple was powerless enough to only offer an apology, the family decided to ignore them. The holy temple had learned to never mess with the Maton house, as its head once made an example of one of their members who harmed the family. Only then did someone knock on the door. Senkei, the right hand of the patriarch, made his entrance while carrying something. This item was then placed on the table in front of our hero. Larson was now required to choose one of the 7 scrolls personally made by his father in order to receive his physical strengthening magic. For this important decision, the heavenly eyes were needed. The mana waves coming out from the 7 scrolls were synchronizing at a single point in order to reveal an 8th one. As soon as the protagonist grabbed the secret scroll, everyone was left stunned. It didn't take him long to find the one that contained the transcendent attribute. Larson selected this hidden scroll for his physical strengthening attribute. Just like that, silence reigned supreme in the banquet hall. The patriarch turned to his second daughter. He asked her if she had helped her little brother, only for her to deny it. Seeing how all the siblings claimed that they didn't help him at all, Decatra was shocked to see that his 10-year-old was able to discover the hidden scroll all by himself, a feat that even the second daughter couldn't achieve. This forced the sorceress of the end to admit that her younger brother had a better eye than her at this age. This greatly piqued the interest of the third sister. Ivelia theorized that this might be due to the quick growth of magical combat techniques. According to her, this was the most logical conclusion, as Larson was the only one to learn this technique while young. With that, the patriarch asked his son to bring him the scroll that he had in hand. These items, which were basically the 10th year anniversary gift for a Maton, would allow him to acquire physical strengthening magic. Red was for fire, blue was for water, silver was for metal, dark was for ground, yellow was for lightning, black was for shadow, and white designated light. When the wavelengths of all 7 scrolls are combined, they allow a new one, called the Elementar System attribute, to appear. It is also referred to as a transcendent attribute, as it would allow the wielder to wield all 7 elemental energies. Larson theorized that since this was a mix of power, it was safe to say that he wouldn't be getting the best of any one world. Decatra then pointed out how he was shocked to see his son pick the 8th scroll, making our hero consider this a compliment. Seeing his younger brother having the audacity to talk back to their father greatly irritated Carlton. Our hero was then shocked upon learning that it would be the second sister who would be in charge of performing the spell on him. The patriarch, who was usually in charge of casting the spell, explained that if he did it himself, the boy would only have a 1% chance of surviving at his hands. Yet Ivelia was different, as her soft mana allowed a 50% chance of survival. Cha Sung-min started regretting picking the strongest scroll, but decided to take the risk anyway, as he needed all the power he could get in order to survive. Thus, our hero left himself in the hands of his older sister, claiming that he had faith in her as a mage. The sorceress of the end explained that their father was trying to stay positive, as the translated scroll possessed rather destructive mana, making the operation very risky. In other words, there was a 50-50 chance at best that the protagonist would perish at the hands of his older sister. The Benjamin then asked his sister if it would be better to select another scroll, only for her to claim that she had no right to give her opinion as a mage. As Ivelia revealed how she wished to see him grow in power, our young man was left stunned, and thus Larson firmly affirmed that he would go with this scroll, as he was asked to strip to his underwear. As the man inside a child's body started to strip down, getting a small peek of his abs greatly interested his psychopathic sister. Persia forgot to think of how her brother had become a totally different person, and started to wonder how he was able to perceive the hidden scroll. His muscular body, which shouldn't belong to a regular 10-year-old, greatly piqued her interest. Larson then felt a chill running down his spine, as his sister pointed out that he had the right face and body to become a decoration. And so, as the ritual was about to start, the sorceress of the end thanked her father for giving her the honor of bestowing the strengthening magic on her brother. But just as she was about to start, our hero demanded a few more minutes, as he revealed that he wanted to speak with his father. His 5 other siblings were left quite shocked upon hearing him ask for a favor. His intrigued siblings couldn't help but see him as someone arrogant. Larson explained how the patriarch had broken tradition by letting his sister perform the ritual on him, and so he claimed that he had every right to ask for a favor. Carlton couldn't help but smile, thinking that his father was about to kill the Benjamin on the spot for his arrogance. The patriarch asked about the favor, and to the wives' shock, the youngest son wanted his mother to enter the palace. The blonde wife claimed that this would be impossible, as Soso was an inferior creature and a commoner as well. Larson then clarified that he was the son of Lady Soso and Patriarch Dekatra. Since they were all linked together, insulting his mother meant insulting him, which directed the insult at the patriarch himself. When asked for the reason behind this favor, the boy revealed how his mother wanted to see his father. Larson realized that he was now making an enemy out of the 3 other wives, but gaining the patriarch as an ally would be far more beneficial to his cause. After all, Soso was the only weakness of Dekatra. The head of the house then left his wives shocked as he explained how he would grant his favor if he managed to survive. With that being said, the protagonist was now determined not to disappoint his father, and thus the ritual finally started. The sorceress of the end started to chant the magic words, and by the power that was given to her, she bestowed the will of transcendence on her younger brother. At that moment, the protagonist felt excruciating pain, as it felt like he was being pressed on by a hot piece of iron, and only then did he see the light. Now, in complete darkness, an unknown voice offered to help. This inability to feel his own limbs was quite familiar for our hero, as it was oddly similar to anesthesia. All of a sudden, an entity of fire appeared in front of him. At first he didn't recognize it, but then his eyes were left wide open. Larson was now in the presence of the Holy Grail of Fire. At least, that's what he claimed the cup to be. This was confusing for our hero, as a few seconds earlier, he was undergoing the physical strengthening magic, and now he was with the entity. So the cartoon character revealed that he wasn't the Holy Grail of Fire. To our hero's shock, the true name of the artifact was the Holy Grail of Transcendence. Larson realized that the item was greatly powerful, as Heavenly Eye wasn't working on it, as it explained how someone called Kirtel filled it with fire mana. And as the entity claimed that Kirtel wasn't worth introducing, the author immediately recognized this character as the legendary Archmage. Many considered Alberto the Great Sage to be a myth and a fraud, yet many believed in the existence of Kirtel. The artificial entity revealed that it wished to assist the protagonist, and when asked about the nature of its help, the cup pointed out how Larson possessed a special body, a physique that was referred to as a heavenly body in ancient times, when the entity had originated. Yet despite the sturdy physique of the young man, he wouldn't be able to contain the mana of the scroll, as his first circle had reached its limit, and with the circle filled to the top, the mana would burst into his body, causing his demise. The entity explained that it would be no fun to see Larson perish, as it would lead to it being hidden for another 100 years. It then explained how it would consume the overflowing mana of the scroll, as it was the only option for the protagonist to survive. The artifact spent years searching for a worthy owner, which is why, in the original novel, it ended up in the hands of Cassine Sade. The cup then pointed out that the 10-year-old was fully qualified to become its new owner, as his existence itself was filled with anomalies. Larson didn't quite understand, and asked the cup to elaborate, so it explained that everything would be revealed in time. With that being said, the all-powerful artifact formally asked the man inside of a child to become its new owner. The grail would melt into the heart and consume Samana, allowing it to resurface as a true holy grail of transcendence. It then explained how the scary-looking lady seemed to be handling things well on her side. The entity then revealed that she was going to slumber for some time inside our hero's body, as he would need to seek her help frequently in the near future. The system then informed him that the grail was about to become a second mana circle around his heart. Yet all of a sudden, our hero found himself disappearing, meaning that he was on death's doorstep. Yet Cha Sung-min refused to accept his fate. After all, he had a goal to live for. And with that being said, right before disappearing, he agreed to become the new owner of the artifact. The deal had been sealed. As the power surged from the item, the protagonist realized that this cartoon-like character was becoming the true transcendence. The sorceress of the end had finished the strengthening magic operation. Larson then woke up in a cold sweat. He had a hard time believing that he hadn't died, and assumed that this was a dream. Yet he was unable to deny reality, as something had changed inside his heart. But to his utmost shock, Ivelia explained that the operation had failed. The sorceress of the end, blaming her own incompetence, apologized, as due to a mistake she had made, the magic of the scroll disappeared. Yet the patriarch simply got off the table and declared the ceremony to be over. Yet Larson knew very well that the magic didn't disappear, and that it was just consumed by the holy grail of transcendence. As the father was leaving, someone reminded him of the promise he made to bring his mother into the castle. With cold eyes, the patriarch explained to his son how promises can only be made to those who are worthy and trustworthy. In the end, Larson was happy with what he had gained. He even started to wonder if his father and his older sister, who operated on his body, noticed the power of the Holy Grail, but decided to brush it aside. After all, the operation was a success, and it allowed him to gain a new powerful ally. But as he stated to Hira that they should take their leave, A shiver suddenly ran down our hero's spine as he felt a sudden spark of bloodlust. Its source was none other than his maid. The lady, who was now showing her true colors, had a question for the protagonist. Larson found himself horrified, as his eyes were now unable to even show her basic stats, meaning that she was revealing herself in the presence of the patriarch. I corrected the system. The primordial bank hall was now surrounded by a max-level security magic spell. Such a powerful spell could only be cast by Decatra. As the maid pointed out how the young master wasn't treating her the same as before, she claimed that he had regained his senses, and with that being said, the assassin asked the young noble who he thought her employer was. Larson's first guess was the patriarch, as she was openly displaying her aura while he was still in the estate. The maid found this fascinating. She asked the little boy if he could really sense her aura. The 10-year-old affirmed that he did, and claimed it was quite scary. Hira had now become horrifying, yet the little boy knew very well that he would be unable to outrun the wolf up ahead. Larson was now certain that his father was her employer, as no one was coming to his aid despite this place being filled with mages that could sense her aura. He also pointed out that there must be some kind of barrier preventing the others from sensing her, like a security magic spell. Such a spell couldn't be chanted and go unnoticed by the patriarch, and thus Larson concluded that Hira showed her true colors based on his orders. The assassin revealed that the boy was right, and that his father had deposited his entire fate in her hands if he had failed to recognize the danger. Hira revealed that the patriarch had expected that much from the boy, as he was his son. Yet one question remained: why had the assassin chosen to show her colors, now of all times? Larson theorized that this was the perfect opportunity, as he was now in the main estate after meeting his father. The hero realized that the only reason his father had cast a security barrier spell was in order to put him to the test. Hira pulled out her blade and confirmed that everything that the boy had said was correct. The assassin then revealed that she was genuinely surprised to see the hero figure out so much on his own, as she had expected him to simply piss his pants in fear. Now, with the masks finally off, it was time for reintroductions. The one in front of our hero revealed herself to be the one labeled as discreet without a sound. This greatly startled the author, as he had personally written about this character. Discreet without a sound. While similar to a boogeyman that parents use to scare their children, that lady is a powerful assassin that even the world's strongest fear. The renowned family of swordsmanship desperately tried to search for her, but discreet without a sound was practically a faceless ghost. And now the medicine ghost in question was in front of our hero. As he pointed out the incident with the renowned family of swordsmanship, Hero explained that it happened 15 years ago, making the boy realize that she was quite old. Our hero then asked about the nature of the test. Discreet without a sound declared that in order for him to pass, he only had to deflect one of her attacks, and with that being said, the assassin disappeared. Seeing how his heavenly eyes were rendered useless, the protagonist realized that his ace ability couldn't work against the world-renowned assassin. A shiver then ran down his spine, as her voice, coming out of nowhere, declared that she was ordered to dispose of him in case he wasn't strong enough, and so he quickly stopped the fight, as he had something to say. Our hero wanted to know his reward in case he achieved victory. The maid, who appeared right behind him, explained that he didn't think of any reward, and so as she asked him what he wished his reward to be, he revealed that he wished for her services. Larson didn't want to have discreet without a sound under his command as a maid, but as a bodyguard, at least until he found himself strong enough to protect himself. After giving it a little thought, the assassin agreed. With that, our hero felt pleased, and just like that, the assassin disappeared once again as the test finally commenced. At first, the protagonist had built up some confidence, yet now, not so much, as he wouldn't be able to take out an enemy that he couldn't perceive. While thinking of how his heavenly eyes were rendered useless, the hero began to think that the lady wouldn't actually kill him. He was certain that her threat wasn't real, meaning that she wouldn't aim for any of his vital spots. And seeing how he couldn't sense her movement, he was forced to try and predict what part of him she would try to target. It was safe to say that the assassin was confident against the child, and that she would certainly go for one of his limbs. The hero was certain that the maid would show herself when attacking, and that he would need to rely on his flow, slowly and heavenly eyes. But upon activating the skill, he realized something intriguing, as flow slowly, on top of reducing the speed of the flow of time, also shows the flow of mana. From the looks of it, his skill had evolved. Due to something called the will of the enemy, the iron will was now reacting with the mana inside the heart in order to create a self-defense technique. To make it simple, the Holy Grail of Transcendence had evolved all of the protagonist's skills by using its hidden mana. Larson now had the ability to perceive the assassin's attack. The targets were limited, and the assassin could now be spotted. From the looks of it, she was going for his leg. Dodging would be impossible, seeing how the whole point of the test was to deflect the attack. At that moment, the self-defense technique was triggered automatically, as our hero purposely took the hit. The young man then grabbed the lady's armed hand, and channeled all of his mana in order to throw a powerful punch. Discreet, without a sound, blocked it with great ease, without making a sound. Even so, she couldn't deny that the hit had come close to landing. Seeing how this counted as some kind of deflection, the young master had achieved victory. and just as agreed, Discreet without a sound honored her promise, and swore to protect the young master. And with that being said, the assassin disappeared. Despite the fact that he was currently bleeding, Larson found himself quite pleased, as he had passed the test. Shortly after, at another location, inside what seemed like an odd and mysterious building, a door was suddenly opened and shut quickly afterward. In a room that seemed empty at first, Hira appeared and decided to commence her report. She revealed how the 10-year-old had predicted her attack in order to deflect it. According to her, Larson must have realized that she wasn't truly after his life, as he didn't try to dodge her attack. She claimed this to be the only logical move that he could have made. But the intriguing part was that, despite injuring his hand with her dagger that was covered in a poison called Melia, the young hero remained fine. The only explanation was that the little boy's magic had nullified the poison, but the assassin did not know if this was intentional or not. Hira decided to investigate this at once. While leaving, she began to think about how she didn't expect the transformed young master to neutralize her poison. This wasn't the same rascal as the one she was serving last month, but a noble worthy of her protection. Later that night, the protagonist decided to enjoy his allowed outing in order to relax after this long day. When all of a sudden, the Grail spawned in front of him, asking if it had done a good job. Larson was worried that the floating cup would cause a scene in public, only for it to reveal that he was the only one who could see it. The Grail demanded praise for having neutralized the poison, Melia. Yet Larson was intrigued, as he didn't know that the dagger was coated in the first place. At that moment, the system explained to him how this was the poison of a starfish in the southern sea that could lead to death if not treated within a few minutes. This left the protagonist shocked, as he didn't know that the dagger was poisoned in the first place. The Grail had consumed all of the poison that went into the boy's body, as it considered that to be quite a delicacy. The cup then warned its owner that the poison might resurface, causing his body to melt. Larson felt alarmed, and immediately called his shadow. The young master asked the boy if he was familiar with the concept of Melia. Hampton confirmed that he was, and excitedly asked his master if he should get it right away for a poisoning task. But when asked about the antidote, the dark-end boy explained that it was easy to find, and thus the noble asked his servant to get some at once. Larson began to think about how lucky he was that Shadow was proficient with poison, and his mate was a master of assassination. Only then did someone approach him. This was none other than the maid he had been thinking about. The one who had changed her attire to best suit her task, explained that she was appointed as the new shadow of the boy. Now Larson would get to enjoy two shadows, as a new mate would replace the old one. Hira had dropped the act, and was now showing her real personality. After all, the job of an assassin required good acting skills. As our hero asked Discreet without a sound about the poison on her dagger, she was left shocked. Larson then claimed that he had played ignorant regarding the poison back then, but was now asking for the reason it was used, as the test should have been non-lethal. He even stated that he had hidden the fact that he had noticed the Melia to show the assassin that he could endure the poison. Our hero put on his best act, making it seem that he had always known that the girl was using a poison that came from the poison-horned starfish from the southern sea. From the looks of it, it seemed to have worked on the assassin, as she began to think that she had underestimated him. Discreet, without a sound, then urged the protagonist to gain power. In the end, it was her responsibility to protect him at all costs, and she could only be freed of her oath once he became strong enough. And so, as Larson explained that he would do his best, the lady explained that she would assist him in any way she could. And as she explained how dirty and deprived of morals she needed to be in order to do so, he urged her to have a conscience. Larson then asked for some 1,000-year herb powder. For some reason, he felt incredibly thirsty. Our hero was now confused, as he didn't know why he was craving water and 1,000-year herb powder so much. After seeing this odd condition, the bodyguard proposed going back to see a doctor, but our hero refused. He ingested as much powder as possible, and drank an incredible amount of water while asking for more. His flow of mana was rather intriguing. Discreet, without a sound, quickly noticed something was happening to the young master. According to the system, the herb contained a small amount of an unknown compound known as ether, and it expanded when in contact with Melia. Yet for the cup that had consumed both, this seemed more like an overdose of alcohol. And with that being said, the Holy Grail of Transcendence started to puke the mixture. At that moment, the protagonist dropped his glass. The heart in his chest was suddenly gaining in size. Upon seeing this, the bodyguard felt startled. She wanted to fulfill her duties and save his life, yet moving him would result in his demise. Hira, despite having sworn to protect her charge until he became strong enough, didn't know how to assist him, as she was no mage. Thus there was only one thing left to do. Discreet, without a sound, decided to sacrifice herself by using her own body to sponge out the extra mana of the young master. The system revealed to the protagonist how the reaction between the ether and the poison could only be survived by someone who had the transcendent attribute. Larson, who started to wonder why he always found himself at death's doorstep, was now aware that the attribute that he had acquired would allow him to survive. At that moment, as the mana cultivation technique was triggered, the ribs cracked due to the heart's expansion. Larson was then left horrified as the system decided to inform him that the transcendent attribute was only one of the requirements to survive the expansion. Upon learning that only someone who was of the blood of a powerful martial arts family could make it out alive, this left the protagonist horrified, as it meant that he was about to meet his demise. But then again, according to the system, the heavenly body that he conveniently possessed was a perfect substitute for the blood of the martial artists. Learning this greatly surprised the young master. In other words, he had everything he needed in order to survive this unexpected situation. All of a sudden, the holy grail of transcendence that had regained its senses decided to help its owner. And with that being said, something started to happen. The mana cultivation technique was a great form of assistance for the cartoony cup. With that being said, the body of the young master started to glow. The assassin braced herself for the 10-year-old to explode. Yet to her shock, his chest regained its normal size for some unknown reason that left her intrigued. To her astonishment, mana fire then started to gush out of the boy. What seemed to be a simple energy leak turned into a powerful explosion. Discreet without a sound was now certain that her master had changed. Yet the nature of the change in question left her utterly speechless. What she had seen was supposed to be impossible, as Larsen Maton was able to acquire his second mana circle at 10 years old. It was the first time that the powerful assassin had met someone who had reached this level of magic while this young. The protagonist then urged her to stop staring at him so dumbly as she started to congratulate him. Hiro was clearly able to perceive the second circle of the young master, who had gotten it by edging death once again. Our hero thought that he had made an achievement by coming into mana on his own, but according to the assassin, this should be natural for a maiden. This made Larsen realize that his bodyguard had never once praised him. The substance in the herb, the transcendent attribute, the heavenly body, and the grail all got together by a twist of fate in the body of the protagonist. And so, upon awakening the second circle, out of pure coincidence, our hero turned to his bodyguard and stated that they had something to repeat. This greatly intrigued the assassin, as she didn't know what he was talking about. That night, at the Leaf Building, as he was peacefully dozing off, someone suddenly awakened the administrator, making him end his beauty nap and panic. Noah was then shocked to see the young master inside the training building at this hour, but only then did he notice something truly alarming. He began to think that he was hallucinating, as he was currently witnessing the second circle of someone who had awakened their first circle a month ago. As for the one next to him, he could easily tell that she was an assassin. This made the administrator think about his last conversation with the escort, who told him about some kind of grand plan. According to him, there was something huge going on, with the seventh young master at its center. Now certain that Jaffel was telling the truth, he found the young boy to be far too relaxed for a young second circle user. Afraid of what was coming, the administrator decided to stick to his job and ask what the young master needed. Noah was then intrigued when the boy asked for a place to do his newly appointed shadow duel. In the end, they agreed to make the duel take place in an open space, but as the hero and his bodyguard left the scene, the administrator was met with the cold gaze of the assassin. Feeling like prey in front of a predator, he decided to make it appear as if he didn't know anything. The training arena was prepared. Larsen asked discreetly, without a sound, if she had called her level during their first duel. Our hero wanted her to approach him with that level in mind, as he wanted to try something. In other words, the assassin was requested not to go lethal, and to slow down her attacks. Hiro explained that no opponent would show him such mercy, but to her bafflement, the young master reminded her that she was no ordinary opponent, but his shadow. Those words resonated deep within the assassin. Now, as a second circle user, the protagonist realized that by joining the two circles together, he could contain even more mana in his body. It didn't take him long to grasp the concept and move mana as he pleased. Larsen decided to make the energy flow inside his entire body, making his magic combat technique evolve from normal rank to skilled rank. Now, with his magic combat technique upgraded, our hero started the duel at once. As the assassin suddenly disappeared, Larsen was reminded of last time. Just like their first duel, he was unable to spot the assassin. Even so, he stood still, ready for anything. Then again, fortunately, seeing how our hero was now a second circle user, his heavenly eye had evolved to a point where it could keep up with Hira's speed. The skill known as Flow Slowly was also more effective against the stubborn assassin. And so, upon using it, the young master realized that his opponent wanted to attack his leg once again. Yet unlike last time, our hero chose to evade the attack. This greatly intrigued the assassin, as it meant that the 10-year-old had perceived her movements. With that being said, the young master launched himself at the maid with all of his might. He gathered all of his magic into his fist in order to deal a powerful blow, but just as his knuckles were about to touch the face of the opponent, she vanished all of a sudden. Not even a second later, our hero could feel a cold blade on his neck. There was no doubting the strength of the assassin, as even with his evolved heavenly eye, he couldn't truly keep up with her movements. But just as the hero was about to declare that this was his defeat, the maid claimed that she had lost. After all, she was required to use the same level of skills as last time, yet failed to keep her word, as she didn't expect him to grow so strong. Underneath her objective tone, our hero claimed that he smelled a compliment, but Hero explained that Xiaobei praises were poison, and that the hero was still too weak to deserve one at all. After watching the entire duel from his crystal ball, the administrator couldn't help but shake. What he had seen left him utterly baffled, as this 10-year-old child was showing physical prowess that no mage should be capable of. Not even magic detection should have been able to keep track of the lady's speed, and the firepower of the hero had greatly increased since last time. But the most intriguing part was the assassin's last attack, which was scarier than anything Noah had ever seen before. The administrator decided to forget what he had seen, as he bid the young master and his mate farewell. But as soon as the boy stepped out the door, a cold shard of steel was placed against the mage's neck. As he was told to forget about tonight, Noah firmly affirmed that he had spent the entire evening in the bathroom. Hira explained to the man that he should only remember that the young master was still unable to control his newly awakened second circle. So the administrator explained that he had just learned that a 10-year-old had awakened to such a level of magic. The wolf praised the lamp for being clever enough, before finally making her leave. After that night, Noah didn't know what to think any longer. The next day, as the young master was training his core, Hira informed him that he had received a letter. Upon reading it, the young master fell from the pull-up bar. What he had read turned out to be something truly shocking. The author seemed to have stumbled upon another variable, as the renowned Sourcement family had formally invited him, something she had never written about. Shortly after, inside the main estate, the boy theorized that his father had summoned him, seeing how he had received a letter from the Sade house. A little earlier, after falling from the bar, the boy asked the maid to inform the main house about this. The boy explained that since he was now 10 years old, he would be partaking in the succession war. According to the protagonist, he needed to step into the enemy's territory in order to vanquish it, even though making it an ally would be much better. Ludia, who thought that actual murder was implied, was left excited, so the protagonist decided to bring her along. After all, the novel's protagonist wanted to make friends with her as well. Larson then decided to look at the story from his author's perspective, starting with the invitation that he had just received from the rival family. This small letter could be the start of countless plot lines. In the presence of his father, as well as his older sister, our hero came to a realization. The original story that he had written was getting demolished, which is why he should create a new one. That small realization was considered a variable by the system. Later on, the son asked his father if he had a command to give him, but the patriarch affirmed that the child knew very well what he wanted to talk about. As soon as the hero brought up the invitation coming from the rival family, cold air suddenly filled the room. Before he could even realize it, the protagonist was attacked by ice. In the blink of an eye, a spike was pointed at his neck. Larson then asked his father for the reason he was being so dramatic. According to him, he would have already been a goner if the patriarch had truly meant it. Yet the boy was still safe and sound. Larson then explained that he had done nothing wrong. His father then pointed out how the Sado house's rightful place was at the feet of the maidens. The young master agreed with the patriarch, which seemed intriguing, as his words were contradicting his actions. Our hero didn't deny the fact that he had met with the second son of the Sado house back in the territory of the Fire Tribe. He even revealed how he had asked him for a duel, as it was the way of the Sourcement family to make friends. Larson then explained that he had met the boy by pure coincidence and considered it a chance to showcase the dominance of his family. According to the boy, it was better to request a duel in order to get a grasp of their rival's might. Meanwhile, the sorceress watching from afar began to wonder about the rumor regarding her brother, who seemed different to her after his birthday party. According to her, Larson couldn't have possibly changed from a delinquent to this entirely, meaning that he was never one at all and that the rumors were fake. From what she knew, not many people had the power to twist the reality of things like that. And so, the first suspect that came to her mind was the patriarch himself. Larson explained that since he was now 10 years old, he would now take part in the succession war. As Avelia was left greatly shocked, the boy explained how everyone in the family had already sided with one of his siblings. He claimed this injustice to be fair game, as he was the youngest, and explained that he wouldn't gain anything by remaining in the family. Upon hearing the boy explain that the best move would be to expand his power outside of it, Decatra asked him if he dared to bring outsiders into their family matters. So Larson claimed that this was his only option. As the father asked his son if he was even aware of the weight of his words, the boy screamed that he was and explained that he wanted to make Cassine his well-trained dog that could even hunt a tiger. But as the father explained that this dog might want to turn against him, the protagonist explained that he would have then deserved his fate, to be eaten by the one he had trained. The father couldn't help but smile upon hearing his son claim that he would turn the other boy into his servant, that would obey his every order. And so shortly after, the seventh brother was asked by the second sister if he had expected those events to unfold upon receiving the invitation. The boy affirmed that he did, but claimed that he didn't expect their father to summon her as well. Larson knew very well that his father wouldn't send him to the enemy house without someone trustworthy like the Sorceress of the End to protect him. As Avelia realized that her younger brother had practiced his interaction with their father, our hero explained that this was the best way for him to think. The Sorceress of the End revealed how, back when she was 10 years old, she wouldn't even dare to respond to their father. as she then decided to ask him one final question. The protagonist suddenly felt an overwhelming aura, as the second sister asked him if the physical strengthening magic ritual had actually succeeded. Larson revealed that it was, in fact, a success, and when asked about the man of the Transcendent Scroll, he apologized to his sister, as he was unable to tell her more about the subject. Larson claimed that their father had forbidden him from doing so. With that being said, the doubts of the Sorceress of the End were confirmed. According to her, the only reason her younger brother brought up the Patriarch was because the man had assigned his son to her as her hidden ace. She theorized that the value of this new weapon would totally depend on the way she used it, and failing to do so would make Decatra gift it to the other siblings. Avelia thought that she was the first one that the Patriarch wanted to have this weapon. In other words, she had now made that her new task to use her younger brother well. At that moment, the protagonist decided to show her something. The hero then focused his energy, and started to work his magic. As the purple-colored power appeared, the Sorceress of the End was left stunned. Her 10-year-old brother had realized transcendent mana. After using this new ability, and noticing the shocked reaction of the second sister, Larson asked Avelia if she could perceive his transcendent mana, so she explained how it seemed to originate from fire magic. The assumption of the lady was correct. The Sorceress of the End then asked her brother to stop pushing himself, as she was already aware of his potential, leaving him quite confused. She then revealed to him how it was hard for a heart to maintain physical mana, which was an obvious fact that he had ignored. Avelia explained how his heart must already be struggling because of his second circle, and how overdoing it would affect his growth as a mage. As his sister explained how she wished to see him reach higher peaks, he was left intrigued by her kindness. Our hero then realized that his father didn't say anything about him acquiring the second circle. When asked about his next move, the boy pointed out how Cassin must have invited someone else as well, making his sister reveal that it must be the Grandel child. The person in question should be around their age and possess an adequate amount of talent, and the only person who fit that description would be Rosalind, the only daughter of the Grandel house. It was a fact that her family would be using the portals that they had set up in order to quickly cross the continent. Larson, who had been rude to the daughter of the martial arts family in the past, wanted to go wait for them. Back when he was 8 years old, Larson Mayton assaulted Rosalind with a stick, which was the main reason behind his exile. The protagonist revealed how he wanted to apologize to the girl. The sorceress explained that, as a Mayton, he was forbidden from lowering his head, so the hero explained how this would only work if his honor was clean. Yet, seeing how he had tainted his honor as a mage, he didn't have the luxury of getting on his high horse. In the end, it was his duty as a magician to apologize to the girl he had hit in the past. Only then did the protagonist realize that the original Larson didn't have any real way of hurting someone from the martial arts family. According to the system, unlike the rest of the Grandels, Rosalind greatly despised violence. This explained everything for our hero, who was able to realize the reason why the girl would become extremely violent later in the novel. Rosalind would then harbor great hatred toward Larson, who bullied her, making her realize the true meaning of despair. Because of the behavior of the delinquent, Rosalind trained with all of her might as her father showed great passion while teaching her. The girl was a genius martial artist with an incredible growth rate, who simply didn't have a reason to show her potential before meeting Larson. This made the author realize that the insignificant actions of the side character Larson greatly affected Rosalind, one of the main characters. Avelia then explained how she was the one who had gotten the invite from the swordsman family, and how she would be helping him quietly from the shadows. Sometime later, in front of the sunflower field, where the third gateway was added, Lydia began to wish that Cassin would have prepared some good snacks for them, and as she claimed that Cassin was a great person, Hampton began to think of how he could become an even greater enemy. The Shadow knew very well that the Mayton house was to submit the Saddest to their will, but was certain that his considerate master would show them kindness. Hampton couldn't help but tear up out of joy, as the master he was assigned to seemed to have great things waiting for him. And while the first Shadow started to cry his heart out, the second one watched him in complete silence. The journey of our heroes started at the third gateway. They then passed through the seventh one at the small forest at midnight. This was followed by the first gateway that was located near the Black Sea, and after some time they passed through the central gateway at the Grave of Swords. Larson and his group had crossed 22 gateways in order to get to the central one, which was heavy on the body, as seen with Hampton. The Grave of Swords was the most active gateway near the renowned family of swordsmanship. Despite the name, this place was a cute and active small city. According to the Sorceress of the End, the Grandels were to arrive in 4 hours. Larson decided to practice his mana-breathing technique until they arrived, while his lot decided to head to the hotel. Avelia watched her younger brother with great care. She was eager to see the wonders that he was yet to show them. Meanwhile, back at the main estate, Decatra revealed to his second-in-command Senkan how he had recently interacted with his 7th child. The father revealed to his right hand how, despite appearances, the physical strengthening magic ritual turned out to be a success. He then explained how something alien had installed itself around his son's heart. Decatra theorized that the magic coating Larson's heart was the holy grail of transcendence. According to the legends, the artifact had traveled the world by the side of Kurtel. Before his death, the great mage realized that his lifelong friend wasn't actually the holy grail of transcendence. According to the records of the Maton family, Decatra revealed how the first patriarch of the house shared a special relationship with Kurtel, and how the cup was forgotten by history after his death. After some research, the father discovered that the new playmate of his youngest was a member of the Fire tribe, which confirmed his theory even more. Decatra then pointed out how, in the records, the first patriarch had a special name for the holy grail of transcendence. He called it the supporting circle. Kurtel referred to it as a charger, or a battery, which were items that characters from medieval times shouldn't be aware of. Decatra affirmed that his youngest son must have acquired the holy grail of transcendence, as it was the only explanation for the current situation. Yet his second-in-command failed to realize what situation the patriarch was talking about. So, to his utmost shock, it was revealed how the 10-year-old Larson had awakened his second circle and acquired elemental mana. During childhood, Decatra was called a genius of magic, while Senkan was considered a prodigy with his physical strength. The patriarch then asked his second-in-command if he would have been able to awaken his second circle, while still a 10-year-old boy. Senkan theorized that he could have, but affirmed that he would have barely lived long enough to see adulthood. For that reason, it was rather astonishing to see Larson suffering from no difficulties despite his situation. Even so, the father couldn't understand why he wasn't able to realize the great potential of his youngest before his 10th-year ceremony. Decatra, who was certain that his Benjamin had a great secret, decided to assign his second-in-command a very special mission. The loyal Senkan, who awaited his orders, was assigned to keep Larson alive. When asked for the duration of his mission, the patriarch revealed that once he drew his last breath, his second-in-command would be relieved of his duties. Sometime later, at the Grave of Swords, the boy noticed something alarming. House Grandel had finally arrived. The other great power on the continent, aside from Maton and Sade, it had been a long time since our protagonist had seen her. Rosalind, the genius whom he had previously assaulted, finally made her entrance. Upon being greeted by a small boy at the bottom of the stairs, the girl didn't recognize him. But upon taking a good look at his smug face, she realized that this was the same delinquent who had beaten her 2 years ago. Upon recalling this, Rosalind was left with a stone face, and so, in the blink of an eye, she jumped down the entire staircase and landed in front of our protagonist, leaving him baffled. Rosalind then explained that he was here to apologize. After hearing this, the martial artist burst out laughing. Our hero didn't expect her to be this mad at him. At that moment, the man who was with her approached the young ones, but that man, who turned out to be Rosalind's uncle, called out the protagonist for not greeting the elderly first. Seeing this, Larson properly greeted the martial artist in front of him. The man was left shocked, as the 10-year-old had recognized him as the combat king, Magner. This man was the younger brother of the patriarch of Grandel, and the second powerhouse of the family, who even surpassed his brother in terms of pure skill. The combat king then explained that he had been planning to scold Larson for his misdeed, but upon seeing that the boy was well aware that this wasn't the style of their family, the man was left shocked, as the young one didn't seem intimidated by him. Larson then explained that he was ready to undergo the traditions of their family, regarding apologies in order to be granted forgiveness, and so Rosalind explained that in that case he should accept death by her hand. Yet as the powerful fist flew at an incredible speed toward our hero, the combat king was left shocked. After all, the mage didn't even move. Rosalind was shocked by how brave her bully turned out to be, and so she dared him to try and parry her next attack. At that moment, Flow slowly was activated, as well as a self-defense skill. Larson was then hit in the stomach. Our hero felt excruciating pain, and before he could even realize it, he was kicked off his feet. The uncle watched his 8-year-old nephew, the young Maton, in front of him. The combat king was left stunned as he quickly realized that the boy was using magic combat techniques that were similar to their martial arts. According to him, it was these skills that allowed him to react in time and tank the punch with simple defense magic. As Rosalind started to scream at him for not fighting back, the protagonist apologized once again for what he had done to her. After all, the author was still a person from the modern world, meaning that it was normal to him to get stepped on daily. And as the girl kept on screaming at him, Larson explained that she was too cute back then. Our hero declared that 2 years ago, he bullied her because he sought her attention. At first, the martial artist didn't know how to react, but she then found the perfect response by kicking the mage in the knee. If it wasn't for his self-defense magic, the bones of our hero would have been shattered. Rosalind claimed this to be boring, as according to the flustered girl, there was no pleasure in beating up a fightless punching bag. Thus, the mage decided to grant her a proper fight, but refused to do it immediately. At that moment, someone arrived to stop the fight. The uncle explained to his niece that this wasn't the proper place for the fight, yet she didn't want to hear any of it, as she was eager to settle the score with the bully. And with that being said, the gathering and gossiping crowd was pointed out to Rosalind, and while the martial artist screamed that the presence of spectators was trivial, the magician stated that their fight might hurt them, leaving the girl completely stunned. The combat king found our hero to be rather wise. The protagonist explained that he would have their apology fight in a better place. Magner then reminded the 8-year-old that they needed to go to the residence of the renowned family of swordsmanship. All of a sudden, our protagonist started to hear some kind of voice in his head. The combat king, who was talking to him by telepathy, urged him to play it cool for now, in order not to make it seem like there was a conflict between their two families. At that moment, another variable sparked in the story, as the combat king had now taken great interest in the young maiden and would observe him closely. Larson quickly realized what this implied. The system then informed him that the Mage of the Heavens had doubts regarding the probability. Our hero quickly recognized the Mage of the Heavens as his father, and just like that, once again, our hero met, by pure coincidence, some requirements. As he had influenced an important character through his acting skills, Larson was surprised to see that both Decatra and Magner were doubting the probability. Like that, the system granted the author of this world a new hack, known as Creator's Privilege. Our hero was stunned, and expected something grandiose to pop out. All of a sudden, something small appeared right in front of him, before falling right into his arms. Upon seeing it, the young master was left stunned. After all, this was the character book that he had created. This setup contained all the details that our hero had included in the story, like the librarian who likes chocolate, the psychopathic sister, and even his badass assassin. Yet it seemed like the setup was mostly lacking, seeing as the pages were mostly white. This made the author wonder why he had ended up as Larson Mayton, and why the story was being changed so much. The system then informed him that his creator's privilege had now gone on cooldown. The author realized that this new power had a time limit of about 60 seconds, and needed some kind of requirement to be reactivated, or a cooldown. Larson Mayton then started to wonder about the upcoming events, as the Combat King proposed going to meet the Sorceress of the End at the restaurant. Once there, the two old acquaintances greeted each other. The Combat King was happy to see that the Sorceress of the End had gotten even stronger. As Avelia stated that she would be able to surpass him in half a decade, the man affirmed that he looked forward to her challenge. In the past, Avelia had the ability to challenge the Combat King as much as she wanted, yet now, being one of the most important figures of her family, it was rendered impossible. With a warm smile, Magner pointed out how the girl in front of him wasn't a cute child any longer. Back in the day, she would try to fight him everywhere, at any time of the day. He even recalled how one time she had burned his hair while he was sleeping. As the two of them chuckled while remembering the past, our hero found the heart to keep up with their conversation. Only then were they interrupted by a small, shy voice. Upon seeing how Rosalind was now acting in front of his sister, our protagonist was left quite shocked, as he had a hard time believing that this was the same savage from a few moments ago. Rosalind explained how she idolized Avelia, seeing how she was weaker than male martial artists, making Avelia point out how she still hadn't acquired the fighting spirit. While magicians use spells and swordsmen arm themselves with blades, martial artists only rely on physical abilities. They even use something called fighting spirit in order to overcome human limits and achieve the impossible. Rosalind declared that she wanted to use her fighting spirit in order to become someone as powerful as the Sorceress of the End. After lunch, the sorceress declared how she would be reopening the portal later tonight, and as she invited the martial artists to join them, Larson was left baffled by how much the Grandels had actually eaten. Seeing how there was still some time until the portal got reopened, Avelia asked for some time off with her younger brother, and so the Combat King agreed to meet them later on at the portal. Once alone at the beach, Avelia decided to talk about the interaction that her brother had had with the martial artist back at the portal. He explained that he had planned everything, and when asked if he had also predicted that he would be attacked, Larson stated that this was also anticipated. After hearing this, the Sorceress of the End asked him for the reason he didn't offer to settle the score with the girl at the arena of the swordsman family. In other words, Avelia wished to know why her younger brother had resorted to his magic combat technique back at the portal. Larson said that the real reason was the Combat King. He was certain that his little show from earlier had made Magner, the number 2 of his family, think constantly about him and his combat techniques. This greatly intrigued the second sister. She was certain that the Combat King would have surely noticed how skilled the 7th brother was, his magic combat techniques, as well as his insane amount of mana. Larson was well known for being a mindless delinquent. In other words, after seeing his performance, one would undoubtedly start seeing him as a hidden ace. The most impressive part was that Larson had created a good plan to get into the head of the Combat King, whom he had never met before. Larson explained that his move would make him look like the secret weapon of their family in the eyes of Magner, thus he was bound to take great interest in him. At that moment, Avelia finally realized why her father wanted her to make her brother appear as a hidden weapon. Despite being limited by his magic combat techniques, Larson turned out to be a genius tactician, with an analytical mind. The most important part was the fact that the boy was still a child, meaning that his potential was boundless. If her father hadn't requested her to do so, Avelia would still have done her best in order to raise her younger brother as one of her supporters. She then revealed how she had met Magner while still a pilgrim, which was the level that comes before truth-seeking, which comes before becoming a patriarch candidate. Also, with a warm expression on her face, the Sorceress of the End began to tell her younger brother how she wanted to kill the martial artist at all costs. Back then, as she was being beaten up, Magner had promised to give her 3 chances to try and kill him if she was ever upset. From the looks of it, Avelia seemed to share many good memories with the Combat King. The Sorceress of the End declared that someone like the Combat King would always try to know everything about anything that piqued his interest. In other words, if our hero played his cards right, the old man would approach him on his own. Seeing there was still about half an hour before going to the gate, Avelia proposed to her brother to do some little exploring together. She claimed that this should be interesting, seeing how this was a commercial city. Avelia revealed that she had set foot in many of those, but every time she found herself being their destroyer. And so, with that being said, the younger brother grabbed the hand of his sister, as he decided to lead the way. Avelia couldn't help but let out a small smile. With that being said, the 2 siblings started walking on the beach while holding hands. Meanwhile, back in the city, upon recalling the mindless delinquent that the young man had been 2 years ago, the Combat King found it rather stunning how much he had changed since then. Yet according to him, no one could change this much, meaning that his past actions were some kind of act to hide his true personality. Magner began to wonder about the goal that the mages were trying to achieve using this strategy. He even began to think that something big was going on, as from the looks of it, someone wanted a good relationship between the Satas and the Maidens. The man began to think that there was some kind of scheme going on underneath his nose, while thinking of how his family was weaker than both the mages and the swordsmen. It was obvious that if anything happened, the martial artist would be taken out by the other 2 families. And seeing how Larsen seemed to be the central axis of this hidden plan, Magner was now determined to learn everything about him and the plan in question. A little later, everyone was gathered in front of the gate. The Combat King felt honored by the fact that he would be entering a portal created by the Sorceress of the End herself. Avelia reminded the Combat King that of the 3 chances he had given her to kill him, she still had 1. And with that being said, everyone entered the magic portal. Rosalind found herself having a hard time handling the process, as it made her feel sick. And so, at long last our heroes reached their destination. Magner was shocked to see that the sorceress didn't go for his life, so she explained how this wouldn't be fitting, seeing how he was with his niece. At that moment someone called for Larsen and Ludia. The young Cassin Saud rushed to greet his friends. The Combat King recognized the boy as the second son, the most likely successor of the family. As soon as the 2 boys saw each other and started comparing heights, they were suddenly separated by an airhead. Ludia firmly affirmed to the swordsman that she was the protagonist's best friend. Cassin stated that this wasn't a competition, and that he and Larsen became friends because they were on the same wavelength. Cassin had failed to realize that Ludia lacked the necessary brain cells to understand what he had just said. As the girl affirmed once again that she was the hero's best friend, she stated to the protagonist of the novel that she would still become his friend. With that being said, the swordsman thanked the Crimson Butcher for becoming his friend. At that moment, the young martial artist reminded their host that he had invited her as well. Cassin quickly apologized for having ignored her. As the boy gave her the most formal of greetings, the girl asked him to be more casual, seeing how she was younger than him, only for him to claim that it was still too early. Rosalind felt irritated that the pretty boy was getting chummy with the other 2, yet was giving her the cold shoulder. The Combat King immediately theorized that this dynamic had already been set up previously by the young mage. It didn't feel like Larsen was a regular child, but someone inhabited by an old and unwanted presence. Our hero then decided to ask his friend for a favor, as he revealed to him how he wanted to duel Rosalind. Larsen explained to the shocked Cassin that he wanted him to find them a proper place to settle their differences. Larsen's debut stage was now set, as he would get to fight the child of a reputable family on the grounds of another one, in front of plenty of important figures. Shortly after, people began to discuss the upcoming fight. According to the majority, Rosalind was to dominate the Beyond Mage, despite having awakened her fighting spirit. But seeing how the fight would mainly depend on physical abilities, it would be rather interesting to see a martial artist fight a magic combat technique user. Even Karsia Sade, the patriarch of his family, was asking himself the same question. Both father and son agreed that a fight between friends seemed rather entertaining. Cassin revealed to his father how he thought that Larsen was simple at first, but then quickly realized how wrong he was after meeting him. Cassin explained that he saw our hero as a rival, which shocked the father, as they were still too young for that. Karsia's attention was then greatly captivated, as his son declared that he was currently stronger than the mage. According to the patriarch, someone had obviously created fake rumors about the 7th son being a delinquent. His first guess was that this was all some kind of great plan orchestrated by Decatra, with his Benjamin being a hidden ace. When the father asked the son who he predicted as the victor of the fight, the boy declared that the mage was to win. Even so, he was certain that Larsen wouldn't be crowned the winner of the fight. After all, the novel's protagonist knew very well that his friend was a kind soul. And so, after hearing this, the patriarch himself decided to spectate the fight between the 2 children. Cassin was left excited, as he would get to introduce his new friends to his father, who was greatly pleased by this. And so, the next day, on the Firmament Sword stage, Rosalind declared that she was eager for this day to arrive. Larsen realized that he must put all the odds on his side. In this arena, it would be pointless to make himself look like a regular 10-year-old. After all, he was fated to make his grand debut here, and now, the fierce little girl braced herself and charged headfirst at her opponent at an incredible speed. At that moment, flow slowly was triggered for the one who already had the upper edge when it came to physical abilities. After all, his opponent didn't have a fighting spirit yet. Flow slowly allowed the protagonist to perfectly perceive the girl's next move. This allowed him to block perfectly by using his arm and his self-defense technique. Rosalind, who had expected to crack some bones, found herself kicking water. Both the sorceress and the combat king were left stunned by this performance. Rosalind charged at her opponent once again, while claiming that he shouldn't get full of himself, as he had blocked her attack by sheer coincidence. The one who kept on getting blocked explained that the boy would need to train a lot more in order to beat her, and with that being said, she went for another punch. That was blocked by the 10-year-old. He then launched an attack that ultimately missed. Even so, it forced the beyond martial artist to back away a few feet. Rosalind was now almost out of breath. Yet our protagonist remained calm and full of energy. After seeing this, everyone was left utterly stunned. Magner was particularly baffled, as this 10-year-old was perfectly predicting the movements of his niece. He realized that such talent must run in the family, and that the rumors regarding the boy being a delinquent were obviously fake. The combat king was now certain that the Maitons had put their Benjamin through special training. The girl desperately tried to catch her breath, while the boy, on the other hand, didn't even break a sweat. Rosalind was left greatly annoyed, as her opponent was doing nothing but dodging and parrying. Yet the combat king had realized that the boy was letting his frustrated opponent exhaust all of her strength while saving up his own. The impressive part was that the boy had perceived many opportunities for him to attack. According to the martial artist, the only way for someone to perfectly protect their vital areas during a fight was to be far more skilled than their opponent. In other words, the boy was only defending himself in order to showcase a superiority, which was difficult behavior coming from a Maton. Despite his magic combat technique being considered weak among mages, the boy was sure it had a lot of potential, just like Rosalind's. According to the combat king, there were two main reasons behind our hero's behavior, with the first being to show the superiority of his weak technique. As for the second, it seems like this was a good way for the mage family to show off in front of both swordsmen and martial artists at the same time. Magner and Carcia both theorized that Larson must have been raised out of sight to become a professional magic combat technique user. This made it even more intriguing, as it meant that the maidens were showing off their secret weapon. The most logical explanation was that Larson wanted to test his skills in real-life combat in order to take them to the next level. To make things simple, the protagonist had intentionally shown off his skills in front of everyone in order to provoke the rival families. While the sorceress at the end was happy to see the plan of her brother unfold, Cassim was stunned by the fight. When asked when he would start attacking, Larson declared that he would only raise his fist once Rosalind had let out all of her anger. And so, seeing this, the girl gathered all of her might, and she urged him to at least pretend like he was getting hurt. At that moment, the martial artist drew out her fighting spirit and sunk her fist deep into the abdomen of her opponent. This time, our hero had taken some serious damage. As the boy was left helpless on the ground, coughing blood, the girl began to scream at him for not dodging, so he explained how she seemed to have really wanted to see him get hit. With that being said, the martial artist couldn't be more annoyed. She handed her opponent a healing potion, before forfeiting the duel. Rosalind pointed out how she had just unlocked her fighting spirit because of the annoying boy, who she couldn't fight any longer, as he had shown her kindness. Since she had broken his ribs, Rosalind decided to let go of her grudge and forgive him for all of his past mistakes. At that moment, Cassin rushed to his friend. In the original story, the little boy who had no friends immersed himself in hero biographies, making him greatly fond of things like friends and trust. As the swordsman complimented him on his quick growth, the protagonist realized that his fight had inspired him. Yet, hearing Cassin claim that he was happy to see firsthand how strong his friend had grown, the author realized what comes next. Cassin demanded the young mage to have a duel with him. Larson stated that he was forced to decline, as he was now tired, seeing how magic combat techniques require a lot of energy. Our hero stated that he wanted to fight the young swordsman at his best, but in reality, he felt that his overexcited novel protagonist would cut him in half by accident. But from the looks of it, Cassin seemed determined to have his fight, as he requested to have a duel the next day. Our hero had no choice but to agree, as the potion healed him from his injuries. Shortly after, he went to Rosalind, who used her fighting spirit on him in order to ask for a favor. At first, the girl thought that the mage wanted to mock her, but upon hearing him claim that when he got hit by her, he felt something sparking deep inside of him, she began to fear the worst. Larson explained that he was on the edge of discovering a new feeling, which left the girl disgusted. Yet, to her utmost shock, he requested her help, as according to him, her martial arts skills could help him improve his technique. Larson even stated that she should consider this service as a debt that he would owe her. Rosalind was now having many mixed feelings, as the one she had dreamed of taking revenge on for the last 2 years was now showing her a new facade of himself. The combat king encouraged her to help him. After all, Doing a favor to the youngest son of the table magician family, in front of everyone, might turn out to be beneficial for them. And thus, Rosalind finally agreed to help Larson. The sorceress of the end was caught off guard as her younger brother swore to pay the girl back on his honor as a future mage. She couldn't help but smile, as it meant that he was implying that he was going to partake in the succession war of their family. From the looks of it, the representatives of the other families seemed to have noticed this too. Rosalind simply had to hit the boy just like before. At that moment, the self-defense technique was automatically activated. The girl explained that what happened next wasn't even part of the martial arts, before hitting the boy in the gut with all of her might, and asking him not to blame her. Upon suffering the hit, Larson grew certain that the magic in his heart was reacting with the fighting spirit of Rosalind. The madman asked her to hit him once more, and thus the girl did just that. From the looks of it, the Combat King realized that the boy was trying to do something. Carcia asked Evelia about this strange situation, so she explained how there seemed to be some kind of reaction between the two energies of the children. Yet despite being certain of it, the sorceress of the end was unable to determine the nature of the said reaction. After suffering so many hits, there was no room for doubt any longer in the mind of our protagonist, as contradicted what he had written in the original story. His transcendent mana was having a reaction with the fighting spirit. This made the author quickly realize that the probability was decreasing. At that moment, the system praised him for realizing the flaw on his own, and granted him the chance to fix this plot hole. Larson's mission in the world that he had poorly created wasn't just to ensure his own survival. At that moment, the character book appeared in his hand. Numbers started to appear out of nowhere. It seemed like reality was now stuck inside a computer simulation. Each time the setup book appeared, time got frozen. At that moment, the notebook opened on its own. The system explained that fighting spirits and mana are two different concepts that shouldn't be able to mix. That much had been written in the book. Yet as Rosalind dueled Larson, an anomaly occurred. As for the reason, it was a blank that the author was supposed to fill. Now, with the pen in hand, he began to recall how those were the last words he had written in the setup. Larson needed to think carefully before writing anything, in order not to mess up the other concepts of this story. After all, carelessly writing and erasing in this notebook could result in the destruction of the world that he had created. And so, after thinking for a few seconds, he finally came up with a solid reason, then justified his transcendent mana reacting with the fighting spirit. And the grand logical reason was that his character wasn't bound by the rules of this realm. The boy wanted at first to put a different reason that would be related to his transcendent mana, his grail, or even his heavenly body. Yet the best step was to focus on his character, as in the end, not being bound by the rules of the world meant that he could do anything without influencing the preset of the story. With that, Larson Mayton had become a real anomaly. This move made the system reward him by giving him the privilege of writing a new line in the character book for 10 seconds. This greatly shocked him. Later on that night, as Ludia fell asleep, someone kept on knocking at the door, until finally, the non-stop knocks woke her up. The girl opened the door and asked the man who he was. Magner introduced himself as the Combat King and asked for our protagonist. Ludia thought that he was here to harm her friend, so Magner clarified that he had no ill will towards them. At that moment, the two of them spotted the boy getting out of the shower. The Combat King was impressed by how well built the 10-year-old was, surrounded by an energy different from his fighting spirit. While most magicians seem to focus their magic in their hearts, this one seemed to be a variant that was totally different. Seeing how mana would get in his way if he had trained his physique like any regular martial artist, the Combat King noticed that the boy must have had some special training. The airhead asked for permission to touch the funny-looking things that were his abs, only for him to defuse. As the boy demanded his clothes, the maid brought them to him in the blink of an eye, leaving the man startled. Magner realized that Hira was on a whole other level, and found it rather odd that someone like her was serving as a maid for the 10-year-old. As the two nobles sat down, the one in the suit offered them some fruit. Larson Mayton quickly guessed that the Combat King wanted to know more about his magic combat technique, which is why he bothered to visit him. He then pointed out that he was interested in martial arts. Magner found it odd that the boy was certain that he was going to unveil the secrets of martial arts to him. Larson was certain that this was a price that the man was ready to pay in order to satisfy his curiosity. Magner then clarified that there would be consequences if he taught Larson his fighting style, so the boy explained that this was the reason the Sada invited the two of them. In the end, not even the Mage of the Heavens could get his eyes inside the Sada family residence, making it dangerous and safe at the same time. The Combat King grew even more intrigued by the boy and asked him to take his shirt off and turn around. His back was way too perfect and trained to be that of a regular 10-year-old. The man then warned the boy to accept the fighting spirit that he would now be putting deep inside his body. As Larson claimed that he had faith in him, the man realized how truly smart he was. After all, he created a situation where the man was, in fact, powerless to harm him, yet still pretended as if he was risking his life by putting himself in his hands. Larson's crafty mind knows no bounds. Back then, as he activated the ability, he began to think of how he had given the matter a lot of thought after his duel. He started to wonder what ability the story's writer should gift to his main character. And so, seeing how he was both, he gave himself the power to accept fighting spirit without suffering any kind of side effects. In that moment, the 10-year-old boy was penetrated from behind by the man's energy. The Combat King found it rather shocking that a little of his fighting spirit had been absorbed by the boy. He considered the fact that the Maitons were deliberately showing this ability as some kind of war declaration. When asked about his mentor, Larson explained that he was training his magic combat techniques alone, as the Combat King pointed out that it was his first time encountering a magician who could absorb fighting spirits. The boy claimed that he didn't know about this ability before. Magner then asked Larson if he truly believed, as a Maton, that he should acquire both martial arts and fighting spirit in order to grow, which he confirmed. In the eyes of the reputed mage family, sword mastery was insignificant, and martial arts weren't any different. In other words, the House of Maton only values magic. Yet now, the Combat King had met one of them, who was willing to be taught martial arts in order to improve. When asked if he was truly a Maton, the boy confirmed that his father was indeed Decatra, the patriarch. Magner couldn't help but laugh as he found himself in front of a true oddball, and asked what he truly wanted with him. He urged the boy to cut straight to the chase and tell him what he wanted already. With that being said, our hero asked the Combat King to become his teacher. Upon hearing this, Magner didn't know what to say. Our hero was certain that fighting spirit and martial arts were the missing pieces to perfect his magic combat techniques. For that reason, the previous users who only relied on magic never had the chance to improve. The Combat King, who was baffled by this, explained that the mage family would never allow him to become a mentor to one of their sons. And to his even greater astonishment, the master heard the boy clearly say that he would make sure to persuade his family and make it so that they don't intervene. Larson knew very well that, since he was a patriarch candidate, it made it look as if his family was submitting to the House of Grandel. But then he quickly pointed out that the Combat King would have immediately declined his request if he wasn't considering it in the first place. Magner realized that he had been led into a situation where he couldn't say no, and where he was expected to examine the boy's body out of curiosity. The second he didn't refuse the young man's request upon proposing it was the moment the trap had closed on him. When asked about it, Magner clarified that he wasn't interested in magic combat techniques as much as he was interested in the boy's fighting style itself. Larson declared that he would create a new fighting style, as his magic combat techniques only reached their peak when combined with fighting spirits and martial arts. The Combat King still couldn't believe that he was hearing those words coming from the mouth of a Makgon, and asked him if he had shown them his power on purpose. The boy confirmed it, as he had noticed how the old man was eyeing him, and he was then asked about the purpose of the duel. Larson explained that on top of showing off in the arena, he had also earned himself the forgiveness of Rosalind. And so, with that being said, our protagonist asked his soon-to-be mentor if he didn't wish to see the birth of a new martial art style. Our hero then declared that he wished to remain here with the family of his friends, so the man explained how this would make him look like a hostage. The boy explained that such things would be trivial, as in the end his father would be certain to get the best deal out of his stay here. The man found the young man to be totally insane, as he wanted to meet the man in this place, seeing how this was the furthest place from his father's reach. Magner couldn't decide if the boy was showing the typical craziness of his family, or just his own. The man quickly realized that the boy had planned for this a long time ago, and so with that being said, he granted him the privilege of becoming his student while he analyzed everything about his body and magic combat techniques. Seeing how he would be using him to discover the secrets of the mage family, the Combat King urged the boy to use this opportunity to learn more about his own. Larson couldn't ask for anything more. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, the Shadow began to think of how his young master had made plans that he couldn't even understand. According to him, Larson purposely allowed him to eavesdrop on his conversation, and from it, the boy came to a conclusion. His young master wanted to create a magnificent world where the three families would live together in peace. Hampton was then startled by the maid appearing out of nowhere and handing him a tissue. He explained that he was still shocked that she became the other Shadow, and that she almost scared him to death, making her state that he was still too weak. The cold assassin then asked the boy if he was aware of their master's plan to remain here, but what he didn't know was that they needed to go back to the main estate in order to get the family's approval. In other words, their lives might be at stake. Hampton gathered his courage and explained that he couldn't care less, as it was his duty as a Shadow to protect his young master even from the patriarch, as, after all, our protagonist was his light. And with that being said, the assassin vanished into the night. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the mansion, as brother and sister met up, the sorceress of the end quickly realized that her younger brother had something important to reveal. Evelia asked him not to tell her immediately, as these few minutes that they had ahead of them seemed to be way too important to be wasted on business or family matters. When asked if she liked tulips, the lady explained that she liked beautiful things, which intrigued the boy, who assumed that she liked magic the most. The sorceress of the end explained that there was a time when she felt that magic was the most beautiful thing in the world. Yet in her hands, magic was a powerful weapon that could strip flesh and skin from the bones. In her eyes, the beautiful magic also became the embodiment of violence. And unlike magic, fireballs, flowers do not kill their receivers. Upon hearing this, the younger brother promised to gift his older sister a bouquet of flowers one day. Evelia started to smile, as even mentioning it made her heart skip a beat. With that being said, she accepted to hear her younger brother, who revealed his desire to remain with the Sade family. When asked if he desired to become the successor, the boy affirmed that he didn't, and offered the girl to even check it herself. The sorceress of the end decided to make sure of it by using the Eye of Truth, and after analyzing the mind of our hero, she realized that he was studying the truth, and asked him for the reason behind his decision. Yet upon hearing him claim that he simply wanted to survive, the sorceress was left stunned. Larson explained that this even extended to Carlton, his own brother. That boy was inhabited by a burning desire to take his life. Ivelia affirmed that siblings would never take each other's lives, no matter how bloody the succession war gets. Yet Larson declared that this wasn't the case, as even Decatra killed his own siblings in order to become the head of the family. Larson declared that he only wanted to stay here in order to survive and become stronger, yet his sister kept pressuring him so that he could reveal the real reason. In the end, the protagonist was forced to reveal that he wanted to become a shield, someone who could protect himself as well as his mother. Those words resonated deep in the heart of the sorceress of the end. Ivelia loved her family with all of her heart. It was for their sake that she became who she is now. In order to protect her kin, the lady would become an angel for her family, but didn't have any problem becoming a demon for their enemies as well. One day, while on a mission, a swordsman charged at her from behind. The powerful mage quickly spotted the attacker, and stopped him using her magic. Back then, Ivelia had no desire to take the life of a child. She wished for him to remain alive, yet for the sake of her house, the sorceress was forced to step on her own heart, to do what was best for the Maitons. Ivelia relished everything about her house, and loathed the succession war, as it would force her siblings to harm each other for the sake of succession. For that reason, she wanted to become the strongest, in order to become the next head of the house, and acquire enough power to stop the succession war. And so, for the sake of her goal, Ivelia needed to acquire the ultimate magic that can rule everything. Ivelia lusted for the absolute power that could end all conflicts. The author then recalled how, for her 10th year ceremony, the second sister took out the evil spirit Balrog, a task more difficult than those accomplished by her siblings. It is important to note that the sorceress decided to go after a monster, rather than a human. Our hero then realized that the brutal novel he mindlessly wrote was the harsh reality that these characters had to live through. It was easy for an author to write about a character taking a life, but for someone to actually kill another human being, things were a little different. As in the end, for them, this wouldn't be simple words on paper, but a harsh reality. With that being said, the younger brother decided to ask his older sister something important. Larson wanted to know if she would find him too prideful. If he declared that he wanted to become strong enough to even protect her, the sorceress of the end was left stunned. It was the first time that our hero had heard her laughing so genuinely. Ivelia affirmed that talking to her little brother always makes her day. Larson asked his older sister for help in order to convince their father, and while she had her doubts, our hero was determined to persuade him. He was in great need of his father's approval. As the next day dawned on the palace, the author couldn't help but shake, as despite being inside of a traditional Korean recreation, his bad and rushed writing resulted in the palace having classical music, making him realize more and more how he should have never picked up the pen. To make things worse, Ludia somehow managed to pull out a princess outfit out of nowhere. The girl couldn't help but gawk, as it was the first time that she had seen a cake with 4 levels. And with that being said, the children wished happy birthday to the young swordsman. The boy accepted the phrases with a smile. Ludia then handed him a very special present, claiming that it brings good luck according to her father. As the girl demanded cake, Larson realized that her gift was awfully similar to a pebble that he saw on the side of the road earlier. Rosalind then gave the birthday boy her present. As he thanked her with a casual tone instead of a formal one, the girl was left overjoyed. Yet upon hearing the protagonist claim that he hadn't gotten him a gift, the novel's main character couldn't help but smile, as he knew that there was something more coming. Yet Ludia failed to realize what was happening, seeing how she cruelly lacked the necessary brain cells. Upon hearing Larson express his desire to stay here in order to spar, Casson was left stunned. It meant that his best friend wanted to stay with him at his residence. Casson couldn't be happier. Larson asked him to inform his father about his decision. Our hero would go back home in order to convince his patriarch, but the assassin knew that this was no easy task. Larson had 2 main goals in mind. The first was making the novel's protagonist his ally, and the second was gaining as much as possible from the Combat King. Casson asked his friends to return as fast as possible. As our hero explained, he would do his best to return in a short while. Rosalind began to think about how that young man was different from the scoundrel she used to know. Larson then expressed his wish for their next meeting to be a joyful one. Just like that, the young martial artist left upset, as he had taken the words right out of her mouth. Avelia then warned her younger brother that he was going to take a huge risk, as no one in the family could survive the wrath of their father, yet he decided not to back down. Later on, at the main estate of the Mage family, just by standing outside his domain, our protagonist could feel the cold, unsettling aura of his father. The patriarch explained to his youngest son that there was no need for greetings. The father explained that the second sister had filled him in on the situation and pointed out how bad this would look to outsiders. Decatra, now full of wrath, explained that if the boy didn't justify himself, this would be considered an insult to the entire family. Suddenly, something started to appear in the hands of our hero. He was given the instant death dagger that would immediately take the life of a mage below the third circle, leaving him horrified. Larson realized that failing to justify himself would force him to take his own life. And so, with that being said, the boy reminded his father how he had expressed his desire to make the Sad family their servants. According to him, the second son of this family had a soft spot for friendships and emotions. Larson stated that he wanted to stay by his side in order to pave his path, but the father was convinced that there was more to his stay with the Sadvets than this. The protagonist revealed that, unlike most people, he had seen the great potential of his magic combat techniques. And as he started to explain how he had gained his second circle, and how something had fused with his heart, the father realized that he was talking about the Grail. The boy, stunned to see that the patriarch already knew about the legendary artifact, stated that after his heavenly body got combined with its mana, his inner power was able to react with the fighting spirit of the Grandels. And the little amount he was able to absorb was now building up inside of him. He had received a formal invitation from the swordsmanship family, so it was safe to say that there was evidence of a friendship between the families. Larson stated that it didn't seem like this concerned him, seeing how the children of the three great families were able to interact with each other. The boy then affirmed that the swordsmanship family wasn't the type to start a rumor about them submitting Maton to their will, and if they did, he would gladly pay for his mistakes with his own life. Dekana pointed out how confident his child was and asked him about the next step of his plan. Larson began to panic, as he hadn't planned that far, so the boy decided to freestyle and explained that his father was clever enough to figure out the rest after he had offered the Saudas his friendship. With Dekana character in mind, the hero started to spout some nonsense about how power and strength allow one to conquer the throne, but only kindness and humility would allow one to remain on it. With that being said, a chill ran down the boy's spine as he heard his father explain how he would have taken his life with no regret if he had spoken as such in the past. In the end, Dekana granted Larson his blessing to go live with their rivals and explained that he would observe him and that he expected great results. Yet as our hero pointed out that he was still a 10-year-old child, the father quickly got angry, thinking that he was giving himself an excuse to fail. But to his utmost shock, Larson explained that as a child, he would need his mother by his side, which is why he requested her to be sent with him to the Sade family. After hearing this, the Mage of the Heavens burst out in laughter. He would have never expected that his little scoundrel that he had discarded now had the ability to actually convince people. Gakatra claimed it was a shame that he was only good at magic combat techniques, and started to wonder why no one had discovered his potential sooner. Only then did the window panel appear. The system informed the protagonist that the probability had collapsed, seeing how his father was doubting it. Larson was now horrified, as he knew very well that if this world collapsed, he would fall with it as well. Meanwhile, Avelia sat down in her study. She seemed to be enjoying a book in peace, when, all of a sudden, someone knocked at her door. It was a shock for the sorceress of the end to see that her younger sister had come to visit her while asking about the book she had in hand. Persia quickly realized that this was the same book that their brother was previously reading. The two sisters each had something important to announce to the other, and decided to cut straight to the chase. Avelia affirmed that she would be the one to take care of Larson. Her psychopath of a sister found that rather laughable, as she was also here to announce herself as their brother's caretaker. The sorceress started to think that their father had also allowed the witch to have access to their brother, and that whoever would use him best would get him in the end. The sisters started to debate which one of them had their eyes on the young genius first, as Avelia said that she had no choice but to fight her younger sister for him, as decreed by the laws of magic. Persia found this utterly laughable. After all, back in the day, many incidents similar to the Nupia Canyons had occurred that would have allowed Avelia to wound her. Back then, if the roles were reversed, the Red Hat would have gladly taken a limb off her blonde sister. Yet Avelia didn't, out of the softness of her heart. The sorceress claimed that the witch had misread the situation, leaving this one even more amused. And with that being said, a great battle started between the two sisters. Yet the fight didn't last long, as Persia was quickly defeated by her sister, who didn't really injure her, when all of a sudden, a heel was placed on her shoulder. When asked for the reason behind her interest in Larson, the sorceress of the end refused to answer. Persia explained that the more her sister clung to their little brother, the more she would want him. When asked for the reason she desired him, Persia claimed that she found Larson adorable. Avelia urged her to stop wasting her time, and increased the pressure on her shoulder. The witch then explained how interesting it was to see a 10-year-old acquire a muscular body and awaken his second circle. The most intriguing part was that the shadow she had hired to follow him suddenly disappeared. Avelia quickly realized that the Red Hat had only visited her in order to observe her reaction. She then urged her to get up, as their fight was sure to attract the elders of the house. Upon seeing how Avelia wanted Larson, Persia's desire to possess him grew even more. At that moment, our hero felt a disturbance in the force. When asked if there was a problem by his mother, he quickly brushed it off. Later on, an appetizing plate of spaghetti and meatballs was presented to the protagonist. Seeing how Hira, an assassin, was at his service, it meant that his chances of getting targeted for assassination had been greatly lowered. As she was thanked for the food, the maid cracked a soft smile and explained how nutrition was crucial for a growing child. Such sudden kindness made our hero grow suspicious, and so, he decided to resort to his heavenly eyes. From the looks of it, his food contained a compound called seikin. According to the system, that substance was a deadly poison for those without mana, but a good way to gain poison immunity for those who actually have it. With that being said, Larson asked Hira if she had added something to his meatballs, so she explained how there wasn't anything special about them. After all, she herself spent her childhood eating seikin. Larson then clarified that he was asking if the meatballs were poisoned. Only then did the first child storm into the room and claim that he deserved death for not having warned his master sooner. Later on, everything was explained to our protagonist, yet when asked how he had discovered the substance, the boy simply claimed that he had used his instincts. Hira concluded that the hero, with a great analytical mind, must have smelled the poison, and while she was busy praising him for his response, Larson tried to figure out where she had pulled out the glasses from. Hira stated that it was her duty as a shadow to make sure that her young master gained strength. She then turned into his mother, and revealed how she had taken extra care of her dish. Lady Soso smiled and thanked the maid for this special attention. Later on, the cup tried to reassure its owner that it shouldn't fear poison, especially something as weak as Saken, with it inside his body. Yet from the looks of it, it seemed like the legendary artifact was pretty high on this weak poison. At that moment, Ludia entered the room. She wanted to know when they would be leaving, and asked if they could depart at once in order to have cake. So the boy explained how this would be impossible, as the teleportation gates weren't available right now. And so Ludia declared that she would sleep at once, so that the next day could dawn faster. It was important to note that the author was originally a broke man, and not a billionaire, which means you didn't want any 10-year-olds in his bed. As soon as she was called, the maid appeared out of nowhere, startling our hero. She was then asked to quietly transport the girl to her bed, without waking her up. Before our hero could even realize it, Ludia began to levitate. And with that being said, as the two ladies quickly exited his room, the young master was left amazed. The next day finally arrived. Hampton apologized to the lady, seeing how they would be traveling by carriage. In this poorly written world, nobles have access to mana-powered cars, but since they were a luxury, Soso wasn't allowed in one, as it would make the other wives jealous. And the jealousy of Decatra's ladies was the last thing our hero needed at the moment. Just like that, our hero took his first step into independence, as he would now be going to the Sade family, in order to achieve his goal. And so, after a long road, our hero and his mother, as well as their servants, finally arrived at their destination. As soon as he set foot on the ground, someone rushed to greet our hero. Cassine was happy to see his friend return so soon. Larson replied with a smile that he was here to fulfill his promise. The two boys were eager to duel. Everything was going according to our hero's plan. Larson even affirmed to the young swordsman that things would be different from their first confrontation, as he wanted to demonstrate his power. After his first duel with the novel protagonist, our hero had acquired the second circle, as well as a better grip over his magic combat techniques. Now he even possessed the holy grail of transcendence, as well as physical strengthening magic and transcendent magic. Larson was eager to test himself against someone like Cassine, who he knew very well was invincible, as this is simply how this character had been created. Cassine Sade was described as someone who couldn't lose to an opponent of the same age as him. Even if no genius could shine in his presence, Cassine kept giving it his all. Cassine Sade represents both immeasurable talent and unbeatable hard work. Seeing how Larson was 10 years old as well, it was safe to say that his opponent had also sharpened his skills. Next thing he knew, a red dot appeared out of nowhere, as the young swordsman used his solid thrust. While dodging the incoming blade, the protagonist began to think of how Cassine had greatly gained in power and speed after the last encounter. At that moment, flow slowly was triggered. Larson was able to predict his opponent's next move based on his position. He realized that he was going to use a thrust as a feint, before unleashing the real strike. He also predicted that evading the incoming attack would force Cassine to shorten the distance between them. The speed of the swordsman was truly terrifying, as even flow slowly seemed ineffective against it. Cassine then decided to use his sword chi, yet this accidental move would turn out to be beneficial for our hero. The boy quickly realized this mistake. After all, since sword chi was prohibited in duels, Cassine must now be distracted by his own mistake. In other words, now was the perfect time for our hero to launch the counterattack. The swordsman quickly noticed the incoming danger. Seeing how his opponent was trying to evade his attack, the mage decided to pressure him even further. Cassine had predicted that his opponent rushing at him was about to lose his balance, giving him the perfect opportunity to make a counterattack. At that moment, our hero focused his magic and used his mana utilization. With that being said, he rushed at his opponent with all of his might. This greatly amazed the swordsman, as Larson didn't lose his balance. The boy was unable to dodge, and so he was left with no choice but to try to block the incoming attack. The clash between the two children created a horrifyingly powerful shockwave. It was so strong that it stunned the adults and left them in awe. Cassine, who wasn't used to fighting magic combat techniques, had taken slight damage and realized that he would lose if he lost his focus. The swordsman then asked the mage about his great improvement, so he explained that his technique had a fast growth rate. Cassine pointed out that he was much stronger than the last time, making Larson claim that he still had much more to show him. The combat king couldn't help but applaud the performance of the young man. According to him, his niece would have lost the duel as soon as Cassine started to swing his sword. Yet, as he started to imagine a world where Larson was part of his family, the man started to blame himself for wishing for the son of the enemy. Meanwhile, the patriarch began to think of how his son would absolutely obliterate the little mage if this were a fight to the death. Even so, it was a surprise to still see him predict the movements of his opponent, allowing him to use sword chi to his advantage. The smile that he cracked made it obvious that he didn't pull this off by chance, and was a sign of great maturity. Kusina started to wonder why the mages of the heavens had truly sent his son to him. Shortly after, the two 10-year-olds tried to catch their breath. The duel was finally over. Cassine explained that he didn't expect magic combat techniques to have such a high growth rate, and as he pointed out that he had lost the duel, he explained that victory was pointless in their fight. The swordsman then expressed how happy he was to see his friend get so strong. According to the system, Cassine had the power to best anyone his age. Seeing how this was a fundamental rule of this world, it meant that our hero could never beat the protagonist, who would continue to grow even stronger. Larson then asked his friend to contain his joy, as they were most likely to end up as enemies by a twist of fate. After all, the two of them belonged to enemy houses. Cassine explained that he couldn't care less about that, as Larson pointed out that he too would like to retain their friendship. Yet, in a world where every great family fights for power, they would never be truly free to remain friends. At that moment, Cassine's father approached them and praised both of their performances. Larson felt honored by the praise of the patriarch, who pointed out how magic combat techniques truly evolved at a quick rate. Our hero affirmed that he wanted to gain power. In fact, he even revealed his wish to one day become stronger than his friend. The friend in question was intrigued by this. Cassine was pleased by the fire that he saw in our hero's eyes and found him to be a worthy rival for his son. Yet, when asked about the means that he would use to reach his goal, the protagonist explained that he wanted to learn martial arts from the combat king, leaving the man speechless. Magner was left annoyed by the fact that the boy had declared this out loud in front of the patriarch, as it meant that he would be forced to treat him fairly in front of the swordsmanship family. It was a shock, as him being his master could be seen as the Grandels absorbing the Maitons, and yet he still made it public. The combat king agreed to become the boy's master but asked him if he had gotten the blessing of his family, and to the patriarch's shock, it turned out that Decatra himself had allowed his son to learn martial arts. This left him completely baffled, as this didn't resemble the mage of the heavens at all. The combat king then revealed to the young man that he needed to take a test in order to learn martial arts. According to the system, this was a test that all the members of the martial arts family needed to take in order to become successors. The test was strictly reserved for children, and forced them to hunt one of two beasts with no help from adults. The two beasts in question were the red and white tiger. Magner then concluded that the boy who chose the white tiger must have gathered some intel about his family, as he made his choice before the explanations. Larson then asked for permission to take his friend with him, as this one wondered if white tigers were actually powerful. Cassine was left quite amazed upon learning that they were fantastic beasts that could grow up to be colossal cats. At that moment, the combat king smiled. The master explained to the student that he hadn't given him a choice to begin with, and ordered him to go after the red tiger. Our hero smiled and immediately accepted. It was at that moment that Magner realized he had been manipulated once again by our protagonist, who had planned this from the start. The original goal of Larson was to go after the red tiger, as it would be more discreet than going after its white counterpart. With that being said, the combat king had no choice but to praise his crafty student. He then started to realize something horrifying, as he might have taken a genius beyond him under his wing. And so shortly after, while enjoying snacks, Cassine understood that their mission was similar to camping. As our hero confirmed, the boy explained how this would be his first time visiting Garon, which was rumored to have incredible mountain ranges. The red tigers dwelled in the Terran mountain range, which was next to Garon, a city of average size located in the Far East. The dangerous mountain, which was peaceful most of the time due to it being the kingdom of the red tigers, was 4 days' walk away from the city. Ludia asked the protagonist if she could also come to their playdate, making him affirm that this was no game. Yet, seeing how she insisted on going with them, Larson had no choice but to agree, but stated that she needed the teacher's permission first. The next day, the process of magic was shown once again. Larson offered to carry his friend's stuff in his void as well, only for him to politely decline. With that being said, our young heroes finally arrived in the city. The initial plan was to head for the inn first, seeing how the many portals they had crossed had drained their energies, yet Lodia's stomach decided otherwise, and forced them to try and find a restaurant. Our hero was now exploring one of the cities that he had created, yet something felt rather odd, as the streets were completely empty, until they stumbled upon someone. As the protagonist tried to get some basic information, that person seemed to be rather stressed out. It came as a shock to the kids, as the man told them to flee this place at once. According to him, the bandits were soon to arrive. On top of that problem, Larson was with a hungry 10-year-old girl. Larson then knocked on one of the doors, but seeing how no one was opening to them, things seemed more and more suspicious. This was rather intriguing, as a mid-sized city like Garan should be somewhat safe, meaning that no regular bandit could cause such a commotion. When suddenly, a cutting presence was felt. Our heroes immediately took a defensive stance. In front of them stood a giant crimson feline. They were now in front of a red tiger. The beast wasn't alone, as it seemed to have its rider with it. The protagonist immediately used his heavenly eyes, and was left greatly shocked. As for some reason Caden the Tamer, who was a good hunter, and whom he remembered writing about vaguely, was now in front of him. That man belonged to a huge bandit group known as the Scent of the Pine Trees, which was completely different from the three main families. Caden, who would obviously become their leader later on, was the one terrorizing the average-sized city on his own. Stumbling upon these unknown kids greatly intrigued the hunter. Cassine asked the tiger rider if he was the bandit who was terrorizing the locals. Being called a bandit greatly offended the man, and out of nowhere, he started to laugh hysterically. Caden then firmly affirmed to the kids that he was no thief, but a man-hunter. The author realized that even with the novel's protagonist by his side, fighting the tamer now would result in their defeat. He then asked him who had given him the right to hunt in the city. Caden explained that no one was above him, and that he was free to hunt wherever he wanted. Larson then noticed how a city like Garan should easily have 7 powerful swordsmen who would stop the bandits' havoc. From that point on, the thief could give them one of 2 answers. The first being that he was here after striking a secret contract, and the second being that this was a result of all the variables our hero had created. Seeing how he understood this on his own, time suddenly stopped, as the tiger charged at him and his friends. As soon as he was granted his creator's privilege, the author decided to act at once. The system wanted him to give the story a plausible reason why the thief was roaming free in the city, without the authorities intervening. Larson knew exactly how to fill this plot hole, and with that being said, the time stream resumed. Unbound by the chains of time, the tiger roared fiercely. The savage beast launched itself at the children, but the kids were quick, and were able to dodge the incoming attack. The young man didn't expect the red tiger to be this fast. It was really hard for him to see that his allies were unarmed. With that being said, he asked them to focus. He pointed out how they were now facing a red tiger that was powerful enough to kill them with a single attack. Yet Larson, who was explaining in detail the characteristics of the enemy, had forgotten that he had a hungry airhead in his party. Having more stomach than brain cells, Ludia decided to act at once, and cast her fireball. Our hero desperately tried to stop her, but the girl wanted to end the fight as soon as possible in order to go eat, and thus she decided to let the beast have a little taste of her fire magic. But just as it seemed as if the fight was over, the red tiger took this a little too literally, and actually swallowed the fireball. The hunter found the talent of the young ones commendable, and offered them to join Scent of the Pine Trees, while promising their safety. When asked about it, Caden revealed that this group was the main power of the mountain range. Yet in the eyes of Cassine, they were nothing but an abandoned group, making the hunter point out once again that he doesn't like this term. The swordsman firmly gripped his weapon and rejected the proposal, while swearing to execute all who terrorize this city by his sword. At that moment, Caden explained that this declaration was no different from a death wish, but only then did the hero point out how odd all of this was. The man in front of them didn't bother to ask the 3 10-year-olds who could face off against his tiger about their identities. Larson smirked as what he had written in the notebook was now benefiting him. Back then, he had written something very special in the book. The reason why the knights hadn't stopped the bandit was because he wasn't actually hunting humans, but giving someone a test. The martial arts tests were always planned from the start, which is why Rosalind was able to take on a white tiger on her own for hers. From that, Larson pointed out how the tamer must already be aware of their names. He even pointed out that the man was putting on a great act, based on someone else's demand. Larson had an idea about who this someone could possibly be. At that moment, a portal opened in the sky. From it, a blonde lady appeared. Evelia Mayton had now entered the scene. Our hero had correctly guessed that his older sister was behind all of this. And while he was happy that his theory turned out to be true, his best friend started to simp over his sister. Larson had realized that this situation was way too peaceful not to be a setup. After all those in charge of portal gates are 3rd circle mages and higher, and no bandit would even dare to harm the business of the great mage family. The most intriguing part was that all citizens started to flee the city and lock themselves in just because a bandit was running free in their streets. To top it all off, Caden was still a small name, who still hadn't taunted any human at this point in time. Garen wasn't the type of city to offer itself to anyone for the sake of an exam, and so only one possibility was left on the table. Our heroes must be inside a simulation of the real city, and the only individual capable of creating such a construct was the sorceress of the end herself. Ivelia commended the quick mind of her brother and asked him how he had noticed. As the protagonist pointed out that he had uncovered everything from the beginning, his sister realized that he had only fought the tiger because he wanted to. Larson confirmed, claiming that he wanted to show his motivation for the exam. With that being said, the mage asked the martial artist his opinion regarding this matter. Magner had no choice but to give all of them a passing grade. Caden then commended the two sons of the great reputable family, seeing how they stood their ground in front of the red tiger. The man then bowed down and apologized to Larson for being rude, but the boy claimed that there was no need, as he was only doing what he was told. It immediately showed that among the three kids, the Maton was the team leader. This was rather surprising, as one would expect Casson, who was the strongest, to be the one in command. The combat king, who had been looking forward to teaching the young man, pointed out that normally one isn't forced onto a red or white tiger during the test, so Casson immediately concluded that the point of this exam was to test their courage. He then shocked the protagonist by pointing out that the guardian spirits of his house must also be nearby. Intrigued, Larson quickly used his heavenly eyes. Casson was a 10-year-old boy, and yet he was still able to read their situation better than the author himself. Larson, fully aware that under normal circumstances he would have fainted after seeing the tiger, the combat king was then left disappointed, as the novel's protagonist revealed that he only attacked the tiger after noticing his spirit guardians. It was at this moment that Casson explained how only a fool chooses solitude, as unity was the path to victory. According to this child, the only way to give life meaning was to have people on his side who would make up for the areas where he gravely lacked. This young man wasn't ashamed of his weakness. In fact, as soon as he discovered the guardian spirits, he immediately placed his faith in them. As Larson agreed with his friend, Avelia began to think about how this wasn't a philosophy that a Maton child should accept. After all, if she were in his place, she would have immediately rejected it. Yet for some reason, hearing those words coming from Casson placed a sudden weight on her heart. And with that being said, a new variable sparked in the story. This greatly shocked the author, who couldn't uncover what it was, as his heavenly eyes were still too weak. Despite not liking this logic, the combat king affirmed to the boy that the spirit guardians could be considered a part of his power. When asked if he had also noticed the spirit guardians, Larson claimed that he was able to figure out that much. He then pointed out that he was a Maton, who was currently residing with the renowned swordsmanship family. According to him, if he ever got hurt on a trip with the Saldo child, his family would gain a great advantage, on top of shattering the pride of the Saldo house. This statement greatly startled his sister. Avelia affirmed that they couldn't possibly take advantage of such a situation, and that it would even be seen as an insult to them. So Larson explained to his sister how the two of them were different. Unlike her, he was a nobody in the family, who had been living the life of an exile not long ago. In case someone like him met his fate after an unexpected accident, the Maton family would be glad, as it would lose its dead weight, on top of giving them a rightful reason to blame the Sades. Avelia couldn't believe that her 10-year-old brother was saying such harsh things about their family with such a calm expression. Larson then clarified that he wasn't speaking out of spite, but was just trying to adopt his family's objective point of view. And so before he could even realize it, he found himself in the arms of the sorceress of the end. She explained that no matter what, he was still a Maton, and that it was horrifying to hear such words from someone this young. As she then pointed out how she didn't want their family name to become a burden to him, the little brother thanked his older sister. At that moment, our hero noticed some kind of weird aura coming from his best friend. Cassin declared that he wished to be part of the protagonist's family. Larson was left completely clueless, as his friend declared that he would give him all the affection that he desired. And just as our hero began to bug out, as he didn't expect the situation to get this chummy, he suddenly found himself getting hugged by Ludia. The girl was still hungry. Seeing how they had completed the test, she asked if they could finally go and get some food. Larson claimed that this wouldn't be a bad idea. A few days had passed since then. Larson barged into his master's bath, claiming that he wished to go to the Terran mountain range. According to him, there was a splendid view there. Larson wanted to see the real deal after experiencing the simulation made by his sister. The combat king assumed that his student wanted to go on vacation, only for the boy to affirm that it wasn't the case. Larson then claimed that he had located something in the artificial space that his sister had prepared for him. Yet naturally, none of this was true. Larson, who wanted to abuse his omnipotency as the author, claimed that there was something special there that could only be found in these specific mountains. He explained that it was also present in the simulation, as he could feel a strange energy coming from it. Larson then claimed that Avelia told him, through their family's particular way of communicating, that she had left something there for him. The hypocrite master found this rather odd, as it meant that the maidens had spoken to each other via telepathy, despite having done the same a few chapters ago. Larson explained that he had no problem revealing something so crucial to the man, seeing as he was his master. According to the boy, there were two main reasons behind his sister using a cryptid way of communication. He claimed that the first reason was that they wanted to keep the secret from Casson, as he was still the son of a rival family. As for the second, it was supposed to be a test of cleverness, to see if he would actually understand. Larson explained that he didn't know what kind of item had been left for him in the mountains, yet he was given its approximate location. Yet the boy who was asked about its placement was, in fact, lying, as he was well aware of the exact coordinates. Larson wanted to steal yet another item from Casson's future by taking the 1,000-year dragon's chestplate for himself. He also knew that having his master by his side would make things much safer, and so he told him they would be heading to Mount Dragonhead. This greatly shocked the naked martial artist, as he had some memories of that particular place. A little later, after crossing the portal, the boy expressed his desire to rest, as they had passed through many of those. He stated that he knew very well that their time was precious, but pointed out that it was a 3-day walk to their destination, which confused his master, as the Combat King claimed that it should only take them a single day. Our hero pointed out that this would only be possible for him. Magner decided to lead the way, and explained to his angry student that he would be truly pathetic if he couldn't keep up with an old man like him. Larson tried to argue that he was a mage, and as his master stated that he should simply use teleportation, our hero affirmed that it was still impossible for him. With that being said, the Combat King affirmed that the only choice the protagonist had was to man up. Larson was now out of breath. The heavy burden inflicted upon him by his crazy master was likely to take his life before he could even reach his destination. The protagonist then fell to his knees. Something then started to rise. His master started to criticize him for his weakness, as he puked his guts out. Yet even after saying this, Magner was genuinely surprised by how far the boy was able to walk. He was well aware that his niece would have collapsed by now, and found him quite impressive, as despite having some fighting spirit, he was still a mage at base. The Combat King then pointed out that the boy was far too weak to be his student, so Larson pointed out that this would mean going back on his public word. At that moment, Magner was left truly shocked, yet when asked about it, he quickly brushed it off. The man was genuinely stunned to see that his pupil had already caught his breath, and started to wonder about the heights that he could reach if he had fighting spirit. With that being said, he urged the student to get up already, as they still had a long walk, yet our hero explained once again that it should take 3 days, as according to him, this would be a regular time for a matin. Later on, as big steps were being taken at an incredible speed, smaller feet desperately tried to keep up. The Combat King was walking horrifyingly fast on the gravel, and wasn't even leaving a cloud of dust behind him. Only then did our hero realize something. As his master had become like wind, Larson just realized that there was a small breeze coming from behind him. He started to wonder what would happen if instead of using his mana to power his body, he used it to focus the energy of the wind inside of him. And upon putting it to the test, the results were truly remarkable. Larson was now having a much easier time moving. According to the system, he unlocked a new form of combat attitude utilization, allowing him to acquire wind attribute utilization. The author didn't expect to unlock such a power. The technique attribute utilization was then uploaded into his heart. Larson was well aware that his attribute magic was far weaker than that of Ludia, yet he could still make use of it by using his transcendent mana. According to him, a magician that wished to learn martial arts should be able to do that much. At that moment, the Combat King realized that his student had acquired a new skill, and so, a little later, our hero finally collapsed on the ground and found himself unable to move a muscle, as he had emptied the holy grail of transcendence of its power. The 10-year-old affirmed to his teacher that he couldn't walk any further, before finally losing consciousness. Little did he know his achievement had left his master stunned, as despite being his age, he had walked 100 kilometers in 15 minutes. The young man had now fallen asleep. Back in the day, Magner and his brother were taught that their failures would always be the fruit of their own incompetence. The old man started to recall his childhood, and realized something important. Neither he nor his brother would have been able to walk 100 kilometers in such a short time at that age. The master was certain that his student would get more used to the movement the more he exercised. Later on, our hero was woken up in a brutal manner. Upon opening his eyes, he found his old master grabbing him by the foot like a small dead animal. Magner explained how he was forced to use his old used-up body in order to drag his incompetent student to their destination, which drained his energy. The Combat King then asked the young man to do what needed to be done, as he was nothing but his escort. Teacher and pupil had finally reached Mount Dragonhead. The protagonist decided to make it seem as if he was searching for the item, while pointing out the abandoned town ahead that his master didn't think much of. Larson was confused, as he was told that his master had a past here, yet Magner decided to keep this to himself. Our hero decided to explore the area for a bit, making his master claim that he couldn't care less. Later on, the Heavenly Eye revealed to our hero how he was now in a place called Old Bandit Town. 30 years ago, this village of bandits was stumbled upon by the Combat King, who executed more than 10 thieves with just his hands. According to the system, his massacre was never made public. Larson was left greatly shocked, as he was certain that his mentor wouldn't get all nostalgic just from a place where he killed bandits. So the system explained to him how this was the place where he first saw someone called Mai. Magner immediately fell for her and went on his rampage in order to save her from the bandits who had kidnapped the young lady. Yet Mai was under the effect of a powerful poison. In the end, the woman met her end before the Combat King could even get her out of the mountains. This made Larson realize that his master had chosen a life of solitude because he was still grieving his first love. Our hero asked his master if this place was even special, so Magner pointed out how he had brought him here in order to discover this. Larson asked his master for help, but the man refused to get involved. And with that being said, the pupil decided to explore more of the area, while the old master declared that he would go rest. A little later, while taking a walk, the man stopped in front of a particular well that was still here after 30 years, seeing how this place was abandoned after all. According to Magner, this well reeked of death, as he had thrown the bodies of the bandits in it, though he wasn't certain that they were bandits in the first place. The martial artist then decided to use his abilities in order to observe the inside of the hole. What he saw inside left him speechless. The mountains of bones he left inside were now nowhere to be seen, making him think that someone had stolen them. According to Magner, if someone had actually taken the corpses, they would have placed some kind of protection around the well. And from the looks of it, he seemed to be right, as there was in fact a barrier shielding the well. The man was now certain that there were no corpses left in the well, and began to wonder if the barrier was to keep intruders out. Despite not knowing what exact purpose the barrier served, the man decided to break it at once, when all of a sudden he was interrupted by his student. At last, Larson found the bloodied well where the 1,000-year dragon chestplate was hidden. But to our hero's shock, his eyes revealed to him how the well was being protected by the power of a barrier arts expert. So the boy quickly asked his master if he was knowledgeable about barrier arts experts, which was a question that confused him. The master was once again blown away by the cleverness of his pupil, who was able to realize that he had already sensed the barrier. Magner stated that, as a martial artist, he didn't know anything about barriers. The boy pointed out that it was odd to see one set up on an abandoned hole. Barrier art experts were extremely expensive, and the barrier in front of them seemed to be more than a decade old, which didn't make any sense. Magner admired the genius of his student once again. According to Larson, the well had cast the barrier on itself, which the master found ridiculous, as it would mean that it was a sentient being, and as he was about to defend his argument, he suddenly started to recall how he had killed the bandits 30 years ago. Magner had met Mai near the well. The girl had been poisoned by the bandits. To top it all off, Mai had met him and before evening, made it out to the mountains. And with that being said, the Combat King finally came to a realization, as back then, the poisoned lady shouldn't have been able to move, and yet she was easily walking around the well. Larson revealed that only an object that had a special setting would be able to set a barrier around itself. He decided to reveal some truths to his master, who didn't seem like the talkative type. And as he announced to the old man that he was about to reveal to him his deepest secret, the master was left quite intrigued. The protagonist declared that he had special eyes that could spot the unknown, and as proof of what he was saying, he revealed that this well had some kind of connection to the name Mai. This hole the sorceress of the end wanted to show her brother was known as the Bloodied Well. Magner had met his first love 30 years ago, so this didn't make sense, as she died 20 years before the birth of our hero. Magner grew certain that his student, who pointed out the lack of blood inside the well, was telling the truth. The Combat King then asked the boy if he could see anything else, yet this was all the heavenly eyes could reveal to Larson, who now needed to figure things out on his own. Suddenly something emerged from the well. Some kind of unknown smoke appeared out of nowhere. From it, a figure began to emerge. Upon seeing her gorgeous eyes and her black charcoal-like hair, both the Combat King and his student were left absolutely stunned. Mai, who had died 30 years ago, was now in front of him. It had been decades since the two of them had met. Larson immediately recognized the one in front of him as Mai, and quickly realized that she was no ordinary woman. He became even more certain that she was a yokai, and that the smoke from earlier was some kind of seductive pheromones. Mai, who pointed out how the Combat King was different from before, asked him if she was still on his mind. Magner revealed that it was still the case. The human had become old while the yokai had gained in beauty. Larson was certain that his master wouldn't treat this lady like a normal person, seeing how she was his first love. Magner immediately pointed out how he was now feeling relieved, so Mai asked him to elaborate. After 30 years of torment, the man was finally free from his greatest regret, which was his failure to save Mai. With that being said, the yokai gently hugged the martial artist from behind, and proposed to have some fun together. She explained that after growing old, he now seemed much more virile. Mai claimed that she wanted him more than ever, and wanted the two of them to melt into each other for all of eternity. At that moment, the master requested the attention of his student, who was too young for this. Suddenly Magner grabbed Mai by the neck, and started to choke her. It was at that moment that the master decided to use this opportunity to teach his first lesson. He explained that the thing that he was holding was a spirit known as a yokai. There existed two ways of getting rid of such creatures, with the first being hitting it with enough physical force, and the second using mana, or fighting spirit. At that moment she expressed how surprised she was, as she didn't expect the old man to be into rough play. The man was now about to demonstrate to Larson the basic technique of his family, and one of the basic volitions. Larson could easily tell that a scary amount of fighting spirit was being used, and with that being said, the martial artist unleashed his attack upon the creature. Not even the yokai grasped the nature of its injuries. Meanwhile, Larson had been baffled, as this was no regular punch. The Combat King had torn a hole in space at the exact coordinates of the spirit, ending her, even as the man was supposed to be in love with her. But the man in question was focused on teaching his pupil the first method to deal with such spirits. Larson quickly understood that the method consisted of using so much force that the space of the spirit itself shatters. And with that being said, the 10-year-old rushed at the evil spirit and punched it as hard as he could. Moshe was infuriated that someone as beautiful as her shouldn't be taking such a savage hit from men. Having resorted to too much mana, our protagonist started to feel a weird sensation in his chest. At that moment, the yokai came to a realization. She claimed that her beauty had caused a dispute between the two men, and that they had a competition that consisted of killing her as a way to reconcile. And with that being said, the creature began to disappear, leaving behind nothing but one limb. Larson quickly ended it, as his teacher praised him for his performance. Our hero then turned to his master with a smug face and asked for the reason he didn't terminate the yokai with a single strike. Larson started to teach the Combat King about him, still having feelings for the evil spirit. This earned the brat a well-deserved punch to the head. Larson, now in pain, was left quite shocked, as the hit was so fast that his iron wheel didn't even activate. Meanwhile, the Combat King was shocked that his student had read through him once again. He began to think of how the way our protagonist attacked the spirit wasn't similar to either magic or martial arts. The boy had simply concentrated all of his power into his fist, before detonating the focused energy upon impact. The arm of an irregular mage wouldn't survive such a maneuver. In other words, the strength and endurance of the young boy's body was a total mystery to the Combat King. As Magner stated that now came the time for the second lesson, our hero decided to try and guess it. The intrigued master urged the student to amaze him. According to the image, the next lesson was to teach him how to conceal his eyes, as from what he knew, his siblings might grow jealous of his gift. The Combat King was intrigued but not displeased by how much faith his student had in him, making him wonder even more about this black sheep of the Mayton family. Upon finally entering the domain, supposedly prepared by the sorceress of the end for her little brother, the master theorized that it was an artificial dungeon. Such places were in fact virtual spaces that mages construct for certain purposes. So Larson claimed that this was a natural dungeon modified by his sister. Magner stated that Avelia should just drop the act and simply give the item to her younger brother, and that she was still crazy. The boy then claimed that his sister must have good intentions before pointing out the presence of a guardian down there. And with that being said, the boy jumped into the pit. After a small silence, and upon realizing that waiting would be way too boring, the master jumped right behind his student. The hole went deep. While falling, Magner began to think of how the bandits that he had killed 30 years ago were nothing more than an illusion set by the yokai. He began to think of how such a powerful spirit was still undiscovered, and theorized that the sorceress of the end should have terminated it if she truly came here. At that moment, the system alerted the protagonist of someone called the Settings Destroyer, doubting his lies. This left him quite anxious, but the boy quickly realized that the Settings Destroyer was none other than his master, and upon seeing that the probability was degrading due to the doubt, the author was left horrified. At that moment, the character book appeared in his hand. According to the original novel, no one had set foot near the well for 30 years after the Combat King himself. The story demanded a reason for why the well had remained undiscovered. Larson needed to think carefully, as in the original story his protagonist finds this place while working with yokai hunters, and so he wrote that only those with the heavenly eyes were able to perceive the well. And with that being said, the probability reversed back to normal. The author was excited, thinking that he would once again get the privilege of writing a new line. Yet, seeing how nothing was happening, he assumed that what he had written wasn't the perfect answer. He also realized that he must always stay wary, as over-tampering with the probability could cause this world to shatter. And with that being said, our hero finally landed on the ground. After a long fall, he was finally in the forgotten thousand-year dragon's nest. The master then asked his student for the reason he wasn't using magic. According to him, mages normally use searching or exploration spells in such situations. Larson, who was currently a second circle, claimed that he would need to be at least a third circle in order to resort to such spells. This greatly intrigued the master, as his student had enough energy to fill 3 circles, and yet was perfectly healthy. Magner proposed going to do some recon, but the boy explained that his sister must have adjusted this place to his capabilities. At that moment, the master asked his student to at least ignite a fire for light using his magic, as it was a basic spell. Yet Larson, who didn't want to admit that he sucked at magic, claimed that inside a dungeon he should save his mana as much as possible. And with that being said, student and master roamed in darkness. The cave was particularly humid, but the treasure should be nearby. Only then did our hero notice the pond. Suddenly, a mysterious voice tried to chase them away, and while the master was intrigued, the pupil claimed that his sister had chosen an entertaining asset to protect the treasure. It was a golem known as the Bronze Giant that cruelly lacked the size of a real one, as it was nothing but a replica of the real deal. The Bronze Giant was trying to use his authority as the guardian of this place to chase the old man and the child away. The Combat King affirmed to his student that he had no choice but to beat that thing. Yet the protagonist refused to back down. The golem was slowly getting angry, as the humans weren't listening to his warnings. The boy knew very well that the slightest mistake here could be fatal, which is why he made sure that his master was with him. Larson only had one shot at this. Back in the original story, even Kassin almost lost his life to the powerful attacks of the Bronze Giant. That same attack that almost took out the all-powerful novel protagonist was now swiftly evaded by our hero. Larson knew very well how to protect himself from the monster that he had created. With that being said, the Bronze Giant stood ready for combat. Now, everything was in place. The 10-year-old then promised to take down the giant with a single attack. At that moment, the master felt deep in his bones that he was about to witness something amazing. At that moment, the stone statue unleashed flame magic. Our hero tried his best to evade it, yet he didn't come out unscathed. Larson knew very well that in the original story, the protagonist had suffered much more than this, as he kept on fighting despite his fatal wound. For that reason, our hero only had one chance at this. But unlike Kassin, the mage couldn't afford to try and fight the giant head-on. Thus he had no choice but to resort to self-defense and adopt a different tactic. Larson successfully got himself onto the burning weapon of his opponent, and would be able to withstand the heat for a few seconds due to his defensive technique. But as he began to think that his main goal should be to focus on the joints of the golem, he realized that the monster had swung him into the wall. The intrigued master watched the fight in silence. Upon seeing what happened next, he was left somewhat amazed. His student, who had timed things perfectly, was able to climb on top of the giant's head, and in the original story, the novel protagonist resorted to his blade in order to take down the joints of the creature. The joints were the ultimate weakness of the powerful warrior. They were also the sole way to take him down. With that being said, our hero began to channel his inner power and decided to use the technique that his master taught him in order to one-shot the joint. When all of a sudden, something came flying towards him from the ceiling. The arrow, covered in a weird substance, passed right by him. This was none other than a poisonous arrow that never made it to the official story and was stuck in the setup. Larson's mistake was only focusing on the giant and forgetting about his surroundings. And with that being said, he was thrown off the giant's head. It seemed like our protagonist had underestimated the situation. Even so, the master was left amazed. As the giant arm of bronze hit the water, he began to think of how extraordinary it was that his pupil was able to take out one of the giant slimes. In the fraction of a second before being sent flying, Larson was able to channel all of his energy into his fist. He then used his attack in order to deflect the sword of the bronze giant. The boy, who had now missed his chance and was asking his teacher for help, only flew away due to the recoil of his own attack. Magner claimed him to be truly pathetic for struggling against such an opponent, but the boy claimed that he was forced to burn through a lot of mana. Even so, the teacher was entertained, and so he decided to step in and show himself. As soon as the old man unveiled his power, the boy was left stunned. This was the overwhelming fighting spirit of his master, only this time it was much fiercer and more intense than before. The bronze giant immediately recognized the danger and quickly rushed to attack him. Magner simply looked at it and ordered it to crumble, and just like that, the almighty bronze giant exploded into a million pieces. Even the author couldn't believe his eyes as he finally realized what the system meant by the authority of a supreme being. This made him doubt himself and his ability to survive his crazy world. Meanwhile, outside of the well, the two shadows of the young master were quickly progressing through the forest. The younger one demanded a little break, but the assassin urged him to stop being so pathetic. Hampton claimed that he was perfectly normal, and that it was her who was exceptional, when all of a sudden she ordered him to stop. 2 days ago, the young master ordered her to wait 2 days before joining him at this precise location, and claimed that the well would be the entrance to the dungeon. The assassin immediately realized that a battle had recently occurred near the well. In other words, this must be the right entrance to the dungeon. Meanwhile, back inside, our hero, who had the holy grail of transcendence, was able to survive the poisonous arrow. Larson stated that his master should have helped him sooner, only for the latter to claim himself to be a frail old man. The author then pretended to theorize that the presence of the bronze giant meant that there was a treasure nearby. With that being said, the protagonist decided to go find the treasure at once, but before going, he pointed out how odd it was. As he claimed that there was some kind of weird oil covering the robot, the master was left quite amazed, as it had no smell. Larson had noticed this special oil, common to the southern regions, covering the golem while on top of it. Its main function was to protect metal from rust. This was rather intriguing, as despite its oil coat, the bronze giant was still rusty. As the boy started to mumble to himself, the old man started to have flashbacks. Back then, another young maiden had almost achieved her goal. Ivelia claimed that she was only a few centimeters away from killing the old man, who didn't even bother to dodge her puny spells. Ivelia promised to take the life of the Combat King next time, and revealed how she had theorized that her dark magic would work better in this rather dry place. Back to the present, the boy theorized that since the oil was weak to poison, it meant that the rest of the way was filled with it. The master, who began to think of how this was truly the younger brother of the sorceress of the end, confirmed that the way ahead was poisonous. To make things worse, it wasn't the same poison as the one on the arrow. It was some kind of numbing poison that would leave the consumer paralyzed for life. For some reason, the old man smirked, claiming that he would be powerless against this, seeing how he had no magic. But to his shock, his young student revealed that he had a backup plan. Meanwhile, outside of the well, the boy with dark skin asked if this was truly the dungeon entrance, and before he could even realize it, he was kicked into the hole. Hira apologized to him, but she claimed that her hands were tied, seeing how they were racing against the clock. Larson explained that for every poison, there must be at least one antidote. With that being said, the two shadows finally landed at the bottom. The horrified boy screamed at his colleague, claiming that she was trying to murder him, when, all of a sudden, she pulled out her knife. Hira claimed that she would surely murder him if he didn't start moving immediately, and stated that pain was greatly beneficial. Hampton was fully aware that his colleague wasn't bluffing. She had now revealed her true cold self, as back in the past she would have treated him with more kindness. Only then did the old man notice someone coming. Larson was expecting them. Just like that, his shadows finally arrived at the scene. Magnur's eye was immediately caught by the maid. As the boy pointed out that these were the shadows appointed to him by his father, the man couldn't help but let out a fake laugh. According to him, one's strength is usually revealed by his aura, but someone with a strong aura wasn't particularly a threat. The real problem was those with no aura at all, as such concealment demanded a high level of mastery. As the Combat King claimed Hira to be the best assassin he had met, she quickly deflected the compliment, making him point out her incredible humility. After all, pride was the death of the assassin. The old man then turned his attention to the poison master next to the assassin. When asked if he was the other shadow, Hampton affirmed this with all of his heart. Yet the Combat King had his doubts about the boy even being useful to his young master, seeing how he was clearly a coward. Later on, the master guessed that his student had brought his shadow in order to deal with the poison. The one with dark skin explained that he was prepared to remove the poison from the air, but had the ability to create an antidote to protect the two of them. At that moment, Larson gave his servant headpats and praised him for his efforts and good work. By the side of the protagonist, even the cowardly shadow could draw out the courage within himself. Later on, Hampton created a ball that would allow the young master to gain poison immunity, as long as he kept it in his mouth. The boy then strictly insisted on the fact that this ball shouldn't be swallowed. In the original novel, Casson suffered a 3-day sickness because of this poison, yet since he was the author, our hero had nothing to fear, and thus he took the antidote, and decided to go on his way. Magnur then called out his student for making a fuss over this weak poison, so this one decided to remain silent. And with that being said, master and student began to progress through the venomous cloud. After a short while, they had finally arrived at their destination. The 1,000-year dragon's chestplate was now near. All of a sudden, the door in front of them opened. At that very instant, the eyes of the protagonist widened. The chestplate that he was after was finally in front of him. By simply laying his eyes upon it, our hero was left overjoyed. The armor was a thin piece of cloth that functioned like armor and could protect the heart at least once. But only then did the boy notice something intriguing. Some weird letters appeared around the chestplate, while the system claimed that only the true successors had the ability to read them. After quickly analyzing the situation, Larson concluded that his master, who was contemplating the artifact, didn't have the ability to perceive the letters. Seeing how this was a feature that he didn't write about, he realized that there were some things in this world that even he, its God, didn't know about. Even so, Larson decided to simply focus on the task ahead by placing the legendary artifact on his chest. And with that being said, the process happened. The cloth turned into a form of magic that would now act as a shield for its new owner. Meanwhile, inside his heart, the Holy Grail of Transcendence was greatly pleased by its new cozy little blanket. With that being said, our hero expressed gratitude towards his sensei and stated that they should go back. Magnur decided to teach the young one an important lesson and explained that gratitude should be expressed with coins. Later on at the Casson residence, while the two boys were bathing, Larson started to show off his new invisible armor to his best friend. Seeing how amazed the novel protagonist was by this, Larson was reminded that Casson was still a kid. Now full of himself, our protagonist asked his friend to punch him in the chest in order to test out his new armor. But the little boy, with his sword out, got overexcited and pulled out a real sword out of nowhere in order to put the armor to the test. And so, as the boys were sword fighting in the bathroom, Ludia expressed her desire to join, only for the maid to forbid her. According to the system, the chest plate was only at 32% of its power, with its complete destruction happening at 0%. Due to the many tests, the durability got slightly decreased, yet it could be recovered by using magic. Later on, the mage asked the swordsman to guard him while he performed his mana-breathing techniques. Cassine couldn't help but feel happy, After all, he got to experience true friendship by trying to stab his friend in the heart. From the looks of it, each minute of mana breathing adds 1% to the durability of the chest plate, meaning that it would take 1 hour to completely charge it. And just like that, after a short while, the durability of the chest plate finally hit 100%. Our hero thanked his friend for guarding him. After all, this noble soul was the novel hero that he had created. The author admired his only good creation with great passion. And with that being said, the boy was left alone. Larson then called Hira. As always, she appeared out of nowhere in order to satisfy the needs of her young master. Larson asked the assassin if she wanted to try and stab his heart with all of her might. Discreet and without a sound, she firmly affirmed that if she were to do so, the young master would have no chance of surviving. Thus, Larson quickly backed down, as even with the mighty protection of the chest plate, Hira was still too scary for him. With that being said, the servant urged her master to quickly gain power. The little boy agreed with the assassin, and thus, he promised to do his best. 1 year had passed since then, and while in the mountains behind the mansion of the swordsmanship family, the master explained to his pupil that he had graduated from basic training, but urged him to remain in his black clothes. Larson was against the idea, as the outfit was heavy, but the old man urged him to man up, as it barely weighed 300 kilograms. The boy tried to argue that he should only wear it for training, but the master affirmed that this outfit was for his daily routine. At that moment, the 11-year-old was stunned to see his sister arrive. Magner called out his student, as he was trying to trick him with the sister stunt once again, but the boy affirmed that he was telling the truth. Ivelia, who had received a letter from her brother, was truly here. A long time had passed since the two siblings had met each other. Our hero, who was about to partake in new adventures, claimed that he had missed Ivelia. The letter from our hero to his sister started with him expressing how much he missed her. This left the sorceress of the end pouting, as she didn't want respect. She explained that she wanted him to treat her as his sister, and that he should love her, but in the end she started to giggle, claiming this to be a joke. When asked if he truly wanted Lydia to go with her, the boy confirmed. Just like he mentioned in his letter, the only way for the girl with a monkey brain to progress even further was to leave this mansion. Ivelia found it intriguing that he wanted her to raise a stranger, so Larson clarified that Lydia was his contractor, who obeyed him, just like he obeyed Ivelia. At that moment, the sorceress of the end understood that the boy was expressing his desire to become one of her people. With that, Ivelia decided to ask her brother an important question. When asked about the past, our protagonist began to panic, as in the end he hadn't progressed at all as a mage. Even so, Larson decided to show his progress to his sister. He started to explain how he was working on making himself a better vessel, as transcended mana and magic combat techniques greatly weighed on the body, but as he kept monologuing while showing off his power, he was suddenly snapped back to earth. Ivelia asked the boy who was in front of him. Our hero claimed the lady to be a maiden, and the best successor to the house, along with a true mage. Thus Ivelia clarified that she was his sister above all, and explained that she wasn't asking about his progress. In fact, she just wanted to see how he was doing, seeing how it had been a year since they had seen each other, which made him realize that his sister had a soft spot for affection. Having realized that he must have been the first of the siblings to send her a letter, Larson offered the sorceress to have dinner together like a family. A warm feeling began to fill the heart of Ivelia. The protagonist even promised to get her flowers from the garden that had freshly bloomed. Later that night, while in bed, our hero began to think of how he needed to prove his progress to someone. The thought invaded his mind, making him unable to sleep. The young master then called forth his assassin, pointing out how she must have overheard his conversation. Hira stated that she would wake him up in the morning so that he could leave early, and pointed out how she would prepare additional emergency rations. And before our hero could even ask Hira about what kind of test she thought his sister would put him through, she suddenly disappeared. Even so, the protagonist was sure of one thing, which was that the test was tailored for his old self, and that his current self would leave Ivelia amazed. As the next day dawned, our hero had already passed part of the test by figuring out what it was. After thinking all night, he had realized that he was required to prove his progress, despite the fact that his manners were still the same. According to him, there was only one way of doing so in a couple of days without disturbing the swordsmanship family. Intrigued, Ivelia asked him about his theory regarding the nature of the test. After carefully analyzing the situation, Larson concluded that he was to hunt poison goblins in the Byron Stone Mountains. In fact, he couldn't think of anything else. Even so, his answer turned out to be correct. And with that being said, the two siblings were ready to depart. Larson just remembered something important and asked for permission to bring Hampton along, leaving his sister intrigued. Later on, the master and the servant were teleported to their destination. This sudden gate crossing greatly disturbed Hampton's stomach. Our heroes were now in the Stone Mountains, surrounded by countless red pine trees. The author had put a lot of effort into creating this place, as red trees symbolize danger, with this forest being one of the deadliest places in the world. Larson was able to conclude that this time his sister wouldn't intervene, even if his life was at stake. The servant then pointed his master to something up front. It was directions leading to the habitat of the poison goblins, but also a warning for visitors to stay away. A few steps later, Hampton found himself out of breath and asked his young master if they were almost there yet. Larson repeated his exact words from an hour ago by claiming that it was around the corner. With that being said, as soon as they arrived, Larson ordered his slave to spread the items just as instructed. It was at this moment that Avelia realized that the shadow wasn't here to fight against the poison goblins. She knew that her brother could never take on all of the poison goblins, which is why she planned on taking care of them after he had proven himself. Yet from the looks of it, Larson seemed to have something up his own sleeve. With that being said, his preparations were finally over. When asked if he could climb, Hampton was ashamed to answer truthfully, and thus Larson quickly got him on his back before starting to climb. The sorceress hadn't expected this. After using a spell to turn herself invisible, she started to admire the newly improved getup of her younger brother. At that moment, the noses of the beasts picked up the scent. Just as planned, a horde of poison goblins were rushing to hunt their prey. The beasts quickly charged ahead. Avelia began to think of how no regular mage would resort to such hunting methods. Larson claimed that he was well aware of this, and explained that he wouldn't serve the sorceress as a mage. Larson aspired to be something more. Shortly after, master and servant watched in silence as the beasts devoured the meat. Avelia finally understood what was happening, and quickly realized that her younger brother had set up a plan to hunt the goblins that move in groups. The boy confirmed this while thinking about how poison goblins were only friendly to those of the same pack as them. His goal was to lure two groups of goblins in order to make one of them attack the other. And with that being said, two gangs stumbled upon each other. The fight was on sight. The creatures began to attack each other. With that, the plan of our hero was finally in motion. The only thing left to do now was to enjoy the spectacle. Members of rival packs truly despised each other. The goblins showcased cruelty and violence towards each other, worthy of humans. Avelia, swiftly dodging the flying flesh, began to count the dead. In the end, only one injured beast remained standing. Having won the fight, it felt proud of itself. The goblin was overjoyed, thinking that he had achieved victory. But little did he know, he wasn't the hunter any longer. The creature suddenly noticed something watching it from behind, and before the beast could even realize it, it found itself getting attacked by an 11-year-old wielding incredible power. And just like that, the top half of the goblin was blown clean off with a single blow. Hampton quickly got down from the tree. The boy found himself disgusted by the butchered goblins. Avelia was quite surprised, as 24 poison goblins had been taken down. She then began to wonder what her father would have thought of all of this, if he were here. Avelia even noticed the artifact on his chest, and estimated that it weighed around 300 kilograms. The boy then theorized that since the goblins were organized in a big horde, there must be a leader hiding somewhere. He had already marked all the caves they had passed by. He promised to show his progress in an image, once they were in front of the goblin leader. Seeing how they were walking toward danger, the shadow couldn't help but tremble. After arriving at the final cave, our heroes were greeted by a disgusting smell. From the looks of it, the tribe chief wasn't a warrior, but a witch doctor. Seeing how he was still hiding, his weapon immediately fell to the ground. The monster, who was truly a witch doctor, started to shiver in the corner. Things were extremely obvious. The goblin had been overwhelmed by the presence of the sorceress of the end. But from the looks of it, Hampton seemed even more frightened than the poor beast. Judging by the bones nearby, it was safe to assume that goblins mainly relied on human flesh for food and furniture. Even so, this matter was of little importance to our protagonist. He decided to end the weak goblin, just as decreed by the law of the jungle. Once outside the cave, the boy explained to his sister how he had demonstrated his magic combat technique. When asked if he had found the courage to casually approach the enemy boss in her presence, Larson confirmed that he was certain his sister would have helped him. Avelia claimed this answer to be rather soft and weak. Even so, she wasn't displeased by it. With that being said, the sorceress left the scene while promising to bring her younger brother presents the next time she came to visit. Larson could see that Avelia was rather happy. With that being said, Hampton asked his young master if they needed to go back to the Sade mansion on foot. This made our hero realize that he had forgotten to fill his servant in, so he explained to him how they would be spending a few days in this forest. Seeing how they had emergency rations, Larson immediately guessed from the reaction of the boy that he wished to return home at once. The hero then explained how he had left Lodia in the hands of his sister, and how the maid would be informed of everything once the girl left. With that, Hampton finally understood that his master wanted to wait for the assassin to come and get them. Larson then declared that this place wasn't dangerous at the moment, seeing how they had wiped out the poison goblins. Hampton then asked his young master if he had chosen to come here in order to rescue those who lived in unprotected areas. But Larson had no idea what his friend was talking about. Hampton revealed how the majority of humans lived outside of the protected regions, people like his parents, who were burned at the stake right in front of his eyes. Hampton then expressed how proud he was of his master, who came here to slay the goblin leader, upon learning that they mainly fed on humans. At that moment, the little prick decided to abuse the situation and played along. Larson then started to wonder if, despite her satisfied face, Evelia was truly pleased with the results that he had achieved. The author quickly realized that the Evelia that he had created would pity such results. Larson quickly resorted to his heavenly eyes, having realized that his real test was about to begin. With that being said, he urged his servant to rush to the cave without looking up, when given the signal. At first the poison master was left confused, but then he was horrified. A giant feline the size of a house had now appeared. The white tiger had now made its entrance. As the servant began trampling, the master started counting. Any sudden move would startle the tiger. And thus Larson waited for the perfect opportunity, and ordered his friend to run to the cave as fast as possible. Hampton was left quite confused, as his master wasn't running to the cave with him. At first he had his doubts, but in the end, he decided to have faith in the one he followed. Our hero then addressed the giant tiger. He urged the beast to focus only on him. And just like that, Larson found himself staring the giant murder cat in the eye. According to him, Ivelia must have thought that the goblins were too easy for him to be considered a test, and that she wanted to push him to his limits. A year ago, our protagonist, who used his wind weight utilization, would have considered this madness. After all, his task was to capture a living white tiger. Larson enjoyed the feeling of wind energy flowing through his body. With that being said, he decided to channel that pleasant energy in order to successfully triumph over Ivelia's true challenge. The first thing he decided to do was to challenge the beast of speed, and so he began to use his own speed in order to lure it in. But the tiger was quick, and was able to catch up. Larson then escaped the jaws of death at the last second. All he needed was the determination to land the final blow once and for all, and so he resorted to his advanced utilization in order to channel as much power as possible into his fist. Being as he unleashed a powerful attack that created a powerful shockwave upon impact, the protagonist was rather happy with his results. But the fight was far from over, as the beast was now angry, and before he could even realize it, it launched itself at him. There was no way for him to dodge, making his only option to resort to self-defense. With that being said, the feline blasted the human with such power that it made him crash into the wall. The dragon chest plate also helped a little, as it used 38% of its durability in order to shield its owner. If it wasn't for the artifact, our hero would already be a dead man. Yet the tiger was so strong that it still broke a few bones. Larson quickly used a self-healing technique. Despite surpassing the white tiger in speed, our hero still lacked offense and defense, making his best option to go back to the cave in order to strategize. Once inside, Larson found himself with a sorry shadow begging to be killed. Hampton blamed himself for his master's injury, while the latter resorted to traditional healing processes, as self-recovery burns a lot of mana. The voice screamed that, for a shadow, it was an honor to die for the sake of his master. Larson urged him to drop it already, as life and death were no light subject. The master even claimed that he needed his shadow in order to remain alive. For that reason, Larson claimed that he would protect Hampton at all costs. At that moment, the dark boy who cruelly acted masculine realized something. He had now grown even more fond of his master. Meanwhile, the tiger was still roaring outside. For some reason, the beast didn't want to approach the cave. The protagonist quickly noticed this and found it a little odd, as despite this place being goblin tribe territory, the spotted goblin activity seemed rather limited. This could only lead to one conclusion, which was that the goblins had no way of exiting their cave, meaning that they had no way of disposing of their waste. In other words, the tiger didn't fear the cave because of poison, but because of the horrendous smell. From that point, it was safe to conclude that the one who trapped the goblins inside the cave was none other than the sorceress of the end herself. Hampton quickly deduced that Avelia did this to create a safe spot from the tiger, and that they should simply wait for Hera here. But the young master declined, as this would be way too easy, and that they should focus on slaying the tiger before she arrives. Hampton started to tremble as his young master asked for a paralyzing poison, making him affirm that he couldn't make enough to take out the beast. So Larson revealed that he didn't want the tiger paralyzed. In fact, he declared that he just wanted enough to mess with it a little bit, while thinking about the great reward that his sister would have for him at the end of this test. After a short wait, the poison was finally complete. Larson then ordered his servant to chop up that goblin into pieces and cover them with the poison. With that being said, shortly after, the hero threw his secret weapon out of the cave. It was a few pieces of meat attached with a bunch of ropes. Larson and Hampton quietly waited for the results of their plan to be revealed. But after a short while, the two of them were still waiting. Larson found himself counting the seconds, counting the minutes. Half an hour had passed since he had thrown the meat out of the cave. Outside was now very hot. The creature had its tongue out. From the looks of it, the white tiger didn't seem very well. In the original novel, there was no way that a simple child magician could take down a white tiger on his own. The sorceress must be well aware of this fact, which is why she had given this impossible task as a test. She wanted to test the limit of her younger brother, which is why our hero decided to put on a show. His goal was to demonstrate how much he had grown in the last year. 2 years had passed since he had woken up as Larson Mayton, and he was currently 7 years away from his execution. His death was set in stone. For that reason, he needed to defy the destiny that he had created. His goal was to gain more power than his sister, more power than his father, and even more power than his own protagonist. With that being said, the boys stood once again face to face with the creature. Upon seeing him, the monster immediately started to roar. Larson was eager to resume the fight. His one true goal was to survive this accursed world. At that moment, the system informed him that he had unlocked something known as Blitz Tactic by demonstrating incredible determination. This greatly surprised the protagonist. In fact, this new power left him quite shocked. And just like that, something started to happen. All of a sudden, a powerful light came out of nowhere. The servant was baffled by the magic of his master, as he had now acquired enough mana to even become a fourth circle mage. The system then informed him that he could currently maintain his new ability for 3 seconds, with flow slowly getting activated automatically. This new power burned a crazy amount of energy, which made him recall the lesson his master taught him regarding fighting spirit. Back then, the Combat King taught his student that power was for the body and the spirit. Destruction and similar concepts also abided by the laws of the astral and physics. Even death obeyed this fundamental law, making it the profound one of fighting spirit. Yet, seeing how his student was a mage and didn't understand him, he summarized the whole thing by claiming that fighting spirit greatly depended on determination. But once again, the protagonist failed to understand this. Thus, the master had no choice but to resort to a demonstration. Magner claimed that if he punched the ground, his fist would be strong enough to split the land in half and cause great destruction. At first, Larson assumed that his master was joking around, as this would be totally ridiculous and would damage the swordsmanship family. Yet, to his shock, this didn't seem like a joke. It didn't look like a joke at all. The boy realized that his master was very much serious and about to destroy the land of Kassine's family. But in the heat of the moment, he had forgotten about the giant bucket of water that was standing on his head. It was at this moment that the protagonist realized how much Will influenced fighting spirit. Back to the present, our hero was on the clock, which is why he decided to use his well to strengthen his mana, that was being drained by his new power. Larson then swore to take the life of the tiger. As he was now bursting with power, the only thing that was on the boy's mind was to grow even stronger. Blitz Spirit was now fully online. Our hero was pretty content with his new ability, and eager to put it to the test. Yet its time was limited, as you could only use it for 3 seconds, which is why he immediately dashed forward. Yet Larson failed to grasp his own strength, and for a split second lost his balance. For that reason, things became much more difficult. He desperately tried to regain his balance, as he had already lost 1 precious second. Seeing this, he decided to use his wind attribute utilization. This allowed him to become one with the wind, and gracefully dash forward. Just like that, our hero had now turned into an arrow of pure energy. Only 1 second was left on the clock. At that moment, the young man was fully prepared to catch a body. After all, this was the only proper way to tap into the full power of the fighting spirit. For that reason, he needed to raise himself in order to take the life of the tiger. And just like that, the young master braced himself and channeled all of his power in order to unleash one hell of an attack. Hampton couldn't believe his eyes. This last strike was rather exhausting. As blood scattered everywhere, the hero had fully exhausted his energy, forcing his heavenly eye and his blitz tactic to shut down. Larson expressed gratitude towards Avelia for the gift that she had granted him, before finally collapsing to the ground. Even the Holy Grail of Transcendence felt tired, as it had been completely emptied out. It seemed like Blitz Tactic would take a lot of effort to improve, as it had rendered its user unable to move or speak. Yet, from the looks of it, things didn't seem totally over. The boys were then left horrified, as it turned out that there was another white tiger lurking in the forest. At that moment, the theory of our protagonist turned out to be correct. The other white tiger had already been taken care of, by none other than the assassin herself. The maid urged the boy to relax for now, as she took care of the rest. And with that being said, she unleashed a powerful attack. Her power was so enormous that it butchered the tiger into pieces. The cold assassin was then bathed in the blood of her most recent prey. Hampton correctly affirmed that discreet without a sound was far creepier than any tiger. At that moment, our hero finally understood it all, before falling into unconsciousness. Seeing this, the servants rushed to carry him back to safety. Our protagonist then took a days-long slumber, in which he dreamed about his past life, back when he was the average employee trying to pay off his debts. He also recalled how he was once a pathetic author. For a second, our hero had forgotten about his current reality. At that moment, the dream finally ended. The 11-year-old finally woke up. According to the maid, he had slept for 3 days straight. All of this was now normal for him. Upon waking up, the boy was startled to see the heart of the tiger that discreet without a sound had slain in front of him. According to her, the heart of a white tiger was excellent for mana recovery, which is why she had brought it. The protagonist thanked her before pointing out how the sorceress of the end must have expected her arrival. In other words, Ivelia must have prepared the second white tiger in order to distract the assassin long enough for the test to be completed. Larson then pointed out one odd little detail. Back then, the assassin should have immediately been able to sense 2 tigers in the mountain. Even then, While carrying her prey, Hira walked slowly towards them. Naturally, the immense strength of the assassin wouldn't allow something as mere as the weight of a white tiger to slow down her movements. This made the boy realize that his maid had received direct orders from his sister, but it was obvious that Hira had declined the orders, making her a potential threat to the test. It was safe to say that the sorceress had cast restriction magic in order to limit the movements of the assassin. Hira confirmed that he was right, while thinking about how his words weren't directly addressed to her. In fact, the boy was indirectly addressing his older sister. With that being said, our hero decided to resume his training despite his injuries. And while the maid was worried about him, the boy affirmed that he was tougher than he seemed. After watching this from afar, Ivelia was left extremely pleased, and just like that she decided to take her leave. Shortly after, at the Mayton mansion, the father was disappointed to learn that even after a year, his youngest son was still a second circle. While Ivelia expressed her desire to make him an ally, Decatra explained that he had no business meddling in the succession war, and decided to ask his second-born a question. He wanted to know the reason she had grown so attached to her younger brother. Ivelia explained that despite his shortcomings in magic, he was the smartest child that she had ever seen, and that his selfishness made him even better. For that reason she asked her father's permission to make the Benjamin one of her people. Decatra allowed her to do as she pleased. Ivelia expressed her gratitude towards her father. From that point on, time began to pass quickly. Days and seasons passed one after another. It was now the first day of the year, 2023. 3 years had already passed since Larsen Maiden killed the white tiger. Our protagonist was now inhabiting the body of a 14-year-old. On that day, the long-awaited letter from the patriarch finally arrived. The protagonist seemed to have some kind of request to ask his shadow. Larsen asked her for a haircut. According to the letter, Larsen was to return to the main house at once. According to him, when a maiden is between 14 and 16, he must partake in something called the pilgrimage. It could require our hero to explore the world in search of artifacts, as well as finding his own people. In other words, people who would follow him just like the assassin. Larsen asked about the first thing that she would do upon returning to the main estate. Hira, who wasn't a maid any longer, declared that she would go clean her room. With that being said, the haircut was finally finished. The young master now looked as fresh as ever. He then thanked Hira for her services, only for her to deflect the compliments. When asked about his first action upon returning, the hero revealed that he had already given it a lot of thought. In fact, the Benjamin of the Mage family had already made his decision. Upon learning that her owner was coming back, Ludia found herself overjoyed, only to then be slammed in the hat for her imperfect vocabulary. She had had enough of those silly lessons and wanted to go back to her friend already. Avelia then informed her that she might not even get the chance to see him, as our hero was simply going to greet his father before rushing on his way. But the girl was certain that he would come see her, seeing how he was her best friend after all. So the sorceress of the end reminded her that friendships had no meaning in front of blood bonds. After hearing this, the little one concluded that the best way for her to get even closer to Larsen was to become his wife. This remark earned her another hit on the head. The news regarding the return of the youngest son also reached the third sister, who wanted to cut off his limbs as he had triumphed over the test of Avolia. She was so envious that she claimed his success to be sheer luck, but to the men surrounding her, this speech was nothing but meaningless babble. In fact, they were quite angry at the one who had stolen their legendary artifact on top of the ancient stone. The guardians promised to execute the witch in the name of Henker. As one of them approached the noble in order to see where she had hidden the stone, her shadow quickly stepped in to protect her. But at that moment, the shadow herself was left horrified, as an evil aura began to fill the room. The man decided to execute the mage at once. He then started to mock her as she started to compliment his arms, when she should have been scared of him. And with that being said, the red hat made her move. At that moment the guard grabbed her by the skull, and launched her at the wall with full strength. The guards started to laugh at the sorceress, so the one with an eye patch urged them not to underestimate the maidens. So the one who had thrown her into the wall reassured him that everything had already been taken care of, but only then did he realize that his arm had suddenly disappeared. Persia, who wasn't even scratched, had taken it away. The psychopath even took a bite out of it and began to wonder what she should cut next. It was safe to say that all of the swordsmen were left horrified. Even so, they decided to hold their ground. Despite the fact that the two in front of them were from the House of Mayton, at the end of the day they were still nothing but frail women. And with that being said, they charged ahead in order to take their lives. At that moment, the noble addressed her shadow. She promised to execute her if even one of the enemies managed to scratch her. And so, after a quick battle, the one with the eye patch realized just how powerful the enemy truly was, as even he and the rest of his men who were part of an elite squad immediately crumbled in front of the child of the patriarch. Persia craved blood and didn't show any mercy. At that moment, the man judged it best to retreat in order to warn the others. When all of a sudden, he felt a chill running down his spine. For some reason he had lost control over his own body, and before he could even realize it, he was decapitated, with his head landing in the hand of the witch. Persia was disappointed, as she had expected the man to be prettier. With that being said, the third sister started to wonder about the pilgrimage of the sixth brother. When asked if she was going to go greet him, she affirmed that she wouldn't do so. After all, she couldn't care less about nobodies with no potential. Meanwhile, this said nobody had slain countless monsters with his water magic. Carlton was eager to settle the score with his younger brother. On the other hand, Persia was more focused on Larson, who had slipped through her fingers, and so she decided to prepare a surprise for him. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the map, it was explained how the pilgrimage was a 2-year journey that one must undergo in order to collect artifacts and better oneself. Kasansad understood that this was some kind of exotic training, but when asked about the main purpose, the boy explained that this would allow him to spread his wings outside of his house. But the true goal of our hero was to flee from his siblings, as they were after him. The novel protagonist found this to be rather sad, as having siblings for enemies must be harsh, but at the end of the day, this was just the nature of the mage family. Our hero looked his protagonist in the eyes, and affirmed that they would always remain friends. Kassan smiled, and shook the author's hand as a sign of eternal friendship. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the land of the Sades, Lady Soso also declined the help offered by Hira, seeing how she wasn't her maid. But when the assassin proposed becoming her personal aide, the mother of our hero declined, as she was far better at maid tasks than her anyway. At this point, the one with white hair didn't know what to say. Lady Soso asked the assassin if they would be able to remain such good friends after returning to the main estate. But upon seeing her reaction, she confirmed that she could be straight with her, and explained that things would get more complicated once there. Only then did the assassin notice something. Judging by this, the mother quickly realized that her son was approaching. Soso wanted Hira to show her son the same friendliness that she showed her, but the assassin explained that giving him the cold shoulder was the best thing to do for everyone. And with that being said, she disappeared. The boy, who was still at the door, informed his mother that they were to return to the main estate tomorrow. He explained to her how he was also to greet his father upon coming back. But as our hero pointed out how he wished for her to be with him, the lady was shocked. In fact, she even started to tremble in fear of what might happen. But Larson heard her and promised to shield her from any harm. The boy then decided to add one more thing. He had a favor to ask his mother, a favor that became a new variable in the story. A little later that day, Lady Soso was pretty happy. She called upon the assassin. Hero was left quite intrigued, as the noble lady had claimed to have somehow felt her presence. Our hero's mother expressed how happy she was that she was able to become the friend of the maid. Soso explained how her son wanted her to see his father with him. In other words, he didn't want her hiding any longer. The lady didn't hide the fact that there were many questions on her mind, seeing how she was still a commoner at the end of the day. From that day forth, even her smallest action would be monitored, and even the slightest mistake could cause the demise of her son. Yet our hero tried his best to reassure her, claiming that he would take precautions for the outcomes. And so for that reason, the lady had made up her mind. Soso, who was once doubting her abilities, now aimed to support her son. In the past, she didn't even dare to show her face in order to protect her son from the envious hands that could find countless ways to hurt him. But now things were different, as her son was now his own person, and the only way for her to help him was to come out into the light. Tianra couldn't help but be amazed, as this woman of common blood had no strengths and no useful skills whatsoever, and yet passion filled her eyes. And so, seeing this discreetly without a sound, she affirmed to the lady that she was the patriarch's favorite wife. Before disappearing all of a sudden, leaving the lady confused, the assassin began to panic, as for a split second she had been subjective, and in her eyes this was a deadly sin that would surely cause death if discovered. Tianra began to think that she had gotten soft. As the day of the departure finally arrived, the protagonist bid his master farewell. But the old man didn't want to make this emotional at all. In fact, he strictly forbade him from writing him any letters in order to not spark any rumors. The Combat King even claimed that he was ashamed to have taught such a talentless student. With that being said, Larson promised to write him from time to time, and thus, after 4 years, our heroes finally departed from the land of the Sades. It was finally time for the protagonist to return home. While watching his pupil leaving the land, the Combat King grew certain that he wouldn't receive any letters from him. Larson started to wonder which mage his family must have sent to meet him at the teleportation gate. A little later, upon arriving at the portal, the hero asked the assassin which mage wanted to meet them, and only then did she show her face. Upon seeing her, the protagonist was left stunned, as it was none other than Evian, the ice witch that was currently working as a librarian in the Starlight Library. The assassin quickly concluded that the family was tightening its security, seeing how it had sent a librarian to meet them. Evian then offered the young master some Earl Grey tea. The startled boy accepted, while the mage grew intrigued, as he wasn't quite fond of this beverage. She had a hard time understanding what he had accepted in the first place. Evian wanted to demand the chocolate but quickly got a hold of herself and simply asked the boy to visit the library more often. Hera assumed that the words "the chocolate" must be some kind of code between them, and with that being said, our hero, his mother, and their help went on their way. With the magic of Evian, they were able to cross the Black Sea, which was filled with countless horrendous monsters. And while the assassin didn't seem impressed at all, the boy was amazed by all of these odd creatures. As they were about to arrive, a bright light suddenly appeared. Until finally, our heroes arrived at their destination. Larson didn't expect to arrive so early. Evian had even prepared a carriage for the Earl and his mother. When asked if she was ready, the lady got a hold of herself and affirmed that she was. Meanwhile, back at the main estate, people started to talk about Soso. Everyone knew that her return was sure to cause the wrath of the 3 other wives. They even claimed her to be utterly mad, as only a fool would return in such circumstances. Later on, the protagonist was confronted with an uncontrollable wrath. Despite the immense pressure crushing him, the teenager affirmed that this was the only way for him to protect his mother. The boy affirmed that his father also wished for her safety, as at the end of the day, married couples should want the best for each other. When asked if he still loved Soso, the mage of the heavens couldn't answer. Deketra failed to understand how making the 4th wife enter the main house was the best way to protect her. Larson claimed that it was now time for his mother to come out of the darkness. In the past, his father had spared no effort in hiding her in order to keep her safe. The boy even pointed out how a cowardly move couldn't truly stop conflict, and that only power could bring peace, which the father agreed with. This made him realize something very important about himself. Even he had made cowardly moves in order to protect his wife, while his son pointed out how, in the past, he was too powerless to protect his mother. Larson was even somehow offended, as his father immediately acknowledged his past incompetence. At that moment, the mother of our hero spoke up and affirmed that she craved power. She explained how she was no noble and that her husband was her only real strength. The boy clarified that this should be the only power that his mother needs. After all, her husband was the strongest in the world. Later that night, the right hand of the patriarch, who heard the entire story, didn't expect his master to react as such. Deketra asked his friend for advice, making Senkan recall something he had said to him back in the day. In the past, Deketra himself clarified that one should only focus on living in the present. According to Senkan, the only way to survive the present was to fully grasp the current moment. The right hand explained how, back in the day, his master always made the same choices, and explained that he would follow him no matter what. Deketra felt reassured by such genuine support. Senkan explained how he was once full of ambitions before meeting Lyle. Due to a mysterious disease, the lady had met her end 1 year ago. After meeting her, Lyle became his entire world, which is why losing her left him with many regrets and the inability to live in the present. Because Senkan had drowned himself in the past, he found himself with many regrets. For that reason, he decided to be honest with his friend, and advised him to bring a little more warmth into his life. Later on at the Autumn Mansion, while Hiro was peacefully sleeping, she suddenly opened her eyes. A mysterious energy had woken her up. The assassin could feel a presence lurking nearby. Hiro quickly got dressed and entered the room of the young master. She didn't make a sound in order not to wake him up, and out of nowhere she threw her knife. The blade seemed to have hit something above the young master as it suddenly stopped, and was now covered in blood. Then the intruder turned off his invisibility, and pointed out how the skills of the assassin were sharp as ever, seeing how she was able to discover him. Hira demanded to know why the right hand of the patriarch had infiltrated the mansion. Senkan explained that he was to take the young master with him, and despite how unbelievable it was, he affirmed that he was only acting on the orders of his master. Hira was still intrigued as this didn't explain why he was doing this so late at night, but the man explained that he was simply following his patriarch's command. The right hand allowed the assassin to come with him. Senkan then pointed out how odd it was to see Discreet, without a sound, adopt such a youthful form, and yet she didn't even answer. He then urged her not to stab him ever again, as even if he could be healed, the pain was still annoying. He even reminded her how his face was scarred when he protected her back in the day. Later on, the child of the noble was brought to him. Deketra praised his right hand for his good work, but was intrigued by the presence of the maid who was here to protect Benjamin. Despite the fact that Hira's faith in Senkan knew no bounds, she wanted to remain completely objective on the matter. The patriarch then asked her to take it easy, as he would now be performing the ritual. Suddenly our hero, who should have been under a sleeping spell, woke up. Larson demanded to know what was going on. He desperately wanted to know what was happening. The father explained that he was simply performing the Deketra ritual, one of the calculus rituals in their house. This greatly intrigued the protagonist, and he realized that this must be something OP, seeing how the mage had named it after himself. And while the 6 other siblings would have immediately accepted this gift, the protagonist, who had just woken up, decided to get some explanations first. For some reason, his heavenly eyes were ineffective in this place. Larson expressed how suspicious it was that his father decided to proceed with the ritual in the middle of the night. The father was greatly fond of his quick-witted son, yet didn't want to show him any favoritism. Larson then asked for the reason behind all of this. The mage of the heavens began the ritual while explaining that he simply found his son's potential promising. At that moment, our hero was struck with an agonizing pain that almost made him scream, seeing how it was similar to a stab. The ritual was now completed, and a red tattoo now covered the arm of the 14-year-old. The father explained that this could come in handy one day. When, all of a sudden, everything became blurry. Larson couldn't even properly hear the voices. As his son collapsed to the ground, the father was quite impressed, as he had withstood the immense pain without screaming. Decatra, who claimed his son to be currently weak, was certain that he would reach incredible heights in the future. It was now morning. Something loud was pressing against our hero's arm. That something was none other than his contractor of fire. Lodia revealed that she was quite hungry. She had whined so much that Avelia had no choice but to accept her request, and took her to see the protagonist. But the angry sorceress explained that Lodia's vocabulary was still too vulgar, and claimed that she needed more lessons. As Lodia began to complain about everything that she had gone through under the care of Avelia, the protagonist felt like her parent for some reason. He then looked at his arm and found it to be completely normal, making him think that this was nothing but a dream. At that moment, the sorceress of the end decided to regain control over the overexcited girl. As Lodia was being abused, her owner pointed out how she seemed to be in good hands, and while the poor creature cried while talking about how she was getting tortured every day, Larson ignored her and claimed her to be rather happy. Our hero identified how he wanted to rest for 3 more days before starting his pilgrimage. Avelia pointed out how this would greatly worry his mother. The shock on our hero's face greatly intrigued his sister, so he asked her to pay it no mind. At that moment, Lodia couldn't take it any longer. She summoned a giant snake of fire, yet Avelia remained unfazed. All of a sudden, the giant reptile was launched at the blonde girl. Without even flinching, the sorceress of the end blocked the spell with great ease. Back to the important matters. Avelia congratulated her younger brother on passing her test, and promised him a reward. Larson quickly realized that she was referring to the incident with the white tiger, 3 years ago. The boy was then asked to get up from bed, and just like that he was gifted a new robe. The sorceress of the end claimed this to be a present from her. This was made from white dragon scales, a legendary item crafted by the dwarf chief, who had spared no effort in making it. This item had strange powers. This was the exact same robe that the sorceress of the end herself wore during her pilgrimage, and it had saved her from death countless times. As Larson gratefully thanked his sister for this great gift, she explained that she had to restore it a bit. It then came as a shock to our protagonist to learn that this robe would grant a one-time opportunity to slay someone as strong as a 6th Circle Mage. This left him particularly stunned, as only those with great potential could reach Circle 6, making this robe a great asset for the future. Our hero thanked his sister once again, who wished him safe travels. She was also praying to see him return even stronger. And with that being said, the sorcerers of the end and the enemy of all mages made their leave. Avelia wanted her younger brother to become powerful enough to protect what he holds dear. 3 days had passed since then, and Hampton, who was about to bid his master farewell, explained how he had prepared countless antidotes for him. Our hero then turned into his other shadow and left his mother in his care. Larson even thanked the librarian, who came to say her goodbyes. But upon shaking her hand, our hero suddenly felt something in his palm. Evian had given him a candy. This was a fitting gift coming from the sweet tooth, seeing how he was her main source of chocolate. And with that being said, the youngest son of the Mayton family would now abide by the sacred rules of his house. Now 14 years old, he was to partake in his pilgrimage. Suddenly, fire appeared out of nowhere. A meteor crashed right next to him. Ludia, who made quite the entrance, claimed that she had gotten the permission of the sorcerers of the end. In her letter, Ivalia explained that despite her desire to make her brother her student, he would benefit more from traveling. With the pilgrimage, he wouldn't need a teacher for 2 years, which is why he should take Ludia with him, seeing how she was one of his assets. Thus our hero judged it best to take the girl with him, leaving her overjoyed. With that being said, now finally came the time for departure. With his allies and friends by his side, Larson Mayton was ready to embark on the new adventures waiting for him.